This story begins with an 11-year-old boy named Ryoma Takebayashi who lives in the forest with different species of slimes, and these slimes evolve differently depending on what he feeds them. The species of slimes include slimes, which he feeds green caterpillars that can be in turn used to make a powerful thread for hunting, acid slimes that can dissolve hard things like bones, poison slimes that eat poisonous weeds and survive, and they split faster than other slimes due to strong vitality. There are cleaner slimes that clean things by eating dirt and grime and even get rid of smells, and scavenger slimes that eat excrement and garbage to make fertilizer. Sometimes in the forest, he runs into goblins and thieves, and he has to fight them. He considers this life he lives a nice and peaceful one, and he thinks this life he lives is going to continue. On a usual day in the forest, Ryoma sees some guards trying their best to heal and save their friend named Hughes, who has been stabbed by bandits from dying, and he wonders what they're doing deep in the forest. One of the guards named Camille tries to heal Hughes with his magic, but it won't work, so they feel it's best to get him to town. Ryoma comes out, and one of the guards points his swords at him, but with the way Ryoma talks, the guard can tell that he's a kid. Ryoma on the other end feels weird, and his voice is shaking because he hasn't talked to anyone in so many years. Then he offers them a medicine that can heal Hughes. Camel confirms the medicine by sniffing it, and he feeds Hughes the medicine, and he wakes up. Ryoma tells them that they could use his place in the forest to rest if they'd like. On their way to his place, the guards wonder who Ryoma is because he looks like a hunter. All of a sudden, Ryoma stops and tells them that a beast seems to have come this way and might come soon. In a twinkle of an eye, the guards see a horde of slimes, and they draw out their sword to slash the slimes. But Ryoma quickly runs to cover the slimes. He tells them that the slimes aren't enemies, but his familiars, and the guards apologize. As they continue their journey to Ryoma's place, one of the guards tells Ryoma that he was a former tamer. Slimes were his first familiars, and his generation used to have red horses and blizzard apes for familiars. They get to a dead end, and they ask Ryoma where his house is, and he uses magic to dispel the barrier he used to hide his home, and he tells them to come in. The guards lay Hughes to rest a bit, and they find Ryoma's place impressive. One of the guards named Zeph, who notices that the furniture in the house is only enough for one, reports to the others that something is weird about the whole house. The other guard says Ryoma might not be as young as he looks, considering that he was able to get close without them noticing him, and even his magic. Ryoma gives them more potions of the medicine and tells them they can take as much as they want. One of the guards asks him who he is, but he doesn't want to answer, so he tells them that he can make the medicine and also offers them ice water. The guards ask him what he is again, and he feels he can't change the topic this time, so he introduces himself as Ryoma. One of the guards apologizes and introduces himself as Reinhardt Jamil, the ruler of the Jamil Duchy. On hearing this, Ryoma quickly apologizes and bows his head. Reinhardt tells him not to bow and claims to be in Ryoma's debt. Ryoma rises and says to himself that he doesn't realize that Reinhardt is a duke. Camille introduces himself as a mage and thanks Ryoma for helping Hughes. Zeph introduces himself as a scout. The last guard introduces himself as Jill and apologizes for drawing his sword on Ryoma, but Ryoma tells him that it's okay to be cautious. Then, Reinhardt tells Ryoma that they were struck by bandits outside the forest, but a black bear that came out of the forest hurt Hughes. Camille says they beat the bear but their horses fled, and they met him while they were trying to cut through the forest to get Hughes to town. Reinhardt asks Ryoma what he is doing in the forest and what he is. Ryoma tells them that he learned from his grandparents, who are former adventurers, but they passed 3 years ago. He tells them that his grandparents told him to go to another village. He tells them that he's an outsider, and the villagers do not like him. He tells them that he survived the forest for 3 years, but the guards do not seem to believe him. So Kami brings out a crystal that shines red if the person that touches it is a criminal, and blue if the person is innocent, and it also tells the person's name, race, and age, and 4 of their high-level skills. Camille tells Ryoma that if he has powerful combat skills, no one will oppose him living in the forest. Then, Ryoma touches it, and it shines blue. Camille interprets that Ryoma's no criminal, but he doesn't have any combat skills. Ryoma quickly gets up to get dinner ready for everyone. The guards look at the crystal and confirm that Ryoma is 11, and he's been on his own in the forest since he was 8, and his high-level skills include housekeeping, level 10, mental pain resistance, 9, physical pain resistance, 8. The guards wonder if the King of Life Ryoma lived at his age, so Reinhardt says they can't leave him there, so he'll head home and talk to Father and Elise. Hughes can stand on his feet now, but still needs more blood, so Ryoma gives him another potion that will provide him blood. Hughes gladly collects it, but splits the first drop away, saying it stinks. After Ryoma tells him that it works, the other guards also persuade him to drink it. Camille quickly grabs the potion and feeds Hughes, and he feels very okay very fast. Hughes faces Ryoma and introduces himself as the Duke's bodyguard. He tells Ryoma that if he needs any help, he can come to Guanago Town and rely on him. Ryoma thanks and waves to them them as the guards leave, but his heart feels hurt because he lied to them about his grandparents. The one who died 3 years ago was himself. Ryoma used to be an office worker at a black company 3 years ago, where he works overtime and he has terrible bosses. He was a little older than he was now, and he lived in a place that was a little different, but one says he found himself in a strange place where he met the gods who tell him that he seems to be calm, unlike others who have come to this strange place and are typically more upset by this. But Ryoma tells them that he's surprised, but dreams eventually ends, and even if it's true, everyone dies one day. Besides, his job would kill him soon. The first man among the gods is Gain, the creator. The lady is Lulusia, the goddess of love, and the third person is Kufo, the god of life. Ryoma introduces himself as Ryoma Takebayashi and tells him that he doesn't have a business card with him at the moment, but Gain tells him that they don't need a card since they're from a different world than the Earth where Ryoma lives. Ryoma confirms that it's the world they call the other world, and Kufo wonders if Ryoma attains enlightenment. Gain is glad they don't have to explain to him before he knows it, and Ryoma says they always see it in manga and anime. Ryoma then asks them how he died, and Lulutia replies that he hit his head and had a brain hemorrhage, and he sneezes when he is sleeping 4 times. Gain added that Ryoma's pillow moved with each sneeze, and he finally hit his head on the floor. Lulutia tells him that his head burst several blood vessels in his brain. Ryoma finds it unfair to have died from sneezing because he survived the beer bottles from his drunk boss and even his dad's abuse. Lulutia and Kufo are surprised that that could have been the reason he freaked out. Gain says Ryoma seems to have secret pride in his toughness, but Ryoma apologizes for losing control for a moment. Gain tells Ryoma that he brought him to the other world because it's cliché, and Ryoma can tell that he's going to another world, so he asks if he's going the way he is or if he will get reincarnated because he's dead, and will he have some job to do. And Gain answers that he won't be starting from the scratch, but he will be reincarnated into a body he created, but he will be around 8 years old. Lulutia tells Ryoma that when they send him to their world, they can make a hole in the wall separating his world and theirs, through which they'll send the magical power from Earth to their world, as their world seems to be running out, and they need more. Lulutia tells him that the Earth has magical power, but nobody uses it. Ryoma then asks them if he could use it when he gets there, and the gods replies, yes. Gain asks him if he'd like them to make it so that he can use all types of magic, and he agrees after a lot of advice and explanation from them. From there, he decided that his grandparents had died, and he left the village as he couldn't tell anyone that he came from Earth. The gods tell him that he should live his new life the way he wants, and that they will be watching over him. They also tell him how he could talk to them with the oracle skill in the church. They wish him the very best in his new life, and tears rush down his face as he thanks them. Ryoma was reborn into the world called Sealfall at 8 years old. The gods prepared him a manual for his new life. On the last page of the manual is his current status, and he could see that all his stats are for brute strength, which seems to be that they kept his skills from his last life. He breaks down a tree with a single kick, and he can tell that he's strong in new body size, so he thinks he needs to get used to it. Then he sees a slime, and tells it to do tricks but it can't. So he checks his manual for a magic trick to make a monster obey. From the manual, he reads that he needs taming magic to make a monster obey. For the first time, he performs magic, and he feels happy to be able to do it on the slime. To his surprise, the slime crawls toward him. He decides to live in the forest of Ghana. In Ryoma's last life, he couldn't spend time on his hobbies. Maybe that's why he decided to spend all his time researching slimes. Reinhardt, Camel, Zeph, Jill, and Hughes were the first set of people he met in this new world. After 3 years, Ryoma now has 364 sticky slimes, and he seems to be loving it. After 2 weeks, Reinhardt and his friends went back to town. They came back with some other people, and Ryoma felt like his life was about to get a lot bigger. Among the people are Reinbach Jamil, Reinhardt's father, and the previous duke, and Elise Jamil, Reinhardt's wife. They thank Ryoma for saving Reinhardt and his men the other day. Reinhardt also introduces his daughter, Eliaria, and she introduces herself properly. The slime hops as she does, and Ryoma introduces himself too. He thanks them for coming from town and apologizes to them for not being able to offer any proper hospitality. Reinbach laughs and tells him not to bother because it's quite their fault for arriving unannounced. Reinhardt and his people see plenty of slimes than they saw the first time, so Eliaria asks Ryoma if the slimes can fit in his house, and he answers that they've learned to do that. Then, he shows her one of the things the slimes have learned. He faces the slimes and tells them to join up, and they begin to stack on each other to form large slimes. Ryoma tells them that the slimes can use a skill called Minimize that allows them to conserve space and food. He looks back and sees that they are all surprised to see how he tamed a big slime. Elise tells Ryoma that nobody has ever successfully tamed a big slime from what she's heard. The taming contract does not affect slimes, and she's never heard of it succeeding. Ryoma quickly finds his way to handle it by saying, it could appear that a big slime only has one core, but it's actually over 100 cores joined together. He admits that entering into a contract with 100 monsters at the same time is impossible, but says in his case, he first tamed 100 separate slimes and joined them. He looks up and sees that everyone finds it amazing. Elise tells him that he's solved the mystery that every tamer has faced, but Ryoma is shaking with fear, thinking he's overstated it. Reinbach says he never thought he'd see the answer to the mystery in his lifetime. Elise tells Ryoma that he should register with Tamer's guild and present it. Ryoma thinks that could be a good idea. Well, he tells the slimes to get small and tells Reinhardt and his family to come in. He entertains them in the best way. Reinhardt confesses that they were and almost forgot why they came, so he presents a clock as a token of their gratitude for the other to Ryoma. Ryoma likes it, and Reinhardt tells him he didn't mean to insult him, but from the first time, he notices that he doesn't own a clock. Ryoma accepts it and says he will treasure it. Then, Illyria tells him another reason why they've come to see him is that Jamil's family is a family of tamers, so she's come to tame her first familiar and would like to capture a slime. She tells him that they couldn't find any slime on their way to his place, and then he shows an area where slimes often come to drink water on the map. Illyria could identify 4 different types of slimes: sticky slime, acid slime, poison slime, and healing slime, because she's seen them in books, but there are 2 other types she's never seen before. So she asks Ryoma if he can teach her the kind of slime they are, and Ryoma introduces the scavenger slime and cleaner slime. He shows them how a cleaner slime operates using a loincloth taken from a goblin he defeated. The cleaner slime cleans the loincloth, and they become more surprised and impressed to know that a cleaner slime can remove goblin grime, which is the most difficult to clean in the world. To validate that cleaner slime only eats grime, he inserts his hand in a cleaner slime, and nothing happens. He tells them that they won't eat animal meat unless ordered. Illyria says she would like to capture a cleaner slime and make it her first familiar. She asks Ryoma to explain to her, but Ryoma says it's hard to explain to a lady. Then, he decides to explain to the male among them, and they can relate how it could be hard to discuss with the ladies. Hughes, who isn't freaked out an inch, faces the ladies and tells them to wash up, then take the water with all their sweat and filth in it, and use it as bait. The ladies offer Hughes a slap from each of them as they find his approach ridiculous. Then, Ryoma tells them that for some reason, slimes that can potentially evolve into cleaner slimes are attracted to water that contains sweat. Illyria confesses that she never knew cleaner slimes would have such a trait, but she still wants to find a cleaner slime. She says she wants to be a tamer and can't rely on others. Ryoma remembers his old life at a black company and tells Illyria that doing everything by herself isn't always the best, but Illyria insists she still wants to take the first step all by herself. Ryoma respects her decision. Then, Illyria carries out the processes and goes to the area to find slimes, and she comes back with a cleaner slime as her first familiar. She seems happy to have accomplished that mission. As the people look at the cleaner slimes as they operate, Ryoma is also staring at his clock present. Ryoma looks at how happy Illyria is, and this reminds him of his first familiar and how he named it Tabuchi-kun, a name after a younger co-worker, because he reminded him of him. Elise asks Ryoma what he's decided to do from now on, but Ryoma isn't sure of his decision. He says he could stay here or move to a new place. Reinbach asks him if he'd like to join them on their trip to a town named Gimul, and they might be staying there for a while. Ryoma thinks about a lot of things, like leaving the forest to go to a new world, and even the last time he went on a trip. Illyria tells Ryoma that this is quite her first time going on a trip, and the first time she's been to this forest. She confesses that she was nervous when she left the town, and still nervous, but she met her first familiar, and she met Ryoma too. She concludes that she's sure there will be hardships and sadness, but there must be much more fun and joy to find in the outside world. Ryoma agrees with her and says he'd come with them. Reinbach then says they should help Ryoma prepare for the trip. He tells Ryoma that he can leave his belongings with Sabas and his item box. Ryoma says he can cast item box as well. They all find that impressive because it's basic magic, but it belongs to a higher element. Elise gladly tells Ryoma that if he wants to learn more about magic, he can ask her, and she'll teach him anything she knows. Illyria tells him that he's going to enjoy studying with him. Ryoma feels like he knows little about this world, but he only has the knowledge the gods gave him, so he thinks these people can teach him common sense. He thanks them. At night, Ryoma stuffed everything in his house into the item box, including fur from animals he hunted and equipment from thieves he defeated. After that, he looks at the statue of the gods in his house and says that they must already know their gods, but he's going on his first journey in this world. Since he doesn't know when he will come back, he will take everything he owns with him. He concluded that if he ends up not coming back here, he'll make another statue somewhere new. The next morning, Ryoma hides the house with his magic, and the journey begins. He assumes he's about a step in a new direction. Mr. Sebas uses magic to call out living animals and other stuff in his item box. And so he wonders if that is the intermediate space magic called Dimension Home. As they begin the journey, Eliaria asks Ryoma if it's true that he has the fire and water elements in addition to earth and space, and Ryoma replies yes. His grandmother told him he has all of the elements. Reinhardt asks him if he uses a taming ad barrier too, and Ryoma says yes. Reinhardt then tells him that he should be careful because those who have all the elements can end up being a master of none, and Ryoma laughs. Reinhardt asks him if he has said something funny, and he answers yes. He remembers how his grandmother told him the same thing. Ryoma tells them that he also tried his hand at healing magic and alchemy. Rainbach tells him that alchemy is a rare one to have an interest in, and Ryoma asks him if alchemy is uncommon. Rainbach tells him that they don't see it often because alchemists can be very secretive and have a sinister image associated with them. Eliaria asks Ryoma the kind of alchemy he has worked on, and he says the only thing he could pull up is to remove mineral poisons from rock salt to make it edible. From what's happening, Ryoma feels like they shower him with praise no matter what he does, so he needs to learn the common sense rules of this world soon. Over the few days, they traveled by day and rested in tents at night. The journey continues on a heavy rain day, and it's quite uncommon to have such this time of the year. Elise is a little cold, so Mr. Sebas helps her out with a big cloth from the item box. Reinhardt asks Eliaria if she's alright, and she replies that she's fine. A sudden disruption happens, and Ryoma grabs Eliaria from falling off, and she thanks him. Camille calls Duke Reinhardt to tell him that they've got a problem. It's a landslide, and it would be a huge detour. Probably 3 additional days. Zeph says they've been told that there are thieves in these parts, so they need to get through quickly. Reinhardt says he thinks they will have to remove it with earth magic. Ryoma, who is still inside the cart, asks if he could go out to help them for a moment, and he quickly brings out a raincoat from his item box. He tells Eliaria that it's coated with the sticky solution from a sticky slime, so it repels water. Well, Sebas says he is only aware of the adhesive properties of the solution. Reinbach says Ryoma is so full of surprises. Ryoma steps out of the cart. Reinbach asks Eliaria and Elise if they think the cloak has commercial potential, and they both say it's a great idea. Eliaria then asks if Ryoma can benefit from it, and Reinbach replies, yes. Reinbach says they should introduce Ryoma to Serge at the Morgan Trading Company when they get to town. Reinhardt tells Camel to use break rock to crush the large rocks, and rock to consolidate the dirt into manageable sizes. Ryoma from behind chants envelop them and shield them from the rain block. Reinhardt and his men are surprised and want to know who did it until they see Ryoma behind them, and they thank and commend him. Ryoma then tells them that instead of casting break rock and rock separately, they can use the combination magic based on those two, create block, for efficiency. Ryoma decides to show them rather than explain verbally. He steps forward and chants create block, and with the help of the slimes, the blocks are taken away from the road. Elise cares less about the mud in Ryoma's body. She runs to hug him so tight and thanks him. Ryoma feels happy that he could help them with that too. The journey goes on without any trouble for the next 3 days until they finally get to Gimel, Ryoma's first town since he arrived in this world. From the view through the window, Ryoma says that even though Gimul is called a mining town, the productivity of the mines has been falling for a few years. According to Romani, the goal of Mr. Reinhardt's trip here in Gimul is to assess which mines to keep working on and which mines to close down. Ryoma attends church with Reinhardt and the others because he needs to go there to get issued an item called a status board that displays a person's stats, and it also functions as a form of ID. On getting there, he meets an attendant who helps him to the baptism room. The attendant gives Ryoma a status board and tells him to place it on that pedestal and touch the crystal to complete the baptism. Then, he attempts it and finds himself in a space where he sees the gods, and he asks them if he died again, but they tell him he didn't die, so he's relieved. Gain tells him that they just pull his mind over to their side momentarily. Lelouchia tells him that he'll be back where he was without a problem. Then, he remembers when the gods tell him to visit a church when he gets to the town, and he informs them that he never trained the oracle skills. The gods tell him that he leads what can be considered a monastic life for 3 years and prays to them every day, and that's why they're able to give him the oracle skill so that they can meet, although it'll be brief. Both parties are glad for each other. Leloutia commends Ryoma's house for its cleanliness, and Ryoma tells her the thanks are for his slimes. Gain tells Ryoma that the cleaner and scavenger slimes are new species invented by him. From that, Ryoma then could tell why Reinhardt and the others never heard of them. Gain confesses that slimes were created by me, but all he did was give them the ability to adapt to the environment and reproduce. He says that the slime's evolutionary possibilities were infinite, but after a few species emerged, the types of slimes suitable to a specific environment got locked in, making it difficult for a brand new species to emerge. Gain sees Ryoma was the one who unlocked the potential of the slimes that even himself their creator forgot about. Ryoma sees it was surprising to get showered with praise from the ducal family, but praise from a god is a whole other level. Gain tells him that even gods have strengths and weaknesses. Lulutia says one of the previously transferred people, a girl from Earth, got married to an ancestor of the Gemel family. Kufo says, the girl is a nice girl, and her dream is to become an animal trainer, and her wish when she transferred was to gain a skill that tames animals. Kufo also says the girl is the one who researched and created the taming school of magic. Lultia says she achieved great things and was given the title of a noble. Then, the Jamul ancestor fell in love with her, and they married. Gain added that since then, they've been individually giving their blessings to the Jamul family, as a family of tamers. Gain also says Ilaria seems to have inherited the blood of her ancestor very strongly. Ryoma also could relate to that, and Gain says Ilaria inherits strongly from her mother's side. He says they always bring at least one person over whenever they take magic from Earth. Ryoma asks if he's ever going to meet one, and Lelouchia replies that there's usually at least 200 years of local time separation between transfers, so having multiple transferees in one era would be close to impossible. Gain says the transferee on the mother's side was a stereotypical otaku. Gain tells Moore that otaku wished for strong magical powers and used them to become unstoppable in combat. The power and rate of fire of his attacks were astounding. Lelouchia says thankfully, he was too timid to go out of his way to do bad deeds. Kufo says they were the ones who gave him the power, but were worried until the day he died. Ryoma then asks how troublesome was the transferee, and Kufo answers that Ryoma is a bit calmer compared to the guy. Kufo tells Ryoma that he makes his own decisions calmly and follows the right rules, but he's willing to try different things within those boundaries. Kufo also Sailfall couldn't wish for a better transferee. Ryoma asks him why he is talking him up all of a sudden, and Kufo replies that he should do things like praising his followers. This makes Ryoma smile and thank them. Kufo also thanks me for the endless entertainment. Lulutia says it's time, but seems like Ryoma enjoys his conversation with them. Gain tells Ryoma that the god of war and the god of magic have noticed him, and they generally dislike transferees, so it's rather rare. Lulutia also says the gods of crafts and artisans gave him his blessing. Lulutia tells him that if he visits the church again, they should be able to meet like this, and then his body returns to the room. Then the attendant tells him to check his status board now, and tells him it's customary to hide what's written on his status board except for his name, age, and race. After the attendant leaves, he sees everyday skills, combat skills, magic, crafting, special on the status board. Then he sees overcame an unhappy life, beloved child of the gods as the title on it. Then he finds his way to meet Reinhardt and the others, and Eliaria runs toward him to welcome him. Ryoma says it went without an issue, and Reinbach uses the opportunity to advise Ryoma as an elder. He tells Ryoma that his abilities are extremely high compared to other children of his age, and they can expect many unscrupulous individuals to approach him to use him for their ends. He then tells him that one way to avoid this is to hide his strengths, but given how prominent he is, of course, it will be difficult to pull off. He tells him that he'd suggest Ryoma register early at a guild and raise his rank to increase his standing. Elise says Ryoma's abilities are so much higher than what's normal for his age. It's obvious that he has the blessing of the gods, and depending on this, people will come after him, so she advises him to watch out. Ryoma takes that as one of the common senses in this world, so he thinks he should control himself and refrain from using too much magic in front of people. He looks up and tells them that he'll be careful. Ryoma tells Eliaria that she seems to have a question for him, and she says she was wondering what his total magic capacity was. Ryoma tells her that her magic capacity was 198,000. Eliaria says he has so much capacity, but he's able to use so much magic, and Ryoma asks her if the higher the capacity, the more magic he can use, but she says she means he can use the magic properly. Mr. Sebas says Ryoma is not aware of the side effects of having a high capacity. He says generally, people with extremely high magic capacities have a hard time controlling their powers and learning new magic. He says most of the time, these people need to train to limit or control their magic. Ryoma takes that as another common sense thing, and he tells them that he didn't realize since he had no one to compare with until now. Eliaria tells him that it's impressive how he can use magic so easily. She's the same age as him, but she can't use magic very well. Eliaria honestly says her magic capacity is around 200,000. That's quite more than his, so he thinks that must come from that rampaging mage ancestor, Utako. Eliaria asks Ryoma how he became so great at magic, and he replies that if she spends her free time playing with magic, she should be able to teach herself. He tells her that she should try various things with some basic magic. Reinhardt says Eliaria should have plenty of magic left over for training, even if you spend some of it playing. Then, Ryoma says he can teach her. After church, they head for the Tamer's guild, where Eliaria and Ryoma register as tamers. In the guild, The recent trend is to determine how good a tamer is by the strength of the monsters they control. Ryoma finds out that, as a slime specialist, it is very tough for him to raise my rank. Then, Reinbach suggests they head to the Adventurers Guild, since Ryoma once said he took down some bandits in the forest. Reinhardt explains that the Adventurers Guild values survival skills and combat abilities, so he thinks it might be a great fit for Ryoma. Ryoma says he heard his combat abilities need to be tested to register with the guild. At the guild, as a starter, Ryoma's been asked to shoot 5 targets without wasting a single shot. Ryoma has to perform well and meet everyone's expectations, so he begins and eventually hits all targets. The guild attendant and Reinbach's family commend him for his performance. Ryoma thinks all the hunting he did in the forest helped him. Iliara, especially, finds it impressive, and she tells Reinhardt that she didn't know bows are shot so quickly, but Sebas tells her no. All she saw was Ryoma's exceptional skills on display. Reinhardt says it seems like they're still underestimating Ryoma's true abilities. Ryoma's next trial is with moving targets. To Ryoma, it's like play target shooting, but with a bow. The guild attendant tells Ryoma that it was designed a long time ago by an adventurer named Kengo, who was famous for his unique magic weapon called Shotgun. Then, Ryoma begins his second trial with 50 targets and 50 arrows. Ryoma shoots the target, and to everyone's surprise, the last 4 targets come out at once, but Ryoma hits them all. The guild attendant throws a knife at Ryoma, but Ryoma is alerted, so he catches the knife, throws it back to the guild attendant, and quickly chants Earth Needle. He quickly attempts to attack the guild attendant, but the guild attendant quickly shouts and tells him to stop. Ryoma stops and apologizes because he reacted without thinking, but the guild attendant says it's him who's sorry, and he claims that it was just a thing he does to warn archers as a little cautionary experience. The guild attendant tells Ryoma he happens to be the first one who struck back. Some have dodged the knife. Then, the guild attendant introduces himself as Worgen, the master of the Gimmel branch of the Adventurers Guild. Ryoma is surprised that the master handles the tests, but Worgen whispers in his ear that he can't just let someone else handle the test, and he doesn't understand why the Duke brings his whole family to watch. Worgen reports to the Duke's family that Ryoma passes the test with flying colors, and Eliaria congratulates him. Worgen also completes Ryoma's Adventurers Guild and gives him his guild card. Ryoma sees rank G, and Worgen tells him that if he'd consider his skills, he could let him start at around rank E, but he worried that others would push back if he starts Ryoma off too high. Worgen tells him to start at G, work his way up, and show everyone what he's capable of, and if he keeps up at it, he will go up in rank in no time. Ryoma thanks him, but Worgen tells him not to be super polite with him. Then, he decides to take Ryoma to see what jobs there are. Worgen takes him to meet another attendant, who tells him that one can only take on jobs that are at the same rank as them, but one can gather a party to go with anyone, or 4 jobs where the guild is recruiting adventurers. There are cases where one can take on jobs at higher ranks than theirs. Then, she directs Ryoma to where his rank's job is in the message board. Ryoma is happy to see the communal toilet and house cleaning, with trash including food waste and timber, on the message board. He says to himself that he will have scavenger slimes eat them, and the cleaner slimes will clean, so he's ready to take on the job. The next day, Ryoma gathers the slimes and heads for his first job at the guild. The Duke's family wishes him well as he heads out. Ryoma gets to his first job's place. He knocks at the door, and a cat beastkin opens the door. Ryoma is surprised to see a cat beastkin because he has never seen one before. The slimes in Ryoma's bag could sense the stench of food waste coming from inside, so they began to attempt to come out of the bag. Ryoma introduces himself, and the cat beastkin introduces himself as Mia. Mia is surprised to see someone apply for the job because she almost gave up. She cries out as she thanks him for coming. Ryoma starts to worry if he can finish this first job of his. Ryoma finds out that the land beneath the trash dump next to the house is unstable, and one day, a whole heap of trash crashes into the basement. Nobody is willing to take on the job due to the sheer volume of the trash. Without wasting time, Ryoma starts with the trash in the trash dump, and he lets the slimes out of the box. He commands the slimes to unshrink and unjoin. Then he first has the scavenger slimes eat up all of the trash, and chants mist wash to clean the basement. Then he repeats the process in the basement and cleans it. He then uses Create Block to make bricks, and uses the hardening sticky solution from the sticky slimes to fill the hole in the trash dump's wall. Finally, he fills the hole in the basement and completes the work in a few hours. On seeing the basement, Mia is in awe, and she commends Ryoma for the perfect job he's done as she cries. Then, she signs a book to show that the work has been completed, and she tells Ryoma that the least she can do is to raise his reward pay, and Ryoma thanks her. Upon completing the first job, Ryoma believes he can make it in this world. The guild attendant is surprised, but commends Ryoma as he happily reports his success to the Adventurers Guild in just half a day. The guild attendant tells him that Mia gave specific instructions to increase his pay. Ryoma says Mia did say so, but he isn't expecting something this huge. The guild attendant tells him not to be modest, and that the huge reward only shows how happy Mia is that he took the job. As Ryoma is about to sign that he accepted the reward, Worgen calls him and tells him he heard that he cleaned up Mia's house nicely. Worgen tells Ryoma that Mia is an adventurer too. He says he never thought anyone could clean up Mia's house, so he asks Ryoma how he did it. Ryoma answers that the slimes helped him, and he knows some magic that's just right for this type of thing. Worgen then tells him that there's another task that might need your expertise, and Ryoma asks if it's cleaning up the communal toilet job he saw on the board. Worgen replies, yes, it's a job that was issued by the town government. Worgen tells Ryoma that the whole thing started when the town government refused to put up the money for the cleaning. Worgen tells him about how the iron mines producing less ore have resulted in falling in the town's income for the past years. He tells Ryoma that the communal toilet cleaning duty used to be assigned to the people in the slums, but the government officials made up some bogus reasons like the people in the slums don't work hard enough to cut their pay. Worgen makes it clear to Ryoma that no matter how badly someone needs money, they won't work if it's not worth it. Ryoma sees it as an exploitative workspace, and he tells Worgen that he will prepare and get to work tomorrow. Worgen tells him that he'll make sure Ryoma gets paid well. Ryoma tells him if they should tell Mr. Reinhardt about it, they could do something. Worgen asks him why he thinks it's better to do that, and Ryoma tells him that they didn't know him at all when they decided to take him in and help him. Worgen then says he'll keep his hopes up. Ryoma informs the Reinbachs about it and tells them that he's decided to take on the job. Reinhardt tells Sebas to look into the case of a government report claiming that the costs in the town were unchanged. He tells Sebas that if Ryoma's statement is true, then there may be some embezzlement going on. He then thanks Ryoma and tells him they may be able to uncover some crime with the information he gives. Reinbach says embezzling the money that should be going to the town and its residents and causing harm to their livelihoods is unforgivable simply because they have all of his hard work to waste. Elise then says setting up the communal toilet and hiring the residents of the slums to clean them is a public service started by Father for environmental and employment benefits. Reinbach promises that they will look into it and respond accordingly. At the end of their discussion, Eliaria wishes Ryoma and his slimes good luck, and he thanks her. The next day, Ryoma and the slimes visit the pit in the communal toilets. The pits are 7 meters wide and 2 kilometers wide, and there are 30 of them. Of course, that's going to be a lot of work, but Ryoma and the slimes carry it out one at a time. From his item box, he selects a pit cleaner outfit, and the work begins. The slimes act first as usual, and Ryoma uses mist wash and squall and clean and disinfect the space. He spends more time than he thought in just one of 30 pits. Since the slimes ate yesterday and in the first pit cleaning, the slimes reproduce by dividing into 2 daughter slimes each. Ryoma is glad about this, as it will be helpful to have more to make the work go faster. Ryoma chants monster appraisal to show the slimes' skills. Ryoma notices a huge spike in poison resistance and a newly learned resistance to miasma, which means miasma was built up here in that area. Ryoma rushes over to the Adventurers Guild, but he meets Reinbach and his family, getting more information from Worgen. Ryoma informs them about what he encountered during the cleaning, and it seems like the miasma hasn't leaked out of the area. Elise asks Ryoma if he's okay, and Ryoma replies that he cleaned himself thoroughly with the slimes before coming to meet them and made sure he didn't bring the miasma or anything to meet them. Elise and Eliaria ask if he feels sick or anything, but he claims that he's fine. On one side, Ryoma is happy to know someone cares about him. Worgen says miasma is a harmful magic power that can affect a person physically and mentally. Ryoma says he'd volunteer to take care of the pit before anyone is harmed. Ryoma says they need to cut the miasma from the source, and they need to make sure nobody enters the area until it's clean. Ryoma makes them understand that letting him and his slimes take care of this is the safest approach because the slimes can't do it all alone. Then, he shows them a book where he wrote his various resistances and other skills that make it harder for him to recover quickly even if he was exposed to miasma. He insists that he and his slimes are best suited for the job. Reinbach says to Ryoma that it feels terrible to force this on him, but he'd appreciate it if he could. While Ryoma and his slimes clean the pit and its area, adventurers Worgen hired are keeping watch to make sure nobody comes close. They include Jeff Grange, who is a longtime friend of Worgen, Asagi, a dragon newt, Lepin, a monster researcher, Willana, a dog beastkin, Mazelia, a tiger beastkin, Celia, a rabbit beastkin, and Maya Cat, the cat beastkin. Maya says it's her turn to return the help Ryoma has given to her. Joining the newly formed scavenger slimes forms a king scavenger slime, not huge, and the king scavenger slime has a new skill called gluttony, which allows work to progress many times faster than before. Elise and Eliaria bring food and magic recovery potions through the adventurers to Ryoma. The adventurers ask Ryoma to take a break, but he thanks them and tells them that he just wants to take care of it as fast as possible. The number of scavenger slimes grows further to 33, and Ryoma splits them up into groups of 10-11 to join up as king scavenger slimes so that the rate of work becomes faster compared to before. At this point, he's left with 2 more pits to end the cleaning. Early in the morning of the 3rd day, Ryoma and his slimes are done with the whole cleaning. Mia hugs him tightly and commends him for his great work. Ryoma reports to Worgen that all 30 communal pit toilets have been cleaned and sanitized, and he also says he believes it's safe now. Worgen commends Ryoma for his great work, and he tells him to take a long rest. He also tells him to count on a big payday for this one. The sun sets, and Ryoma wonders about the last time he kept working past midnight. During the days of the Black Company, working past midnight was normal, and his mother would always stay up to greet him when he got home, regardless of how many he told her not to. Then, his mother died, but no tears came down his face. It only felt like a big hole appeared in his heart. Arriving at an empty home after work felt lonely at first, but it soon became normal. Ryoma used to believe he could never get back what he lost, but now he has the Duke and his family. The Duke and his family welcome Ryoma so greatly that tears begin to run down his face. The Duke and his family ask him if he's alright, and he tells them that he just remembered something from the past for some reason. He tells them about his mother, who used to wait for him to come home. He cries out loud, and Elise and Eliaria calm him. Ryoma is fine now, and he's glad to be able to come to this world. The next morning, Elise, Eliaria, and others wake up early to prepare and serve breakfast for everyone in the house. Sebas wakes Ryoma to join them. While they eat, Hughes tells Ryoma that Eliaria wants to ask him a favor. Eliaria begs him to teach him how to play magic, and Ryoma agrees. Ryoma eats breakfast and tells Eliara that he likes the food. Mr. Sebas asks Ryoma if he'd like to learn something, and Ryoma replies that he doesn't know many attack magics. Camille quickly tells Ryoma that the best teacher will be him, and Ryoma thanks him. They get to the field where they can play with magic. Ryoma asks Eliaria if she's good at ice and fire magic, and she replies yes. Ryoma tells her that these 2 magics are the hardest to play with. He says with ice magic, all you can do is make ice scriptures, and he chants darkness then little fire flower to show her how to play with fire. Ryoma asks her if she'd try, and she says it looks pretty but the ending is a bit sad. Elise also says it makes her feel sentimental for some reason. Ryoma asks Eliaria if she can use water magic, and she says it's not her strongest, but she'll try. Then, he tells her to watch closely as he chants, bubbly water then breeze to create bubbles all over the field. Eliaria is fascinated by this. Ryoma then says the key is to use this bubbly water magic to add stickiness to the water. Eliaria then tries the bubbly water magic, but her bubbles break so soon. Ryoma tells her she should imagine the sticky solution from the slimes, a sticky, gummy feeling. Eliaria gets this slimy solution from sticky slimes immediately and tries the magic again, and then the bubbles never break. She's glad that she was able to try it out too. Ryoma tries a bigger, stickier, and harder bubble, which they all play around with their hands. Ryoma says putting in some extra magic power makes it stickier and harder to break. Eliaria says the bubble looks like a slime, and she seems to enjoy it. Then, Ryoma tells Eliaria to let them mix up a bit, so he chants water, then wave to add water inside the bubble, and move it all around, and the shape of the water can be changed. Ryoma changes the shape to a big fish swimming in the sky. Everyone present in the field at the moment is impressive, most especially Eliaria. Then, Eliaria thanks Ryoma and tells him that she thinks she can enjoy playing with magic now. While Eliaria plays with the magic Ryoma taught her, Camille opts in to teach Ryoma as they've agreed. Camille shows Ryoma a fire attack magic, turns it into a fire arrow, and hits it against a big rock. He tells Ryoma that this fire attack magic is the most usable and popular. Ryoma tries it and gets it in one try. Then, Camille teaches him water shot, wind hammer, rock bullet, stun arrow, ice cream, and some defensive magic like firewall, water wall, windshield, and ice shield. After this, Ryoma still wants to learn more, but Camille tells him that he has learned all that he wanted to teach him for the day. Then, Mr. Sebas says he will teach Ryoma some space magic, but he first asks him if he has learned any space magic other than item box. Ryoma replies that he can use teleport, and he shows them. Sebas tells him to be ready to learn intermediate space magic, like Dimension Home and Wrap. He says all space magic is the same. He tells him how Dimension Home and Wrap work, and Ryoma learned both on the field after several trials, so now he can carry his slimes around using Dimension Home and feels so happy. Then, Sebas and Ryoma head back to where the others are. The next day, they visit the abandoned North Gimel mine. and the goal is to train Eliaya in monster combat skills. On their way, Ryoma gets to know that the duty of every noble is to protect their land and its citizens, which means that when monsters or bandits are encountered, they must join the fight against them. Ryoma asks if Eliaya should serve this purpose too, and Reinbach replies yes. It is the duty of those born into the ducal family. Elise added that there's so much for Ryoma to learn, like combat training, various magic, etiquette, civics, and economics. Eliaria then says that's why she's going to the royal capital to attend school there. After this trip, they finally made it to the mine, and from Dimension Home, Ryoma brings out his slimes. Duke Reinhardt's group, Sebas, Elise, Reinhardt, and Reinbach go to a different part of the mines to investigate how infested with monsters the mine shafts are. Ryoma, Eliaria, and others go to a different part as well. The guards tell Ryoma that Duke Reinhardt's group is really strong and does not need them guards. They added that the types of monsters to hang out in mines, like these, are no match for them, so there's no need to worry about them but worry about themselves. Then, they see a big cave mantis. Hughes says that the cave mantis are not dangerous, but they breed quickly, so they should expect 30 if they see one. Then, Illyri sets out to fight the mantis, but Camel warns her that she shouldn't use fire magic in caves because there's no place for the smoke to go. Illyria steps forward and uses Ace Arrow magic the first time, but the mantis dodges it. The mantis runs very quickly towards Illyria, and she quickly tries the Ice Arrow magic the second time, which slashes the mantis' neck. They commend her, but Camille added that she should try to be more accurate next time. She's also happy to be able to do it too. The slimes feed on the slimes. Then, 4 more mantises show up, and it's Ryoma's turn to battle them. Ryoma uses his 2 knives with an activated physical hardening technique to defeat all 4 mantises. Hughes tells Ellyria that insect-type monsters are resilient, so she shouldn't let her guard down until she's taken off or crushed their heads. Then, the search through the mineshaft continues. After a long search, Ryoma and Ellyria defeated many cave mantises. Ellyria also catches a metal slime, and Ryoma tells her that she should enter a taming contract right away. She hands over the metal slime to Ryoma to thank him for teaching him how to play with magic. Ryoma is so happy, and he thanks her too. Ellyria says to him that he should enter a taming contract right away, and everyone laughs. They report to Reinhardt's group how it all went in the cave, and they assume that the cave is now a nest of cave mantises. Reinbach tells them that their mineshaft had cave bats, so he suggests that it'd be best to issue a quest through the Adventurers Guild. Ryoma thinks of what metal slimes eat when the metal comes to his mind. Then, he uses alchemy to separate iron in the soil and oxygen from the soil. Then, he combines and consolidates the iron. He didn't realize everyone was looking at his wonderful alchemy magic. Hughes confirms that this is quite the first time he's seen real, non-fraudulent alchemy, and some people never knew it existed. Reinbach then remembers that there is someone he wants to introduce Ryoma to. Sir Reinbach takes Ryoma to a shop named Morgan Trading Company, where he trades the iron he made using alchemy. Serge Morgan of the Morgan Trading Company likes the metal, and he decides to take on the responsibility of selling it. Reinbach agrees, and tells him that if it's done right, they should raise astounding profits. Ryoma begs that he'd like to keep it a secret, that he's the one making the fine goods. Serge Morga asks why, and Reinhardt replies that if the word gets out that Ryoma is a real alchemist, some might begin to suspect fraud, and he's only 11 years old. Serge Morgan of the Morgan Trading Company agrees by nodding his head. Reinhardt tells Serge Morgan that he'd like to make sure all of the profits go to Ryoma because he invented it and made it. Reinhardt also tells Ryoma that he doesn't need to be worried about anything because Serge Morgan is a trustworthy merchant. Ryoma thanks everyone, and Sergei too. Ryoma is happy because of all the care and love they're showing him. Morgan informs the adventurers, including Ryoma, that all of those who embezzled the budget for the pit toilets were arrested after a thorough investigation by the ducal family. He tells them that their next job is a monster hunt in the abandoned mine shafts. One of the adventurers asks if there are tough monsters there, and Morgan replies that the monsters are all small, but who knows what could be down there. He tells them to work together as a team to get the job done, and it begins the next morning. Ryoma takes on a new mission, and he makes up his mind to focus and sharp so that he doesn't burden the others. The next morning, in the room in the presence of Elyaria, Ryoma knows the metal slime is resistant to physical attacks, but he is checking if the metal slime will react to poisons, so he gets some solution from poison slime, sticky slime, and acid slime. He put each solution near the metal slime, and it seemed to be good with poison slime and sticky slime, but ran away from acid because acids can melt metal. Ryoma places the metal slime on the floor and rolls it to Elyaria, and she does the same. Then, the adventurers arrive with a cart and begin to call Ryoma's name to let them go hunting. He peeps through the window and then packs his slimes inside the dimension home. Elyaria wishes him good luck, and he leaves the room to meet the adventurers. At the abandoned North Gimel mine, Worgen tells and shows Ryoma and the adventurers that the monsters found in the mine, which are the cave mantis, cave bat, and cave rat, but none of them, on their own, are tough, but they should expect a large horde, so they shouldn't let their guard down as they hunt them. Ryoma and the adventurers begin their search in the cave. Jeff mentions that Ryoma has been promoted to rank, and Ryoma says the pit toilet cleaning job was enough to qualify him for the promotion. Mia hails Ryoma. Jeff tells Ryoma that he performs well on this monster hunt. He will go up to rank E in no time, and Mia hails him again. When they get to the point where they have 2 routes, Asagi says he, Lapin, and a few others will take a route, and Mizelia tells them to be careful. Asagi tells him that negligence is not a part of his dictionary. Ryoma's group heads the other route. Mia asks Ryoma the number of slimes he has, and Ryoma replies that he has 728 sticky slimes, 323 poison slimes, 2 unwowing acid slimes, 3 Kazo 33 scavenger slimes, 11 cleaner slimes, 2 healing slimes, 1 metal slime, and 1 ordinary slime, a total of 4,310 slimes. The adventurers commend him. Jeff asks Ryoma why he has a smug face, but no answer yet. Walana asks Ryoma the weapon he uses, and he replies that he mostly fights with a bow, but he can also use a dagger, or fight unarmed. He can also use some attack magic. Walana asks him if he can concentrate on flying monsters using his attack magic, because he's the only one on this team that can use attack magic. Mia says she can use magic, but the Beastkins have low magic energy. Celia says she can't use attack magic, but Ryoma can count on her for healing magic. Then, the cave mantises show up, but they defeat the cave mantises with no challenge at all. Mia says they'd be in trouble if loads of monsters that can give Jeff a challenge come out. Mizelia stops the chit-chat and says they should continue the search. A few seconds later, Walana and Ryoma could smell a group of cave bats ahead of them. Ryoma says the cave bats are covering the ceiling, and Walana asks him if he noticed the cave bats too. Ryoma tells her that he spent 3 years in the forest, so he's sensitive to signs like these. The adventurers are bothered and thinking of how they'd get the cave bats out all at once. Then Ryoma asks them if he could carry out an experiment. He says if the experiment works, then he might be able to take the cave bats down at once. He says he'll use a magic called Sound Bomb. The adventurers ask him what it's like, but he says he should show them rather than explain. He first chants Soundproof Barrier to cover the adventurers with a soundproof barrier. Then he chants Sound Bomb to the cave ahead of them. After that, he tells them to let them proceed to check if it worked. On getting there, they see plenty of cave bats that have been knocked down by the huge blast of sound. They're all impressed and surprised, and Mia hails Ryoma again. Jeff wants to ask why he has the smug again, but he decides not to mention it again. Ryoma tells the big sticky slime to unshrink and unjoin, and the slimes feed on the dead cave bats. Their monster hunt went on smoothly, and they headed out of the mines to take a break around midday. On getting outside, they're told to gather, and Worgen tells them that one of the parties encountered a pack of goblins deep in the mines, and some of the party members were injured. Worgen says there may be a large goblin village with over 500 goblins, judging from intel. Worgen then says they have to start an operation to eliminate the goblins. The adventurers are first posted in each mine shaft to block the goblins' escape, then the hunt begins. Celia and Mia enter deep into the goblins' cave to tempt them to pursue them, while others dig a deep trench using earth magic and fill it with acid slimes to melt the goblins quickly. The goblins that got over the trench are shot with attack magic and arrows laced with poison slime poisons. Worgen also joins them in facing off against the goblins as they are getting more than they expected. There are plenty of goblins, and the adventurers are running out of arrows. Ryoma looks at the trench and notices that the acid slimes aren't digesting fast enough. Ryoma withdraws the slimes from the dimension home and tells everyone to back off and close their ears. Then he chants Soundproof Barrier and then Sound Bomb to hit the goblins. Then he orders the slime to show the goblins what they're trained for. The slimes bring more arrows for one with bows, and they defeat the group of goblins. Walana tells Worgen that he's going to pay them more, and he agrees. Unfortunately, they hear a sound from the inner cave, and it happens to be a group of giant goblins and hobgoblins. Ryoma and his slimes attack the giant goblins. From the look of it, it doesn't seem like any of the goblins escaped. The injured people have been transported out. Ryoma tells the adventurers to gather around him, and he orders the cleaner slimes to clean them up. The cleaner slimes clean the goblin grime from their body. The adventurers are astounded because they never knew such a slime existed. Mia hails Ryoma again and says he could make a fortune in the laundry business. At the outside of the mine, Ryoma's healing smiles are casting high heal on the injured ones. Lapin says it is because they've used heal many times, so it's making the medical procedure go much faster. Some other people thank Ryoma and his slimes for saving them, because they wouldn't win if not for Ryoma and his slimes. The adventurers are looking at people thanking Ryoma. Mizelia says, Ryoma looks like a boy, but he's a full-fledged adventurer. Worgen commends everyone, and he mentions that the goblin commander made it bigger for them than expected, so they should expect a big raise. On their way back to town in the cart, Lapin asks Ryoma if the healing slimes eat like the other slimes, but Ryoma says they only take water. He explains that they survive through photosynthesis. They make their nutrients by absorbing light. Mizelia asks Ryoma if these healing slimes are strong. Ryoma tells her that they're weak, and they'd probably lose against normal slimes. He says that's why healing slimes are very rare, and even when they do appear, they have a very low chance of survival. Asagi says he's heard that controlling the monsters becomes harder as their numbers increase, but Ryoma controls a quite large number of slimes. He tells Ryoma that he believes that should raise his evaluation at the Tamers Guild. Ryoma tells him that he's only registered recently and has no recorded achievements. He also mentions that he's been told that slimes aren't evaluated well at the Tamers Guild. Lapin says many think that slimes are useless and worthless. Willana says even with her total lack of knowledge, she can tell that Ryoma is awesome and great. Lapin then says if more people see things without bias, like Willana has seen them, Ryoma will surely receive the praise he deserves. It's getting dark, so Ryoma tells Jeff that he should let him take over the driving of the cart. He should take a break. Jeff tells Ryoma to take a break. It must have been a tough day for him. Ryoma tells Jeff he doesn't think there will be many goblins, and Jeff replies that jobs like this require much more preparation. Jeff tells Ryoma to go ahead and get some sleep. He will drive a while longer. Ryoma is so happy to come to this world. Everyone is nice to him, and it's not like Earth at all. Ryoma still feels like he hasn't changed at all since his days on Earth. Then, they drop off Ryoma at his place and wish him good night. From afar, Mia tells him that he's made a fortune running a laundry service. He informs the ducal family what he encountered at the mine and that they were able to eliminate the goblins and nobody died. They thank Ryoma for his hard work. Then, Ryoma says there's one more thing he wants to discuss with them. He tells them that he's decided what to do from here. He tells them that they've helped him a lot and he can't thank them enough. Therefore, he'd like to separate from them now and be able to support himself. Ryoma tells the ducal family that if he continues to rely on them, he'll become a terrible person. He thanks them again for all they've done for him. Most especially, he was able to become a proper adventurer, but he feels like he's getting spoiled, and that's why he'd like to take a step back. Eliaria is not happy with his decision. The maids see Hughes and the other guards peeping through the door. They ask them what they're doing at the door, but Hughes tells them not to talk. Elise asks Ryoma if he's going to leave them forever, and he replies that he dares not. He loves them all so very much. He says he just wants to retrain himself, and once he's comfortable with himself, then he will come back. Elise tells him that they'd welcome him back with open arms. Iliaria, who is not happy with the decision, says to her mother that isn't going to stop Ryoma from leaving. Elise tells her that it's just like she's going to the school in the royal capital. Ryoma wants a chance to grow. Elise confesses that Ryoma is only 11 years old, so he deserves to be spoiled more. Reinhardt tells Elise to stop because they've discussed this already. Ryoma and Eliaria ask them what they mean, and Reinbach tells them that they anticipated that Ryoma would one day tell them he'd want to live by himself. Reinbach says they've seen many children like Ryoma. Sebas says immediately, after arriving in this unfamiliar city, Ryoma registered himself in the guilds, found jobs, and worked diligently, as if doing it is completely natural, and that's why they expected he would bring up the subject at some point. Sebas says it came sooner than they expected. Reinbach says they won't stop his wish, but he should make sure he doesn't push himself too hard, because excess effort can lead to waste sometimes, not results. Reinbach says he may leave them, but they'd like to set a few conditions. First, he must update them regularly with a letter. Second, he must visit them occasionally to show that he's doing well. And finally, if anything comes up, he shouldn't hesitate to ask them for help. Eliaria tells Ryoma that she's truly sad to let him go, but she respects his decision. She added one more condition, which is that they'll meet again 3 years from now and 6 years from now. She says she will graduate from school in 6 years, but 3 years from now, when students take a long vacation, she promises to concentrate on her studies and her training in magic. Ryoma agrees to all conditions and tells Eliaria that he will try to grow on his own as well. Eliaria then tells him that if he forgets because he gets too excited about something, she will be very angry. Ryoma says he will try his best to remember. Elise added that Ryoma stays in this inn While they're in town, Ryoma wants to complain that it will still feel like he's relying on them, but she says it has already been decided. Others also agree with it. Ryoma asks them how long they're staying in town, and Eliaria tells him it's until the time of the Grell frog outbreak. Ryoma asks if it's the monster whose hide is used for armor, and Reinbach adds that their organ can be used to make medicine. He tells Ryoma that there is a massive outbreak of the Grell frog at a nearby lake every year. Ryoma asks if they want to use it for combat training, but Reinbach says no. The real targets are the lemur birds that arrive at the same time. They show Ryoma the lemur bird picture from a book, and Elise tells him that capturing them is difficult because not many tamers can tame them. Elise says the lemur birds almost cover the whole lake during this specific period. Ryoma seems to want to know more, and Elise says Ryoma should see for himself. It's a good opportunity. Ryoma says he'd like to come with them, and Eliaria is happy again. Reinhardt then asks Ryoma what he means by living on his own. Ryoma says he'd like to live as an adventurer in this town. He says he will establish relationships with people and train himself, and he'd also like to start a laundry service that uses cleaner slimes. So if he advertises that, he can clean goblin grimes, he can make enough money to pay for necessities. The maids and guards enter and shout to make money. The maids say Ryoma's laundry service will be successful. Reinbach tells Ryoma to discuss it with Serge at the Morgan Trading Company. He will surely be able to help. Reinhardt asks Ryoma if he could do a job for them, if he's going to stay in this town. He asks if Ryoma can manage the abandoned mines. If he has time between his Adventurer's Guild jobs and his business, they just need him to look it up periodically to make sure no monsters settle there. Ryoma agrees to do it and thanks them. The next day, Ryoma and Eliaria meet with Serge Morgan to discuss things with him. Ryoma proves to Serge that his cleaner slimes can clean even goblin grime. Serge is amazed to see this because he never thought something like cleaner slimes existed. Serge could see the success in his mind already, so he suggested that Ryoma register with the Merchants Guild. He tells Ryoma that the Merchants Guild won't go after business that barely makes ends meet, but there is a possibility that Ryoma's laundry service will generate much larger sums of money than that. He tells him to register now, so that they don't cause trouble for him later. He volunteers to go with Ryoma. They get on the road with a cart to the Merchants Guild. Serge likes Ryoma's idea of the business because it has the potential to make huge revenues. Serge vouches to help assist him in any way he can. They made it to the Merchants Guild, and they met with the Master of Merchants Guild, Glicella. There, Ryoma introduces himself and tells her about his business idea, and he'd like to register with the Merchants Guild today. Ryoma shows her the cleaner slimes, and she's convinced. Glicella gets him registered immediately. Serge says he'd like to talk about where to put the store, but Glicella tells him not to work himself up. She shows them a place Ryoma could situate, and she says the place has got a few issues, but she'd make it cheap for them. Serge says the building is quite a large one. There was a bar, an inn, and a warehouse, but there was a fire, and it's been abandoned since then. Ryoma considers it a good spot as the area is residential, and it's close to the Adventurers Guild, and not far from the industrial area. At that moment, Ryoma makes his decision to buy the place, and Serge says he'll handle the paperwork. Serge says he'll be charging some commission, and he would like to loan Ryoma some of his professional managers. He can leave the management duties up to them. Serge honestly tells Ryoma that in Ryoma's current state, he's not suited for management. Ryoma's emotions are visible through his facial expressions. Serge advises him to hide it better than his peers, considering his age. Ryoma thanks Mr. Serge and says he will borrow his employees and buy all the supplies he needs from him. Serge and Ryoma agree with each other and handshake each other. So far, the laundry business is on track to open sooner than Ryoma thought. First, the scavenger slimes eat the overgrown weeds, and the acid slimes melt away the abandoned building. The plan is that the shop will be 2 stories high and have 1 basement level below. Also, Ryoma plans to build a dormitory for the employees to live in. Ryoma uses sorts of magic to set the foundation, and he has the ducal guards to help him in the building. The guards consider Ryoma their friend, so they can help him as much as they can. The adventurers also help him in the painting of the building. While painting, Jeff tells Ryoma that he heard he's got promoted to rank E for the monster hunt job, and Ryoma affirms it and thanks all for them. Lipin and Asagi plan to get their stuff cleaned up as soon as the laundry is ready for work. Lipin says anyone who knows about Ryoma's slime's abilities would come right away. From the look of it, the business is guaranteed success, says Lipin. Walana assures Ryoma that they'll be here for his service all the time. Asagi is impressed with Ryoma's decision to decline the ducal family's help to become independent. Tilia says they should get to work and talk less. After the shop had been completely built, Ryoma named his business Bamboo Forest Laundry Service, which is based on his last name, Takebayashi. In the town he grew up in, Take means bamboo and Bayashi means forest. Eliaria says the area around the shop looks too bland, so planting a lawn and some flowers would be nice. Ryoma thinks it's nice, so they get it done. While planting the flowers, Eliaria asks Ryoma if he's too tired, but Ryoma tells her that it's nothing compared to his previous workspace. He also says it feels tough at times, but when he completes a task and a client compliments his work, the sense of accomplishment is great. Eliaria then asks him what his previous workspace is, and he quickly says several things like carrying things, or making some simple dolls. He doesn't want to say system engineer or programmer to avoid further questions. He asks her if she'd like him to make her one someday, and she says yes, happily. Ryoma in his mind has only worked on the ones for boys, but he tells Eliaria that he shouldn't expect too much. On their way home, Ryoma says the shop is almost complete. He wants to invite everyone to come and take a look before the official opening, and he will prepare some simple food and drink. Ryoma sees the church and tells Hughes to walk Eliaria home and that he'd like to stop by the church. He gets to talk to the gods, but only with Kufo. Kufo says Gain and Lulutia are in Ryoma's old world. Ryoma asks if they're inviting someone else, but Kufo replies they are just sightseeing. He tells Ryoma that he also went to visit rare sites on Earth, but in no time, they notice time's up, and Kofu says it might probably be because Gain and Lulutia are not there. Kofu quickly tells Ryoma that his younger body is affecting his mind. He is experiencing infantile regression. He tells Ryoma that training himself is good, but he shouldn't overdo it. Time is finally up, and in the church, Ryoma thinks about what Kofu and Serge have said. Then he confirms that he feels more emotions than before, and it explains his inability to pull off a poke face. He notices that it's getting late, so he quickly leaves for home so as not to worry Eliaria. Ryoma holds an opening party for Bamboo Forest laundry service, and he invites the ducal family and everyone who helped him out because he wants to show them his thanks. Ryoma thanks the ducal maids and Eliaria for helping him in the cooking and baking. The maids tell him that he shouldn't hesitate to ask if he needs them. A few moments later, Mr. Serge and 2 workers arrive at the Ryoma shop. Serge's workers are surprised, thinking that an 11-year-old boy, relative of the ducal family, built such an amazing shop, and Serge tells them that they must not judge a person by their appearance. They should try to control their preconceptions. Then, Ryoma and Eliaria welcome Serge and his workers, and Mr. Serge congratulates Ryoma on the completion of his shop. Mr. Serge then introduces the workers as Ryoma's new assistants. The first one introduces herself as Carla Norad, and the second as Callum Norad, and Ryoma also introduces himself. Both parties are glad to meet each other as Carla and Callum say they'll be at his service. Eliaria also introduces herself to Ryoma's new assistants. Sergei tells Ryoma that Carla and Callum are young, but they serve as sub-managers and deputy sub-managers at the Luiyam branch of their Morgan Trading Company. He says he is confident that they will be able to assist Ryoma. Ryoma is interested, so he shows them the work process in the shop, ranging from sack size that a customer purchases first to the laundry fee per sack, and finally, handling the claim check to customers to be able to get their laundry back. He shows them the laundry spot where there are cleaner slimes. Ryoma then asks them if they've got questions. Carla and Callum tell Ryoma that they heard about the cleaner slimes from Mr. Serge, that it's a new breed of slime, but does clean well, and that they should dry the laundry after cleaning. Ryoma shows Carla and Callum how his slimes wash, iron, and package clothes. Then he tells them all that they have to do is to put the laundry back in the sack to return to the customer. They ask Ryoma if the cleaner slimes clean any type of grime, and Ryoma tells them that he has never come across anything they can't clean yet, but they should double check before returning to the customers. He also tells them that they call it laundry, but there's no water involved, just slime eating, so it doesn't need to dry. He tells them not to hesitate to ask him if anything comes up as they leave him. He keeps in mind if they are dissatisfied with reception and laundry carrying duties. He adds that they look like capable business people, and maybe they feel like the work is not good enough for them. He shows them an area for employees only, which is off limits for customers. The dressing room, guest meeting room, manager's office, a break area for employees, a restroom, and the office kitchen. Then, he shows them the dormitories, so he tells them to choose any room they like as they're the first to live there. Everyone has arrived for the party, so Ryoma asks Carla and Callum to help him with the party. The slimes, Carla and Callum, help in sharing food and drinks with everyone. The next thing is for Ryoma to give a speech, and that moment reminds him of the speech they made him do in the office in the morning. But nobody listened then. Ryoma thanks everyone for attending the opening party for Bamboo Forest. Mia bursts into tears of joy as she sees Ryoma is all grown up. He says to them that he wouldn't have been able to do this without their help. He tells them to enjoy their meals and drinks, then he cheers. While everyone enjoys their moment, Worgen and Glicella almost got into a minor argument from their past, but they changed the topic when Ms. Maylene attempted to interfere. Worgen asks Glicella if she thinks of Ryoma's business, and Glicella says he believes the business will do fine. Glicella says she will just watch and let Ryoma do what he thinks is best. meaning that if he asks for help, she shouldn't be against offering it. She tells Morgan to watch over him properly too. Ryoma is glad that everyone is enjoying their moment at the party. The opening party was a success. Ryoma thanked Carla and Callum for their help. Then, he tells them that if they could continue to work with him starting the next day, it would be great, but if they don't feel like it, it's fine. Carla says she and her brother have discussed it earlier, and they'd like to work with him. They say they had strong worries at first that a business run by an 11-year-old was using slimes for laundry, but the worries disappeared after they got to know his personality and the trust and support that so many people have in him. They believe they can learn a lot from him, so they would love to work there. They hope to live up to the expectations of Morgan Trading Company, which introduced them. They also will do their best to bring honor to the Takebayashi family. Ryoma confesses that he's so glad to have them on board and looking forward to working with them. He tells them not to be hard, but normal with him because he doesn't have a reputation at all. Unlike Morgan Trading Company, they tell him that it's the least they can do. Even the smallest bad reputation can spread quickly among nobles. Ryoma wonders why nobles would talk about his tiny shop. With the way they talk, Ryoma can tell that they think he's a noble, probably related to the ducal Jamil family. Besides, the lady, Eliaria, was there earlier. Ryoma makes it clear that the ducal family only treats him well, but he's not a noble. He tells them that he's just an adventurer, so they should be normal around him. It's finally opening day for Bamboo Forest. Ryoma, Eliaria, and the slimes are taking care of the flowers, but Ryoma's head is thinking if he's going to get customers today. Then, Carla and Callum come to the scene, and they greet Ryoma and Eliaria. They get through with cleaning, and now they're expecting customers to show up. Ryoma tells Carla and Callum that he doubts that they'll get any customers right away, but they should be ready in case. He tells them that he wants to go to the Adventurers Guild to let them know that they've opened. Hughes will walk Eliaria home. Mia and Walana already put a signpost of Ryoma's business everywhere in town, so a lot of people promised to show up today. Ryoma sees Herb gathering on the guild board, so he says to himself that he can do it while he patrols the mines. He decides to take on the job and submit the paper to Ms. Maylene. Ms. Maylene thanks Ryoma for the previous entertainment. Then, she asks if he's sure he wants to be doing jobs right now, but Ryoma says they won't get many customers on their first day. In that case, Ms. Maylene approves his offer. After a few patrolling in the mines, Ryoma gathers some herbs with the help of the slimes. He delivers the herbs to the guild to collect his pay. Then, he returns to his shop, but he meets a long queue at his shop. At that moment, he thinks he shouldn't have been taking on jobs at the guild today. He uses magic to appear in the shops. Then the work begins. After a long working day, they're able to attend to everyone that came to patronize them. Ryoma thinks of getting more workers to reduce the workload for Carla and Callum. Callum tells him to talk to the Merchants Guild. They can introduce him to potential workers. Ryoma tells both of them to get some rest as soon as they're done calculating their sales, and he quickly heads to the Merchants Guild. Ryoma meets with Glicela to tell her about how busy it was at his shop today. Glicela tells him that she knew he'd do well, but she just didn't expect it to be quite so explosive. She could tell already that he was here to find more employees because she hadn't spent many long years as an old hag for nothing. She tells him that she will gather some candidates, and then he decides who to hire. Ryoma also informs the ducal family about his opening day at the shop, and he tells them that he will work hard so that people would want to visit them many times. Reinhardt tells him to visit the town guard's quarters. It's full of unwashed laundry, and it might be a good source of stable income for him. Ryoma says he will do that. Reinhardt also tells him to get some rest. Eliaria wishes him a good night as he heads to his room. On his bed, Ryoma says to himself he's tired. He remembers back then, he used to sleep like a dead man, with no thoughts at all. But now, even if he's tired from work, it feels comfortable, says Ryoma. Then he sleeps. The second day was also a huge success. Just like the first day, they offer top-notch services and their customers like it. Ryoma tells Carla and Callum that he's headed to the Merchants Guild. To his surprise, Glicela has gathered some candidates for him, just for him to pick whoever he likes among them. When the candidates see Ryoma coming toward them with Glicela, they are wondering if he is Glicela's grandkid. They are surprised when Ryoma introduces himself as the owner of Bamboo Forest Laundry Service. He tells them that he's looking for staff who can speak to customers and carry clothing. He says ladies should be able to handle that without a problem. He also mentions that he's a tamer, and the shop contains his slimes. The slimes work, and he'd need them to treat the slimes as colleagues. Some of the candidates begin to wonder what they have to do with slimes. Then Ryoma says, if anyone dislikes or is afraid of slimes, it might not be a job for such a person, and the person is free to leave. The same idea goes for whoever doesn't like the idea of working under him. Most of the candidates leave, except for 2 candidates, meaning they don't have a problem working with him. He tells them to introduce themselves, and they should state their condition for their employment if they've got any. The 2 candidates meets are the father and his daughter. The father introduces himself as Fei and his daughter, Li Ling. Fei shows Ryoma his broken leg and asks if the leg would be a problem for work. Ryoma says to himself that the healing slimes should be able to fix it, and then he tells them that it won't be a problem. He asks them if they have any requests regarding pay, and Fei says no, as long as they can live, they have no issue. Ryoma asks Li Ling if she has any wishes, and she asks if they can live at the workplace, or if he knows of a cheap inn. Fei adds that they do not have much money, so any cheap lodging will do for them. Ryoma tells them not to worry much, he has dormitories for his employees. They're happy to hear that. Then, Ryoma asks them what the weapons they have with them are. Fei considers Ryoma an expert to have suspected that. Then he says they're former assassins. Glisella, who can read people better than anyone, tells Ryoma that she always checks anyone she introduces to a job with her own eyes. Ryoma says like she did for him, and she says she did double check for the we come from another country. Li Ling says the master they served lost in a war, so they lost their homeland, their job, and their reason to remain assassins. Fei adds that they worked in the mines to make some money, but he got caught in a collapse, and that's how he broke his leg. Fei says only the guildmaster and Ryoma can see through them. Fei and Li Ling say Ryoma seems similar to them, but not the same. Ryoma can't tell them how he transferred from Earth, so he quickly asks them when they can start work. They're surprised that he hires them, considering they used to be assassins. Ryoma tells them that if the guildmaster approves of them, then he has no worries. They tell him that they have plans for escape and everything, and Ryoma tells them not to escape, but to work with him. He needs all the help he can get. Li Ling says she will work very hard and they can start right now. Then, Ryoma asks them if by any chance something happens, can they be their bodyguards? And they agree. Ryoma officially hires them. Glisella tells both of them to work hard because this business has a great future and they should stop taking their weapons everywhere. Fei says it's uncomfortable to be without them, and Li Ling adds that the weapons are now a part of their bodies. Glisella tells Ryoma to treat them well. Ryoma says it'd have been nice if she mentioned it earlier, but Glisella says she just wanted to see how good Ryoma's eyes are. Ryoma takes Fei and Li Ling to his shop to start working, but he tells them not to work too hard. Fei and Li Ling like how the shop looks, and they're happy to be hired by him. Ryoma introduces Fei and Li Ling to Carla and Callum. Ryoma tells Fei to help with reception, while Li Ling will carry the bags of cleaned laundry. Then, the work for the day continues. Li Ling sees how the slime works in the laundry, and she's impressed. She introduces herself and plays with the slimes, and she carries the finished laundry. At the end of the day, they were able to get through the evening rush of customers with Fei and Li Ling's help. Ryoma thanks everyone, and he's so relieved to see so many customers come today. Carla tells him that starting in the afternoon, more people heard about them from someone who tried their service. Callum says he expects this to go on for at least a few more days. Then, Ryoma tells Carla and Callum to calculate the sales total for today. He tells Fei and Li Ling to come with him. He takes them to a room where he brings out healing slimes from the Dimension Home to heal Fei's leg. Lucky for Fei, he can stand on his feet again with no pain in his leg. Fei and Li Ling thanked Ryoma so much because they never knew his leg could be fixed. Fei tells Ryoma that he had given up on the leg. They used all of their money for bribes to the border guard when they fled their country. Li Ling says that's why they had no money. Then, Ryoma shows them their different rooms at the dormitory. Fei and Li Ling are glad to be part of Ryoma's business. Callum shows Ryoma the sales for the day, and Ryoma is shocked to see that it is even more than the first day. Callum says if word gets around about this service, it will only grow larger. Carla adds that there should also be demand in other towns, so Ryoma should start considering making branches in other towns. Ryoma thinks talking of branches now is so early. Carla and Callum say it's never too early to think about this. If Ryoma can find a person he can trust, he should consider that. He tells them that he will keep it in the back of his mind. Ryoma says Fei and Li Ling have military experience, so they will serve as their bodyguards as well. Ryoma tells Carla and Callum to add that factor to Fei and Li Ling's pay calculation. Fei and Li Ling grab Ryoma's hand and thank him very much. The next day, Ryoma asks Eliaria if she's practicing magic for the day, and she says yes, but she wants to help Ryoma's business. Ryoma appreciates the thought and tells her that he's been able to hire more help. Then, Ryoma leaves for work. The third day at the shop is even busier. More customers come by, starting from morning. Everyone works hard, while Ryoma bakes his staff's pizza to eat during breaks. The four ladies among the adventurers come to Ryoma's shop to get themselves clean as well. All staff work full-time on day 3, and the sales are about 1.5 times that of the previous day. Fei and Li Ling say the business will grow bigger, and Ryoma says he needs to hire more people, even a cook too. Carla says it'd be nice to do that. Carla and Callum ask Ryoma why he wants a cook, and he says they all have their hands full with work, so it will be nice if there's someone who holds the position of cooking. Ryoma's employees like the way he treats them. Ryoma says he's leaving to meet the merchant guild. Then he heads home from there, so he tells them to take care of the rest. Ryoma tells Glycella that the business is doing better than he thought, so he needs more employees. He says he needs 3 employees and 1 cook for the employees' meals. Glycella seems moved by the cooking thing he needs, so she tells him that she will make sure to find those who don't mind working for Ryoma with smiles. The next day, at the Merchants Guild, 3 candidates named Fina, Maria, and Jane are the ones who are interested in the job, and Ryoma introduces himself too. Glycella tells Ryoma that these ladies came from the same village as Gimul to find work. Then, another lady named Selma, who used to work at an inn, is interested in the cook job. Glycella says it's Ryoma's approval they need, and he hires them immediately. He tells them that he's looking forward to working with them. Glycella tells Ryoma that if his business continues to be good, he should think about making a new branch in a different town, and if that time comes, he should come talk to her. Ryoma says it might be too early, but Glycella says she can start today if he wants. 1 week after the opening of the shop, every day has been a great day for Ryoma and his employees, although they work very hard. Ryoma takes some time out to wash the walls and take care of the flowers. However, Ryoma thinks he doesn't have to be there all the time anymore. He's considering taking on some Adventurers Guild jobs. The ducal family comes by to see the progress of the business, but it's beyond their expectations, although they know he'd do well. Mr. Serge calls Ryoma to his place to ask him how the Bamboo Forest laundry service is going. Ryoma tells him that Carla and Callus are great, and in fact, he has hired more employees so that the business can run without him. He then confesses that it's kind of going so well that he's getting a bit scared. Mr. Serge says he's asked him to come today for yet another business opportunity. Mr. Serge asks if Ryoma can deliver them lots of waterproof fabric in addition to nuggets and sticky slime strings. He asks Ryoma if he's aware of the upcoming Grell Frog outbreak season, and Ryoma says he heard about it. Mr. Serge tells him that the Grell Frog's hide makes armor, and their organs make good medicine and sell well. Mr. Serge tells him that that's why many adventurers head out to the lake during the outbreak season. He adds that waterproof garments and waders would be very popular for it, and Ryoma says he will start making them right away. Mr. Serge thanks him. Ryoma tries out an experiment. He feeds one of his slimes with iron, thinking it might evolve into a metal slime. Illyria asks him if he's making waterproof fabric at the mines, and he says the place is good to avoid interference. Illyria asks if she can join him, and they head to the mines. At the mines, Illyria brings out a violin to practice to her heart's content there. Ryoma didn't know she had the talent, but then he asked her why she brought it. Illyria reminds him about the lemur birds coming to the lake she told him about. She says playing music is essential to taming them, especially when they like the music. It makes it easier for them to accept the taming contract. She tells him that he could go on with his waterproof fabrics while she practices the violin. As she plays the violin, Ryoma and his slimes praise her. Ryoma and his slimes also make their own waterproof fabrics. They both commend each other, and the slimes too. Pending the time the fabrics dry up, Ryoma decides to try making a doll for Illyria. From a small rock, Ryoma creates a block with magic and then breaks the block into a boy doll. He then chants playing clay to turn it into a girl doll. He gets to the details of the doll and makes a doll exactly like Illyria. Illyria is happy to have a doll of hers. Ryoma also makes dolls of the whole ducal family and presents them to them. They all praise Ryoma for his impressive crafts. Reinhardt suggests that Elia takes the dolls to school with her to keep her from being lonely. Illyria agrees, but she'd like to have Ryoma's doll as well, and Ryoma agrees to do it for her. The next day, Ryoma checks into his shop to inspect his employees. He leaves for the mines after he sees that everything is going well at the shop. After making fabrics, he has to wait for them to dry, but he doesn't want to sit doing nothing. Then he remembers that he hasn't done combat training with the slimes for a while, so they decide to do that. Ryoma goes one-on-one with the King Scavenger slime, but his hit is nothing to it due to its immune to physical attacks. After an overwhelming combat training, he's about to check the fabrics when he notices the evolution of the slime feeding on iron. The slime evolves into an iron slime because it feeds on iron, and it's quite heavy compared to the metal slime. He checks the content of a metal, and he sees that it includes iron oxide and aluminum oxide. From there, Ryoma deduces that if a slime eats lots of different metals, it becomes a metal slime, and if it eats just pure iron, it becomes an iron slime. Ryoma gets back to his shop, and he meets Fina first. Fina tells him how great the slimes worked. Right there, each slime splits into 2, and Ryoma says to Fina that the cleaning work will be more efficient. Then, he moves to the next room where he sees his other employees staring at the sales book. Ryoma asks if they incur losses, but on checking the list, it was 3 times profit more than the previous day. Ryoma asks how it grew so quickly, And Carla says they had many huge contracts in the morning. She says representatives from the blacksmiths, carpenters, and iron foundry came in. Business is booming, and Ryoma praises and thanks all of them for working so hard. Ryoma tells them not to hesitate to tell him if they have any issues. None of them has issues. They can only feel the comfort of working with him. All of a sudden, he remembers that there are meant to be holidays for his employees, and he apologizes for that. He proposes that they can have a day off a week, or they can take holidays in shifts. Ryoma says the shop's goal is to run a clean business and treat its employees well. The employees are convinced enough, and they thank him. The cook, Selma, then serves everyone dinner. Ryoma goes to the Adventurers Guild to take on a job. Ms. Maylene says it's quite a step up owning a business and hiring people. Ryoma says he is just lucky. Ms. Maylene adds that his real skills add to his greatness. Ryoma says he's going to check for good jobs on the board, but Ms. Maylene says she has something nice for him. She says there's an adventuring party from out of town called Pier of Sukum. He tells him that they caught a rare breed of slime. Ryoma seems to be more interested, so he asks her to give more details. She tells him they tried to sell it to the Tamer Guild, but they were refused. Ryoma wants it, so he asks if the slime is still up for sale, and Ms. Maylene directs him to the location. Ryoma gets to the Pier of Seekum and enters the building. He sees different sets of people having their drinks, then he decides to meet some guys. He asks them who Pier of Seekum is, and Ryoma quickly introduces himself as an adventurer and tamer. The guys make jest of him based on his age. Then, they calm down to hear him out. He says he heard the story that they couldn't sell their rare slime. One of the guys named Sane, who is not in a good mood, grabs Ryoma's clothes in the neck to lift him. Then, tears flow down Sane's eyes, and he drops Ryoma. He kneels before Ryoma and says, they heard that even slimes can sell well if it's a rare breed, so they came down to this town to sell, but nothing. He bursts into tears and lies flat on the ground as he cries. Some of the other guys lift Sane and help him inside. Then, another guy among them, named Shin, apologizes and introduces himself as the leader of the Pier of Seekum, and the other guy's name is Kai. Shin asks Ryoma what business he's got for them, and Ryoma says he'd like to purchase the rare slime that they couldn't sell. They ask him why, and he tells them that he collects and studies slimes. He tells them that if the slimes are a rare breed, he'd love to get it. He asks them for the price, but they tell him to set the price because the Tamers Guild told them that it's worthless, so it's hard for them to come up with a price. Ryoma requests to see the slimes and says he'd pay extra if it's a type of slime he doesn't own. They bring a pot and tell Ryoma to be careful with it. Ryoma wonders what type of slime it'd be, then he opens it and sees fluid slime he's never seen before. He pays them extra, and the guys thank him, but he thanks them instead because they bring him a new breed of slime. With the money, Shin says they don't have to worry about cash for the immediate future. Shin says this should calm Sane now, and Ryoma says he understands how not having money could be unsettling. Then, Ryoma tells them that they can make some money if they stay in this town. He tells them about the annual outbreak of grell frogs in a nearby lake. He tells them the grell frog sells well as armor material and medicinal ingredients. He tells them to check the guild, and they consider it a helpful one. Shin says he hopes they could repay him someday, but Ryoma says they should rather visit his shop as a customer. Another surprise for them is when he tells them that he runs a laundry service as a side business. He tells them that they can clean goblin grime too, so they should visit them. They say they will visit his business. Ryoma finds himself a space in the training field to execute the taming contract. Then, he does the appraisal and gives it the name Bloody Slimes from its appearance. The bloody slime has vampirism skills, meaning that it can feed on blood. Ryoma kills a dog and brings out the bloody slime. The bloody slime enters the dog and sucks all its blood. Ryoma says the bloody slime could be useful for eating beasts and monsters. He says the bloody slime seems to have many uses, and he welcomes the bloody slimes. His shop activities go on, and he makes Eliaria his doll. Kofu tells Gain and Lulutia that Ryoma seems to like slimes. Gain says the slimes must be happy to be treated so well too. Lulutia says Ryoma's facial expression is so much brighter now. He likes every bit like a normal kid. Gain is glad that it wasn't a mistake to bring him to this world. Eliaria tells Ryoma that her family is teaching her taming magic tomorrow, so she asks if he'll join her because there will be a lot to learn. Ryoma says he'd love to see her use taming magic, and they smile at each other. Then, they leave together. At the training field, Elise begins by asking them if they can describe the nature of taming magic. Eliaria signifies and answers that the user enters a contract with a monster to gain its help in taming magic. She also says a link is formed between the user and the monster, which allows them to communicate with each other. Elise commends her and says they'll be learning shared sensation magic based on that link. Elise tells them that through sharing sensations, they can gain information through the familiar and let the familiar know they're in danger. Reinhardt adds that it's a magic that is specific to taming magic, not shared with summoning magic. Ryoma asks why it's not possible to summon magic, and Reinhardt says, summoning magic contracts are forced on the monster using magical force. He says there's a link, but it's one way only. Reinbach says to fully utilize shared sensation, they need lots of experience. He says it's said that its effectiveness improves with families that they spend a long time with and develop a shared understanding with. However, the day will be training with crew birds in the cage. Eliaria asks why it is not with their slimes, but Elise tells her that it's hard to tell how effective the magic is with slimes. Reinhardt says even if they share their sensation with a slime, there wouldn't be any vision, hearing, smell, or taste to share. Then, Elise tells both Ryoma and Eliaria to get into a contract with the crewbirds. They did it, and then they tried sharing sensations. Elise tells them that they don't have to recite a spell, just focus on their link with the familiar. She tells them to create a mental image of being able to see what their familiar is seeing. Ryoma says to himself that it's like a video camera or a VR system, and then he starts to see it, but it's a bit nauseating. Reinhardt says he's succeeded. Reinbach says it's supposed to be a difficult magic to learn, and Reinhardt says the nausea he's feeling is what every taming magic user goes through. Reinhardt then tells Ryoma to try closing his eyes and concentrating on just the familiar's vision. Both of them succeeded in learning the magic. Then, they decide to have a break. Reinbach tells both Ryoma and Eliaria that they learn extremely fast. Reinhardt says he thought this would be the single instance where Ryoma would have difficulty, but Elise tells him that there's nothing wrong with being a quick study. Eliaria says she doubts that she'll get used to it anytime soon, but she will try. Elise asks Ryoma if this is his first time contracting a non-slime monster, and Ryoma answers yes. She then asks him if anything feels wrong, and he says nothing in particular. Elise tells him that he might have the aptitude for bird-type monsters too. Reinhardt says every taming magician has aptitudes, but they are all good or bad at taming certain types or numbers of monsters. Ryoma says he has a good compatibility with slimes. Reinbach tells him that without that, he wouldn't have been able to tame so many of these slimes. He also says finding the right familiar for him is one of the key skills for becoming a good tamer, and the only way to do this is through experience. Ryoma asks Reinbach what kind of aptitude he has, and Reinbach says he does well with scaled monsters, but he can't maintain too many familiars at once, but each one is very strong. Reinbart says he can tame almost all four-legged monsters, but he can't enter a contract with bird-type monsters. Elise calls out a white wolf-like monster named Loward, her little Fenrir familiar. Elise says the Fenrir is a divine beast, and the little Fenrirs are wolf-like monsters that can use a little ice magic. She says the Fenrirs are powerful, and she has tamed 20 more little Fenrirs, just like the one with her. In addition, she has about 100 more various wolf-type familiars. Ryoma says to himself that the slimes win in quantity, but the quality is so vastly different. Reinhardt says Elise is one of the most skilled tamers. He says little Fenrirs aren't easy to tame, especially in such huge numbers. Elise says she doesn't think Reinhardt is lacking in taming magic talent either. Reinhardt says that compared to Reinbach and Elise, being just an adequate tamer is completely useless. Reinbach laughs and says Reinhardt keeps setting aside his taming magic training to go practice with the sword. Ryoma looks at and admires Elise's taming magic. Eliaria notices Ryoma and asks what he has in mind, and Ryoma replies that it's just finally dawned on him that he's surrounded by incredible people. Elisa heard what Ryoma said and made it clear to Ryoma that Lord Reinbach was several steps higher than them. She says he has only less than 20 familiars, but half of them are dragon types. Reinbach considers himself lucky because it's not only that he happens to have the aptitude, the first monster he contracted was extremely powerful. The other dragons under its command all joined in, which means he can't call on them unless it's very important, considering the chaos they'd cause. Ryoma asks Reinbach what the familiars normally do, and Reinbach tells him that they live in the mountains on the land they own. He says his dragons prevent those monsters from leaving the mountains. Elisa says his wolves live on a different mountain, home to some precious medicinal herbs. She says her wolves guard them against poachers. Reinhardt says the more powerful a tamer's familiars get, the more trouble they have when looking for a place to live. Elise says they should end their break and practice shared sensation a little more. A few days passed. Ryoma practiced taming magic with Eliaria, and he also made waterproof fabric in the mines and delivered it to Mr. Surge. The Grell Frog outbreak's peak is in 3 or 4 days, so the adventurers meet with Ryoma to ask him where he got the work outfit he wore when he was cleaning the pit toilets. They say they'd like to get some good clothes for the frog hunt that doesn't soil easily. He tells them that they can get them from Mr. Surge of the Morgan Trading Company. He says they should tell him he sent them. They thank him, and they leave for the Morgan Trading Company immediately. At night of the same day, the ducal family asks Ryoma if heard the news, and he replies yes. Eliaria says lots of lemur birds are flying in to hunt the Grell frogs, and she will tame them. Elise tells Ryoma that they've decided to go to the lake the day after tomorrow. tomorrow. Ryoma picks up the violin to practice, but in his head, his separation from the lady and the others is nearing. Finally, the day to attempt to tame the lemur birds arrived. As they head to the spot from home, Illyria is nervous, but Camel tells her not to worry. Her stamina is impressive compared to children her age. Hughes adds that even when compared with Ryoma, on the way, they meet the adventuring party called Pier of Seacom, so Ryoma tells the ducal family to go on without him. Shin thanks Ryoma for the other day, and Ryoma also thanks them for selling him a rare slime. Seiin comes forward and apologizes to Ryoma for his drunken behavior the other day. Seiin thanks him for paying them handsomely for the slime and telling them about the Grell frog outbreak. Seiin says they're going to go sell the frogs they got at the Adventurers Guild, then visit Bamboo Forest. Shin says it's cheap and fast, and the results are better hand cleaning. Seiin says he didn't know slimes can be so helpful. They tell Ryoma that, when they go back to their hometown, they're going to hate doing their laundry. Then, each part goes their separate ways. Ryoma runs as fast as he can to meet the Ducal family at the lake. He sees the pretty lemur birds as they hunt frogs in the lake. He also sees the adventurers hunting frogs in the lake as well. Reinhardt calls the attention of Ryoma and Illyria to a person who is trying to tame a lemur bird. The person is blowing a flute to tame the lemur birds. Ryoma asks how much effect musical skill has on the contract process, and Elise says she heard a story once that a person was confident with his music but failed, but when he smashed his instrument in anger, the birds like the noise. Reinbach says when they don't accept one's performance, they make an uncomfortable warning sound. As the person blows the flute, the birds only mock him, and then he gets mad and brings out his sword. Reinbach tells everyone to stay on guard. The person enters the lake to hunt the birds, but the lemur birds use windcutter magic to attack him. Elise says lemur birds are normally mild-mannered, but they're not weak monsters at all. If anyone underestimates them and tries to subdue them with force, they will resist. The birds keep using windcutter magic to attack this man as he runs towards Ryoma and the ducal family. Ryoma and Camille quickly use the earth wall to block the attack from the birds. Suddenly, the birds begin to squeak heavily, and their voice affects everyone. Everyone blocks their ears, but Ryoma isn't affected. Ryoma looks around closely to locate where the strong magic power is affecting such a wide area, until he notices a very deep, blue-colored bird among the lemur birds. Then, he shuts the bird's voice and controls it to fly away from them. Reinhardt tells Camille to attend to the man in the water, while Hughes, Jill, and Zeph should attend to the adventurers. Reinbach thanks Ryoma, but they wonder how Ryoma wasn't affected by the voice. Reinbach says Ryoma stopped the song of the advanced species, Nightmare Limor bird. Reinbach says it's a rare species, spotted maybe once every 10 years. It can use dark magic in addition to wind magic. It attacks the mind through song and dark magic. Seba says it creates fear, confusion, and hallucinations, and can knock a person out. It's quite a scene that Ryoma experiences. Seba says every seasoned adventurer sometimes loses consciousness. Reinhardt says even with training though, it doesn't change the fact that it feels terrible. Ryoma remembers that he has a skill called mental pain resistance. Maybe that's why he wasn't affected. He thinks he should watch out. He didn't even notice he was under attack. Illyria asks Ryoma why he wasn't affected by the voice, and Ryoma tells her that he has a resistance against mental pain. The guards report that it's only the man who caused the commotion sustained one injury. Ryoma asks Illyria if they should find the lemur bird's nest, but Zeph says it could be tough because lemur birds fly much farther than other monsters, and the area they'd need to cover would be too broad. Hughes says that's why those who want to tame the lemur birds stake out here, but who knows if they'll be back today. Illyria says she'll wait here because they've come this far. They waited for some hours, but the lemur birds wouldn't come back. Illyria tells Ryoma that they're going to go their separate ways soon, but Ryoma doesn't know what to say to respond to that because he's so unaccustomed to these types of situations. He remembers he has read a similar situation in a novel, so he fishes out what the character says in the situation. Ryoma is about to say the speech when Elise says it before her. Elise says it's not like they're never going to see each other again. Then, she asks Ryoma if that's it, and he surprisingly says yes. Illyria is down about it, but she still hopes that they'll see each other again. Illyria tells Ryoma to write to her, as she will always do for sure. Hughes hits Ryoma softly from behind and whispers into his ear that he should go for a hug at least. Ryoma is disappointed that such is coming from Hughes, as he's meant to be the one stopping that type of thing as Illyria's guard. Hughes says he used to support what he enjoyed watching. Reinbach says there's no need to be serious. Ryoma is just an 11-year-old child. Hughes still insists that Ryoma go for a hug. He says the longer he waits, the more embarrassing it will get. Ryoma hits Hughes in the stomach and tells him to stop teasing him. Ryoma doesn't even know what to do because of the opposite reaction he could see in Illyria and Reinbach's faces. Fortunately, the lemur birds come back and land in the lake, and Ryoma tells them that he'll stay away for a little because the previous interaction might have made the nightmare lemur bird cautious of him. Eliaraya says she doesn't care. She will never treat Ryoma's presence near her as an excuse for her failure. He begs Ryoma to stay there and watch her tame the birds because his presence gives her courage. Then, she plays her violin for a while, and the birds listen to the sound. The birds join the sound by making their sound. After she stops playing, the birds move right in front of her. Ryoma then tells her to do the taming contract. She did it successfully, and everyone congratulated her. She was able to tame 9 lemur birds. Ryoma says it's his turn to try his luck. He brings out his violin from the dimension home. He says he's not as good as her, but he'll see if he can get a share of her luck. Reinbach says he's never seen a Ryoma instrument before, but it's similar to a violin. The ducal family and the guard are looking forward to his performance. Ryoma steps forward and begins to play his violin. The ducal family hadn't heard the tune from his violin before, but it was comforting. Many of the birds step forward, including the one he attacked earlier. Eliaria also reminds Ryoma to do a taming contract. He completed the contract, and everyone at the lake claps for Ryoma. Everyone congratulates Ryoma and Eliaria for taming multiple lemur birds at once. Sebas notices one of the birds and tells Eliaria to perform a monster appraisal on it. She did, and found out that it's also an advanced species. Ryoma's advanced species is different in color from Eliaria's. Eliaria's own is a phantom lemur bird, so it can cast light magic, not dark magic. Reinbach says the phantom is even more rare than the nightmare. He says he never thought he'd be able to see both at once during his lifetime. Reinhardt wants to try to touch the phantom lemur bird, but it screams, and everyone laughs at him. On the night of the same day, a huge banquet was held. It was both a celebration of Eliaria successfully taming the lemur birds and a farewell party to Ryoma. Eliaria plays the flute for them, and they all enjoy the moment. Later that night in Ryoma's bed, Eliaria tells Ryoma that she wonders if they're going to keep going all night, and nobody gets a hangover. Ryoma agrees and says that she's leaving tomorrow morning. Sadly, Eliaria asks Ryoma if he'd be living near the mines from tomorrow, and Ryoma answers yes, he might live there. He says he can also train magic there without bothering anyone. He plans to build some rooms over time. Ryoma asks Eliaria if she's going to enter the school dormitories tomorrow, and she says children of nobles are supposed to go to the school in the capital from age 12. She says there's no law or anything, but it just looks bad, unless there is a special reason. She also says she doesn't have anyone close enough to call a friend. She says most people are afraid of either her status or her magical power. Ryoma says, status aside, she holds a huge amount of magical power. But is that enough to scare people away like that? Eliaria says she made a mistake a while ago. When she was 5 years old, an older boy visited her house and offered to teach her magic. She couldn't control the magic well and ended up freezing the boy, but they unfroze the boy immediately. He was fine, and his family forgave her. But it seems like the boy said that she did it on purpose, or she attacked those who crossed her. Exaggerated rumors spread amongst the nobles, which scared people off. She asks Ryoma, with her voice shaking, if he's scared of her, but Ryoma says he's fine. Eliaria says it's a fact that she lost control of her magic and hurt someone. Ryoma says he wouldn't. She has no blame at all, but that type of thing is bound to happen once or twice to anyone. Ryoma tells her that he'd never be afraid of her, no matter what. Ryoma wants to ask her if she's afraid of her, and Eliaria quickly interrupts that she won't ever be afraid of him, no matter what. Eliaria almost forgot that he wanted to give Ryoma something. He gives Ryoma a small box and tells him to open it. He opens it and finds a ruby in the box. She tells him that it's a necklace she received from her mother on her 10th birthday. She says, the ruby is a magic stone. Ryoma doesn't want it because it's a very rare and expensive item. Eliaria insists that he takes it. She says she's not giving her, but she wants him to hold on to it. Eliaria says it's a good luck charm to exchange precious items with a friend before parting ways because it will help them see each other again. It's an old saying though. Ryoma asks her if she's sure she wants him to hold up to it, and she says if she doesn't want to, she wouldn't have brought it up. Ryoma accepts it and promises to take good care of it. Ryoma then thinks of what is precious to him that he could give Eliaria. He gives her 2 of his slimes that might be helpful to her. Ryoma thinks he failed because he's not very used to this, and he quickly apologizes to her. Eliaria tells him that she just thought it was very much in character for him. She collects the slimes from him and thanks him for letting her take his precious familiars. She promises to take good care of them. The next morning, the guards and maids thank Ryoma for the time he spent with them, and they tell him to check on them since he can travel with magic. They also wish him the best in his future endeavors, and he thanks them all. The ducal family tells Ryoma to rest well, not to push himself hard, to let them know if he needs anything at all. and also to write them letters as promised. Reinhardt tells him to try to take care of himself and never to hesitate to rely on them. Ryoma thanks them, and they leave Eliaria to have a few words with him. Eliaria says she's been wondering for a while if it's correct to assume they're friends. Ryoma says they're friends. Eliaria then tells him not to call her my lady, as if they're strangers. He should rather call her Alia. Ryoma agrees to call her Alia, and she tells him that she won't let anything get her down, no matter what happens at school. She says she'll study hard and improve her magic by the time they meet again. Ryoma says himself too. Eliaria reminds him of their promise to meet again in 3 years. She also tells him that if he gets too caught up in work and forgets, she will have to remind him by giving him a taste of her magic training. She says she heard her mother did that in the past to remind her husband of a promise he forgot. Ryoma says he's glad that Mr. Reinhardt survived it. Eliaria says she won't say goodbye. Instead, she says she'll see him again. She puts forward her hand for a shake. Ryoma meets her hand with a shake and says the same. Eliaria quickly gets into the cart to go to her school, while Ryoma waves at them as they go. In the cart, Eliaria says to herself that she'll see Ryoma again and picks her flute to blow it, but tears flow down her eyes. Kofu says Eliaria and Ryoma will miss each other. Lulucia says it's only natural. Gain says sometimes people meet one another. Sometimes they part ways, then they meet more people. Gain says Ryoma will be fine. He will meet many more new friends from now on. Then, they toast to Ryoma's future to be full of good fortune. The gods promise to continue to watch over Ryoma. Ryoma stops by his shop, then to the mines. He plans to build a place to sleep. He says to himself that he has to work hard to make his life a bit different from yesterday, since Elia told him that she would work hard. Ryoma writes a letter to Eliaria. Unusual for Ryoma to be late for work, but he is today because he was studying slimes, so he lost track of time. The best service at Bamboo Forest Laundry Services continues, and the people never stop patronizing them either. Ryoma enters the shop to ask his employees if everything is alright, and they say yes, it is. He also says hi to Selma. Selma says she's looking forward to another productive day with Ryoma, their manager. Ryoma provides a proper work environment that is worthy of all his employees' hard work. Carla tells Ryoma that she'd like him to come work around this time every day, and Ryoma asks why they're always busy in the morning. She says when he comes to work before they open, he does all the preparation himself. This is more like saying he's taking work away from those who worked under him. She says it's a good opportunity to train the new workers. It's also an opportunity for Ryoma to learn how to delegate and rely on others to handle the work for him. Then, Ryoma agrees to her terms. Carla wants to suggest the second shop when they hear the other employees laughing from the other room, and then they both stand up to check on them. They see Li Ling tying up 2 people. They report to Ryoma that the 2 thugs came to complain that they failed to clean their clothes. Then, Ryoma asks them what the laughter is about, and they explain that the 2 thugs came to act up in their shop, but ended up that the clothes they brought that were dirty were clean, so everyone laughed at them. They call the thugs idiots, and they want to attack them, but the thugs end up being beaten. In that case, Ryoma thinks he needs to consider security around his shop. Then, he tells them to continue working, while he goes to the mines to try something. At the mines, he first has the sticky slimes make some hardening solution, then uses a separation circle to remove moisture. He adds more hardening solution, and then mixes it with the mixture circle. Then, he removes the moisture again. He repeats the process to condense the hardening solution. Then, he finally shaped it into a sheet-like glass. He hits the glass with enhancement magic, but it won't break, and it's clear. He plans to replace it with all his shop's window glass for security purposes. With this, he should be able to protect the workers and customers with it. With the help of the slimes, Ryoma makes a lot of glass. All of a sudden, he notices a green slime among his slimes. Then he quickly does a monster appraisal, and it happens to be medicine slime. Ryoma is sure he didn't contract it, so he thinks it's evolved from something. The medicine slime has spear mastery as a skill. From there, Ryoma could tell that it must have been a poison slime before. Then, he wonders why the poison slime became a medicine slime, and then he remembers that an antidote got broken yesterday, and before he got clothes to clean it, the poison slimes drank it up. But he thought it was the cleaner slime that cleaned it. Then, he orders the medicine slime to show him the kind of medicines it can make. It drops varieties of liquid medicines into different cups. Ryoma did an appraisal for each cup, and he identified ointment, hemostat, antidote, fast poison, slow paralysis, slow paralysis poison, and antibacterial medicine. He picks the antibacterial medicine to check it, and he sees it as a fluid with strong antibacterial properties. It kills off germs and viruses, but it's harmless to humans. It is also a disinfectant, which might be useful. He says he'll do things he can do one at a time. He says he has to make sure he doesn't worry the ducal family, who offered to be with him. Then, he remembers that he's been too busy lately to catch up with the gods. He then decides that he'll go to the church tomorrow. The next day, the church attendant directs Ryoma to the inner room. He gets there to get sent to the gods' realm. but nothing, so he thinks it's the actual normal outcome. Then, he's eventually sent to the God's realm. He asks why the delay, and the voice tells him that he rarely uses that power, so he had to fumble around a bit. He turns to see who, and it happens to be someone he hasn't seen before. Ryoma welcomes him well, and tells him that he started living in the town alone, so he wants to come and pay his respects. The new man introduces himself as Taekun, the god of technology and craftsmanship. He tells Ryoma not to bother himself with polite talk because he can read his mind if he wants to. He adds that he doesn't like being formal, and then he tells Ryoma to have a seat. Ryoma is pleased to meet him, and he introduces himself as Ryoma Takebayashi. He sees the dolls he made for Elieria, so he asks Taekun where he got them. Taekun tells him that he wants to take a good look at it, so he makes a copy. Ryoma explains to Taekun his life on Earth before he died from sneezing, and how he reincarnated into this world. Taekun tells him that he heard the story, but techniques from another world are fascinating. He tells Ryoma that items made by a foreign culture using an unknown technique are interesting to him. As a god of technology and craftsmanship, as a god, he knows all there is to know about techniques from this world. Ryoma could tell that there were things that Taekun didn't know about the techniques from other worlds that interested him. Taekun says it's obvious that the figurines were created with the utmost care. He could also tell that Ryoma spent a significant amount of time honing the craft. Ryoma says making things was his hobby, and he's made good money on these, through sales or commission. Taekun says he likes people who care about doing a good job. Ryoma asks Taekun if he's the only one here today, and Taekun replies, yes, others are doing their things. He says, this place must look like an empty white space to him, but each god, the god of beasts, the god of magic, the god of the earth, has a spot that feels good to be in. He says they build what humans would call a house there, and live there. Ryoma then asks him if this spot is Taekun's house, but Taekun replies that he doesn't have a house. He says technologies and crafts exist all over the place, so he travels about as he pleases. He tells Ryoma that this place and the world he lives in are connected. He tells Ryoma to ask someone else for a better explanation. He can't explain this well. He says Fernobelia would be a better option to explain it. Ryoma says he's never heard the name before, and Taekun tells him that Fernobelia is the god of magic and academics. He closes himself off in his realm, but no one knows what he does there. But when it comes to knowledge, he's the best, and he explains things well too. He rarely speaks to anyone, not even a fellow god like Taekun. Taekun tells Ryoma that he can't tell if Ryoma will ever get to meet Fernobelia during his lifetime. Time's up, and Taekun tells him he's looking forward to seeing Ryoma again. The church attendant thanks Ryoma for his generous donation as he steps out of the inner room of the church. Ryoma gets to his shop late, but he still asks his workers if things are going well. Carla says the new workers have learned their jobs pretty well. Faye tells Ryoma that he heard he wanted to talk to them. Ryoma says it's about the windows of the shop. He says if someone wants to break in through the windows, it would be easy. Faye says yes, with a hammer or axe. Liling says they plan their security detail with that in mind. Ryoma thanks them and informs them about the hard glass he made. He mentioned that it would be easier to protect the shop from the dimension home. He brings out the hard glass to show them that it's what he wants to use to replace the glass window panes. Ryoma hits the glass, but it doesn't break. Li Ling asks if she can try too, and she hits the hard glass continuously while Faye holds it, but the glass won't budge. Ryoma says he made it. Carla says it could be a very successful product, but Ryoma tells her that he didn't intend to sell them because it's hard to mass produce. Faye tells Li Ling to try the enhancement magic, and she does, but nothing. Li Ling admits that the glass is hard, and it will serve security purposes if they use it in the first floor windows. She then says if they're cornered, they won't be able to break out of the window to escape. Ryoma says he didn't even think of the drawback. Faye says it will serve its purpose, but they should replace some of the windows with hard glass to decrease the number of possible break-in points. They will also make plans if they know where intruders will try to come in. Ryoma asks if it's alright if he replaces the store windows with the hard glass, and they all agree. Callum reminds Ryoma that he has an appointment with Mr. Surge from the Morgan Trading Company. Faye tells Ryoma that they will take care of the store window replacement. Carla says to Ryoma that she wants to talk to him about starting a second shop in a different town. Ryoma says he thinks it's still too soon for that. Carla says he could reconsider since they have more manpower. Ryoma says he will think about it. On his way to Mr. Surge's place, he thinks about what Carla said, but he says to himself that he just started living by himself in the town of Gamul. It feels too early for him to set up shop in a different town. He says he wants to prioritize the relationship he's building with the people he's met in this town. He makes it to Mr. Surge to do some personal shopping. Mr. Surge asks him what he needs. He says he wants to purchase a large number of bottles to store medicine. He says he has some free time now, so he wants to make some medicine. He says adventuring is prone, so he wants to be prepared for it. Mr. Surge tells him that it would be best for him to register as a chemist at the Merchants Guild if he wants a large number of bottles. Then, he can purchase them at a discount from the wholesaler. through the guild. Ryoma meets Glycella to inform her about the medicine bottles. He tells her that Mr. Surge suggested that he come to meet her. Glycella asks him how good he is, and he brings out the medicines from the dimension home to show her. He shows her disinfectant and antidote. Glycella confirmed it when she did the appraisal. She praises Ryoma and says to him that if he can make medicines such as these, maybe he can live as a chemist too. Ryoma says he doesn't plan to, at least not currently. Glycella says his priority should be starting up his second shop. He tells Glycella that one of his workers, Carla, said the same thing. Glycella tells him that he'd do fine with a second shop. Glycella tells him that if he doesn't have funds to start the second shop, perhaps he could make these drugs as a side business. She even says she will buy them all from Ryoma if he'd like, because she has high hopes for him. On his way back to his shop, he says to himself that he still thinks it's too soon to start a second shop. Then, he receives a letter from Elia through a limor bed. In the letter, she mentions that she received his letter and she has finally settled down. She says her family and the slimes they borrowed from him are doing well. She also says Ryoma's hard work will motivate her to do her best as well. After reading the letter, Ryoma wonders what he should do. Then, he says he's going to get busy too. Ryoma writes another letter to Eliaria. He's now considering starting a second shop. The head of the local Tamer's guild branch comes to visit, and he's impressed with what he saw. Ryoma feels honored and thanks him. The head of the local Tamer's guild branch says he wants Ryoma to let everyone know that the value of the Tamer is not determined by the strength of the tamed monster alone. The man says he's looking forward to seeing what other uses he comes up with for slimes. As the man leaves, Ryoma says to himself that he needs to start a new branch to live up to the man's expectations. Then, he hears a man's voice in his shop shouting in anger what is wrong with his place, so he quickly enters his shop to see what's going on. He wants to interfere, but the man tells him to stay out of this. Ryoma insists he must know what is going on as the manager of the establishment. The man shows him the clothes and shouts at him. He tells Ryoma to better pay for it and throws the clothes at him. Ryoma looked at the clothes and could tell that someone cut with a knife and then pulled it apart forcefully. Ryoma tells the man that the issue was fabricated. The man says Ryoma is blaming him and won't even apologize. He gives the man the clothes and tells him that he'll prove it. Then, he borrows someone's laundry. He shows the man how the slimes eat the grime off his clothes. He tells him the slimes have neither tooth nor claw, so they're incapable of damaging or tearing his garments. Ryoma tells the man that it wasn't their service that damaged his garment. Ryoma gets angry and says he shall report the man to the authorities for hindering their business. The man attempts to attack Ryoma, but he grabs the man's hand and hits him against the floor. Then, he calls on the authorities to get the man arrested. Carla tells Ryoma that she is concerned because this is the second time someone has tried to impede their business, but she wonders what the motivation behind it is. Ryoma says they might want to tarnish their reputation. Carla wonders who, because Bamboo Forest has no competitors. Carla has, there must be more going on with this, and she will have Callum look into it. He will report back in a few days. Ryoma meets Asagi along the road and asks him if he's off today. Asagi says yes. Ryoma says he just got out of work and he's headed home. Asagi says it's good for both of them to take a break when they can. Ryoma sees his sword and says it must be a new one. Asagi replies yes, it tends to wear out when used. He says he tends to get a new one every year. Ryoma asks him where he gets his katana, and he asks Ryoma if he wants it as an art piece or as a weapon. Ryoma says to use it as a weapon. Asagi describes the shops in the royal capital where they sell it, but he tells him that if he buys one every time his weapon wears out, it would be much too much experience. Ryoma asks where he gets him, and Asagi replies that his hometown sends him a katana when he needs a new one. He says he receives this support as a special exception since he's still in training. Asagi says for Ryoma to want a katana, that means he must have learned how to use one somewhere. Ryoma tells him that his late grandfather was able to make katanas, so he learned from him. Asagi says in that case, Ryoma would have to purchase expensive katanas or stick to using a different weapon. Asagi apologizes that he couldn't help, but Ryoma tells him not to mention it. At the mines, Ryoma wonders if he can just make his katanas. He knows modern katanas are made from tamahagane steel. He can make the charcoal needed to make tamahagane. The other ingredient, iron sand, he can make in the mines using alchemy. Ryoma says he knows how to make katanas, but he lacks the technique. He was hoping to have a weapon that was comfortable to use. Then, he quickly remembered the item box. He brought out the spear that he had taken from a bandit that he defeated in the forest. He trains with the spear and confirms that he can handle it well. He can't access katana now, so spear is fine too. Ryoma's father in the previous world was a katana swordsmith. He taught Ryoma how to make katanas, so he knows, but Ryoma lacked talent and he gave up on Ryoma early on. Instead, his father had him focus on learning martial arts. The focus was mostly on hand-to-hand combat, but he taught Ryoma how to use most weapons, including the spear. The spear Ryoma holds a magical weapon so he tests the fire ability of the spear, and then he says he can just cast his fire magic. When it's already late at night, Ryoma eats and gets some sleep. Carla gives Ryoma the report of their investigation. From the report, Ryoma sees a factional dispute. Carla tells him that Mr. Taylor, the head of this branch, is in a delicate position within the Tamers Guild. Ryoma says the mainstream faction, who puts more value on having stronger monsters, wants to sully Mr. Taylor's reputation. Carla says Mr. Taylor believes it is more important to wisely coexist with the monsters. Ryoma says what it means is that there are people who are trying to defame him through rumors. Carla replies yes, and she says one such rumor was that he gives favors to a useless beginner who can only tame slimes, Ryoma. Carla believes that the 2 attacks on their shop were attempts to lower the reputation of the business Mr. Taylor has high hopes for. Ryoma asks Carla if it would be possible to spread a new rumor, not a lie, but just to spread the truth. Carla tells him there are many merchants in the Merchants Guild with a good ear. It would be easy to do it by using them. Ryoma says he recently successfully tamed 6 lemur birds. Ryoma thinks if the story gets heard, then Mr. Taylor would look good by proving that he has a good eye for talent. Carla says it should do well. Besides, the lemur birds are difficult to tame. It should cast doubt on the view of those attempting to spread bad rumors. Ryoma tells her to do it. Jeff, the adventurer, introduces Culkin, the slime researcher, Tony, the slime researcher, and Lobelia, the slime researcher. These 3 are tamers and are potential future managers of the business. Ryoma tells them that if he has any issues working here, they shouldn't let him know. Tony says that compared to the laboratory, which was nothing but despair, he considers it as heaven. Culkin tells him that he has no idea how terrible it was being a slime research lab. Lobelia says they treated them awfully. Tony says their pay got cut for the tiniest of reasons and were told to quit if they didn't like it. Ryoma asks what the reason is, and Tony says the most common one is that they couldn't produce results in their research. Culkin says the higher-ups don't understand that studying slimes isn't an overnight task. Lobelia says there are so many types and such little information about them. Tony asks how they'd ever find out how they evolve. Lobelia says the slimes just randomly evolve to a different species every time, so there's no way to run experiments. Tony says the lack of results was the reason they all got fired. Ryomas asks them what they feed their slimes, and they say some scraps left over from the feed they gave to the other animals. Ryoma sighs and tells them that the condition for determining how a slime evolves is what they eat. These 3 think that the prevailing theory for years is that food and evolution are unrelated. Ryoma tells them that he spent 3 years studying it, so he's certain of it. Although they feel sad that they didn't know this before, they'll continue their research on slimes here and prove to the world how useful slimes can be. They tell Ryoma to teach them anything else he knows about slimes that they don't know. Tiny first asks Ryoma if he has any insight on how to tame a slime. Ryoma knows it, but he doesn't want to hurt them anymore, so he suggests they talk about other slimes. He tells them all they need to know. Ryoma spent a lot of time with his workers, so he left late. On his way to the mines, he notices that 3 men are following him. Then he picks a race. They run after him until he teleports to the top of the building. From the top of a building, he throws a poisoned sharp object to stab 2 of them. They won't be able to move for a while. The 3rd man wants to escape, and Ryoma teleports to him and stabs him with the same sharp object. Ryoma asks him what they intend to do to him, and the man says Ryoma won't get away with this, but if he gives up the lemur bird and the money he made, he will forgive him. Ryoma ignites his spear with fire and puts it close to the man's face. Ryoma wonders how the man is still able to maintain that attitude in this situation. Then, a bird comes from above attempting to attack Ryoma from behind, but a lemur bird kills off the bird. From this, Ryoma could tell that the man was using his tamed monster to see where he was, so he decided to use his own too. Worgen and some guards arrive at the scene to arrest the men. Worgen tells Ryoma that he saw these men chasing after a lemur bird on his way home. Ryoma says he had the lemur bird to call for the guards, just in case. Ryoma thanks Worgen for looking out for him. Worgen asks him if he could make some time tomorrow, and he says yes. The next morning at the shop, Ryoma explains his experience last night to his employees. He says there is a chance that they may be attacked too, so he advises that they try to finish any business while the sun is up. He also tells Fei and Li Ling that there might be more guard duty required from them. Ryoma informs them that there will be a meeting between himself and Worgen, the guildmaster, where this will be discussed. Carla signifies that she will be attending the meeting as well. In the presence of Mr. Taylor and Glycella, Worgen tells Ryoma that he needs to buckle down and play defense for a while. Mr. Taylor tells Ryoma they did some digging of their own after they heard some bad rumors themselves. They found that someone sent those men to attack Ryoma. Worgen tells him to do his best to protect himself and his shop while they take care of the mastermind. Ryoma thanks them and tells them that he wants to make sure the shop's security is perfect. Morgan says they'll help, even Jeff recommended some trustworthy ones. Well, Ryoma says he'll be fine on his own. Glycella tells Ryoma that if he is a good fighter, there's a trick to make it harder to attack him. With Glycella's trick and the help of the guards, Ryoma deals with lots of intruders. In his shop, they train on how to deal with intruders in case they encounter any. Ryoma acts as a thuggish adventurer, causing trouble, and then the employees call on Mr. Dolce. On seeing Mr. Dolce, Ryoma begins to run, and the employees throw stuff at him. Mr. Dolce is a bodyguard Jeff introduced to them. According to Ryoma, Mr. Dolce is a bit reclusive, but very earnest and reliable. After the training section, Selma prepared everyone's lunch, and they liked it. Selma mentions to them that the butcher nearby gave it to them as a gift to celebrate the manager's taming of the lemur birds. Surprisingly to Selma, Mr. Dolce expresses his opinion about food for the first time. Ryoma is happy that his employees are communicating more with others and working harder than he expected. He says to himself that if this mood continues, he will be able to open a new branch. After lunch, Carla gives Ryoma a book to check their balance sheet and to see how their sales are growing steadily. Carla also reports to Ryoma that the 3 prospective managers have finished learning the basics of bookkeeping. She tells Ryoma that Maria has learned the basics of taming magic through Lobelia. Then, he tells Carla to let them start working towards opening their second branch. Ryoma visits Glycella, who has been expecting him to come around since he's no longer at risk of being attacked. To his surprise, Glycella already finds a list of where he can put his second branch. He is happy, and he thanks Glycella. On his way back to the shop, he received a letter from Elia through a limauer bird. In the letter, Elia says she's working ahead right now in preparation for starting school in the royal capital. She says she's not only studying academics but training her magic as well. She says she plays with the bubbly water magic that he taught her whenever she gets tired. She also says Ryoma shouldn't forget to take a break now and then. Ryoma says to him that he might have to wait a while before taking a break. Ryoma tells his employees that he's taking off to a new town to build his second branch, and they all wish him a safe trip. Ryoma writes to Elia that he departed Gimul, and he's on his way to Lenaf on his own to open up the second bamboo forest shop there. Elia is glad to hear the good news. Ryoma can't wait to see the kind of people in Lenaf. Ryoma finally gets to Lenaf. The town is not as big as Gimul, but it's too full of activity. Glycella told Ryoma to get help from Mr. Pioro Sayonji when he got to Lenaf. Ryoma finds Mr. Pioro Sayonji's trading company. The company is huge. As he wanders around the company, a lady welcomes him and asks him if he's looking for something. But Ryoma replies that he's not here to shop, but to meet Mr. Pioro Sayonji. The lady tells him that Mr. Pioro Sayonji is her dad. At that same moment, Mr. Pioro Sayonji comes to the scene and asks his daughter, Miyabi, if Ryoma is hitting on her, but she replies sharply with no way. She tells her dad that Ryoma wants to see him. Ryoma introduces himself as Ryoma Takebayashi from the town of Gimul, and he was sent here by Master Glycella. Mr. Pioro Sayonji welcomes him and tells him that Glycella told him that there's a kid who does an interesting business laundry using slimes. Mr. Pioro Sayonji tells him that he has to go to the guild to do a lot of paperwork if he wants to start a branch here, but Ryoma shouldn't worry, he has to be covered from head to toe. Ryoma thanks Mr. Pioro Sayonji. Miyabi is surprised to hear that a kid like Ryoma has a business and even wants to have a branch of the business. Mr. Pioro Sayonji tells Miyabi that Ryoma is a year younger than her. Mr. Pioro Sayonji tells Miyabi not to be surprised. She's making Ryoma uncomfortable, and she quickly apologizes. Then she introduces herself. Then she says she and her father are honored to make Ryoma's acquaintance. Ryoma is glad to meet her as well. Mr. Pioro Sayonji tells Ryoma Miyabi was the name of the daughter of the founder of their business, so he decided to bring a share of the good luck. Ryoma asks if the person achieved something great, but Mr. Pioro Sayonji replies no. She was a regular poster girl and had a regular and happy life. Ryoma smiles and asks him if he wants his daughter to be happy like the poster girl, but Mr. Pioro Sayonji says no. He thought naming her daughter after the founder's daughter would bring him good luck. Miyabi tells Mr. Pioro Sayonji to take Ryoma to his business at the guild. On their way to the guild, Mr. Pioro tells Ryoma that they're off, but there's not a lot to do at the guild. Mr. Pioro says Glycella told him to take care of everything, so he already talked to them about the real estate, the various paperwork, and all other bothersome stuff. He says all that's left for Ryoma is to look through some documents and sign them. Ryoma is surprised that he's done that much for him. Mr. Pioro tells him that if he hadn't done it, Glycella would bite his head off. Then, they get a very huge merchant guild, where Mr. Pioro tells Ryoma that the building used to be a fortress. Ryoma is surprised, so he asks the Merchants Guild to use a fortress, but Mr. Pioro tells him that there are Merchant Guild, the Adventurers Guild, the Craftsman's Guild, and the Dragoons Guild in this place. Ryoma asks about the Dragoons Guild, and Mr. Pioro tells him to look through the window. He looks and sees lots of the large monsters, and he says he's never seen so many large monsters before. Mr. Pioro tells him that all of the monsters work for the Dragoons Guild. Mr. Pioro tells him that the monsters have been gathered to carry people and goods. Mr. Pioro says by using flying monsters, they can carry many goods quickly, but doing so requires a lot of facilities to tend to the monsters, so they use a fortress for it. Ryoma asks about the other guilds. Mr. Pioro says the Adventurers Guild gathers raw materials, the Craftsman's Guild turns them into goods, the Merchants Guild sells those goods, and the Dragoons Guild transports them. This makes Lanaf special, and that's how the town got bigger. Mr. Pioro says the most special thing is that the person who came up with that whole setup is an ancestor, and even came up with the name Airport. Ryoma finds it interesting, and he says to himself that when he heard the name Sayonji, he thought about the possibility, but now he knows for sure that Mr. Pioro's ancestor was a transfer as well. Ryoma confirms that this is another way a transfer can leave its mark. After their business at the Merchant Guild, Ryoma thanks Mr. Pioro for setting all of this up for him. With that, he should have no trouble working on opening his shop now. Mr. Pioro tells him not to worry. After all, Ryoma is a bright newcomer that Glycella has high hopes for. He tells Ryoma that he's looking forward to Ryoma returning the favor somehow in the future, and Ryoma agrees. Then, he tells Ryoma to let them go and check up on the shop. He shows Ryoma the shop. The shop is across the street from Mr. Pioro's place. He tells Ryoma not to hesitate to ask if he needs anything. Ryoma thanks him again for all of his support. Mr. Pioro tells Ryoma that he's also a businessman, so he just makes sure he doesn't miss any opportunity, including for gratitude. Mr. Pioro says enough of standing outside. They should check up on the inside of the shop. The first floor is the shop area. The second floor has meeting rooms. Mr. Pioro says the previous owner's house is on the premises as well, so Ryoma can use that as the employee's dormitory. Ryoma says he thinks this place will be ready as soon as he builds the furniture. He says he will contact Gimul immediately and get them to send people. From the Dimension Home, Ryoma calls out a limor bird named Dre. He tells Mr. Pioro that he tamed the limor birds recently. Mr. Pioro says Glycella tells him that Ryoma is a tamer, but he didn't know Ryoma was so good at it. On top of being a good businessman, Ryoma sends Frey to Gimul to call his staff to come to Lenaf. Mr. Pioro asks Ryoma if he already has an inn for the night, but he replies no. Mr. Pioro says he could stay at their place while he's here, and he should look forward to dinner. Ryoma says he didn't realize travel food is gross, and Mr. Pioro tells him that food for newbie adventurers is supposed to be cheap and durable, not taste good. Mr. Pioro tells him not to worry. He will eat something so delicious tonight. At night, they serve Ryoma with miso soup, cooked fish, and rice. Ryoma asks Mr. Pioro if they get miso around Lenaf, and Mr. Pioro says yes, even mirin, vinegar, and soy sauce too. Ryoma seems to like soy sauce too. Well, Mr. Pioro says he will help Ryoma pack some later. Miyabi says enough of chit-chat, and she tells Ryoma to eat his food before it gets cold. Ryoma likes the food and says so many memories. Miyabi asks him if he lives in a Dragonute village, but he replies that his grandmother used to make the food. Miyabi says Ryoma has a cute side that's more befitting of his age. Miyabi confesses that she is impressed by how Ryoma has a business and a second branch at age 11. Ryoma thanks her and tells her that he was just lucky enough to meet some great people and their help. Mr. Pioro says he wishes Miyabi spoke politely, just like Ryoma. He says he's worried that Miyabi can attend the academy at the royal capital. Ryoma, who has Alia in the capital, asks Miyabi if she's going to the academy, and she replies yes, to make connections as a future business person. She says it sounds like a lot of rigid human relations type stuff would come up, so she doesn't want to go. The same night, Mr. Pioro asks Ryoma about his plans for tomorrow, and Ryoma says he will take some time for his staff to arrive from Gimel, so he will prepare the shop and also find some work as an adventurer. Miyabi is surprised to hear that, and Ryoma adds that he's even a rank E Mr. Pioro, and Miyabi tell Ryoma that there aren't many E-ranked jobs in town right now. Miyabi tells him that there's a strong monster prowling the outskirts of town, preventing people from assigning quick jobs outside of town. Mr. Pioro tells him that the monster's even showing its face on the highways, and it's affecting business. Ryoma asks them what kind of monster it is, and Miyabi says, a smash boar, rank D. Ryoma knew that he had heard that before he reincarnated. He remembers that the Gain and the other gods told him that there are several people whose names they've borrowed to establish an identity in this world. They wanted him to find and use the heirlooms that they'd hidden in their hometown. The Great Forest off Schluss is the hometown, and is one of the most dangerous places in this world, home to many fierce monsters. The gods suggested that Ryoma fight some monsters that are similar to those in the Great Forest to prepare before he went. Smash Boar was part of the monsters they mentioned. Mr. Pioro and Miyabi ask Ryoma what is wrong. he is lost in thought. Ryoma tells them that the smash boar happens to be a monster he always wanted to try and take down. Mr. Pyoro says joyfully that Ryoma could go out and take care of the smash boar for them. Then, if he brings it back to him, its meat sells well. Miyabi angrily calls her father's attention to the fact that Ryoma is rank E, and what he is going to do if Ryoma winds up hurt or anything. Mr. Pyoro says he was just joking. Miyabi says he shouldn't have made a joke out of a serious matter. Mr. Pyoro tells Ryoma to bail from his daughter's drama. The next morning, Mr. Pyoro tells Ryoma that he has to stay at work today, so he will have Miyabi accompany him today, and then he leaves. Ryoma tells Miyabi that he'd like to go buy some lumber to make furniture for the shop. Later in the day, Mr. Pyoro has some spare time to check up on Ryoma and Miyabi at Ryoma's new shop. As he enters the shop, he sees slimes doing a lot of different work in the shop. He asks Miyabi what is going on, but she tells him not to ask her because she is surprised too. Well, they both ask Ryoma how slimes can use tools, and Ryoma says he taught them. After a long hard work, Ryoma tells both Miyabi and Mr. Pyoro that he's wrapped up work in the shop for today and heads off to the Adventurers Guild. They both wish him a safe trip. As he leaves, Miyabi tells him to watch out for the smash boar. In the forest, Ryoma says to himself that hunting herbs is the best he can do. Well, he tells his slimes that it's time to get to work. Ryoma harvests some stash, and a few minutes later, a limar bird delivers Aaliyah's letter to Ryoma. Ryoma is glad she wrote back so soon. In the letter, she congratulates Ryoma on starting his second shop. She mentions that she told her family all about it, and they were all so happy to hear his business was going well. She also says that he should start many branches like this, maybe one in the royal capital as well. Maybe with that, she'd be able to see him again sooner. She says she understands that with his business growing, he will have a lot more work to do, but he should take care of his health. Shortly after reading the letter, Ryoma sees the smash boar run after a man and a lady in the forest. On seeing the smash boar, Ryoma quickly gets a bow and some arrows from the dimension home and hits some arrows at the smash boar, but it does not affect it due to its thick hide. From there, Ryoma knew it would be tough to finish the smash boar with arrows. He tells both the man and the lady to keep running while he faces the smash boar. He attacks the smash boar with his fists and bare legs. Then, he finishes it with an accelerated fist hit. Both the man and the lady thank Ryoma for saving us, but they have their friend who is injured. Ryoma tells them that he can cast healing magic, so they should bring their injured friend to him. While they are out to bring their friend, he brings out the bloody slime to drain the dead smash boar so that the meat can be sold as said by Mr. Pyoro. The bloody slime drains the blood in no time. They arrived with their friend, and Ryoma could tell that she must have suffered a direct hit from that charge. A few of her bones are broken, and some of the bruises are bad. Ryoma heals their third friend with his healing magic. They want to repay Ryoma for saving them with the cash on them and repay him properly when they get back to the guild. They explain to him that they ran into the smash boar while on a job collecting herbs. Well, Ryoma accepts the money they have with them, but he'd like it if they could help him carry the smash boar back to town. He also tells them that he's out here to collect herbs, so he needs them to testify to the guild that he didn't selfishly hunt the smash boar, but he encountered it accidentally and hunted it out of necessity. From there, they could tell that he was also in rank E like them. He then introduces himself as Ryoma Takebayashi. The three of them also introduce themselves as Billy, Luri, and Ken. Luri and Ken are surprised that Ryoma took the smash boar down easily, but Ryoma tells them that it was just a lucky punch with a smile on his face. Mr. Pyoro is surprised to see Ryoma arrive back at his shop with the smash boar. He says to him that he was joking, and Ryoma hunted it. Miyabi is somehow not happy that Ryoma comes back with the smash boar. She tells Ryoma that she told him to run away when he sees the monster. Then, a man from the Adventurers Guild arrives at the scene to tell them that there were eyewitness reports of a smash boar being carried into this establishment. He says hunting dangerous monsters without an officially licensed job to do so is prohibited as a measure to protect lower rank adventurers. He asks Ryoma to explain what happened. Ryoma explained, and the three people he saved testified to it. On hearing this, Miyabi calms down and considers it a good excuse, and the man from the Adventurers Guild says Ryoma is not in violation of any regulations. Then, the man tells Ryoma to take the tusk to the guild as proof of the kill. They can pay its bounty. Ryoma apologizes for causing trouble, and the man leaves. The three people also leave after the man leaves. Then, Mr. Pyoro asks Ryoma if he's willing to sell all of the meat to them, and Ryoma answers yes, but he'd like a few pieces for himself to eat as well. As Mr. Pyoro intends to butcher the smash boar, they notice that it's not bleeding, so they report it to Mr. Pyoro immediately. Ryoma tells them that he drained the blood, but Mr. Pyoro says he can't drain it completely. Ryoma tells him that the bloody slime drained exclusively. Mr. Pioro asks Ryoma if he could sell him the slimes. The meat comes out super high quality due to perfect blood drain by the bloody slime. This is more sales for Mr. Pioro. Ryoma tells him that without a tamer, it could cause issues. Besides, he only has one of them. Mr. Pioro asks if he can slice it in half and share, and Miyabi tells her father to stop making a fool out of himself. Mr. Pioro says he was joking, but Miyabi tells him the look on his face was no joke. The next day, Ryoma comes from the Adventurers Guild back to Mr. Pioro's place. Miyabi asks him how it went, and Ryoma replies that he got paid for the herb collection and for hunting the smash boar. Mr. Pioro comes in to ask Ryoma the kind of food they can prepare with the smash boar meat so they can have it for lunch. Ryoma inspects the meat and deduces that it looks like pork, so it should taste like it. Ryoma tells him that there's something he wants to try, and Mr. Pioro tells him that he can make use of any ingredients in the store. Miyabi says the least he can do is help Ryoma while he cooks. Ryoma prepares them Giger smash boar and boar soup. He tells them to eat it before it gets cold. Mr. Pioro and Miyabi like the meal, and Ryoma is so glad that he was able to make ginger pork properly. The next day, Mr. Pioro cooks the same meal and puts it up as business so people can patronize him. Ryoma and the slimes are done with the big things in the shop, and then they begin with the smaller items. His employees arrive at the new shop, and Ryoma tells them that once he finishes up the smaller details, they should be ready to open. The employees like the new shop location, as it has lots of shops around. Ryoma asks about 3 new people who come with his employees, and Carla tells him that they're the new employees they hired for the second shop. 2 clerks will perform bodyguard duty, and 1 chef. Ryoma welcomes the new 3 employees and introduces himself to them. He tells them that as they build this shop, if they feel like something is uncomfortable or difficult, they shouldn't hesitate to let either Miss Carla or him know. One of the 3 says they spent a day training on the job at the Gimmel store, but it was so comfortable. The other 2 say that they will try their best, no matter what. Ryoma thanks Carla for finding these great employees. Carla asks Ryoma to list out the things they need to do to open the shop. Everyone gets to work to finish up the shop setting as soon as possible. Mr. Pioro and Miyabi came checking, and they noticed that the last 3 days of preparation were super fast. Mr. Pioro says the pace at which the shop is coming up is unbelievable. Mr. Pioro says if one looks carefully, one would see that Ryoma's at the center of all work. Mr. Pioro admits that Ryoma is truly a talented businessman. Ryoma looks at his shop and says one thing he knows is that in his previous world, time just passed, but not here. He says the people here who interact with him give meaning to the flow of time. After all the effort incurred in the setup and arrangement of the shop, Bamboo Forest Laundry Services' second shop is now open and off to a good start. Ryoma writes to Ilya that his second shop is now open. Ryoma says to himself that the experience of running the first shop feels like he's able to run the business smoothly from the start. People start patronizing them. At the end of the first day, Ryoma thanks his employees for the day's work and tells them to continue the great work the next day. Ryoma says to himself that he feels comfortable relying on his employees. The next morning, all the employees are awake early as they hear from Carla that Ryoma is leaving in the morning. Mr. Pioro says as the second shop is off to a good start, it makes sense to go back to Gomel and think about what to do from here on. He tells Ryoma to get more shops going and wishes him good luck. Carla tells Ryoma not to worry about them over here. One of 3 new employees tells Ryoma that they will learn to run this business as soon as possible, put the slimes to good use, and make the business boom. Ryoma tells everyone to take care of themselves. Miyabi also tells Ryoma not to push himself too hard either. She says she doesn't know when she'll see him again, but he should not die or anything. Ryoma says to himself that he can't die yet. He wants to study the slimes more, and he's curious about the heirlooms. He also has a promise with Ilya. He then asks Miyabi if she is attending the academy in the royal capital starting this year, because there's a favor he'd like to ask her. He tells her that a girl named Iliaria will be attending the academy as well this year. He says it'd be nice and great if Miyabi could be nice to her. Miyabi agrees and says as long as she's not hanging out with the wrong crowd. Ryoma tells Miyabi to send Elia a message. Good luck. On Ryoma's way back to Gimmel, he says to himself that when he gets back to Gimmel, he should look up the great forest of Schluss. Then, a limor bird delivers Elia's message to him. In the letter, she asks about Ryoma's life in the new town, and she says she's starting a new life in the royal capital this year, so she's trying to prepare herself by referencing the content of Ryoma's letter. She says she's concentrating more on training her taming magic. She says she'd like to work hard to catch up to Ryoma. At Gimmel, Ryoma gives Mr. Surge a package of rare condiments as a souvenir to appreciate his support. Mr. Surge tells Ryoma that if he had stayed a day later, he wouldn't have been able to receive the souvenir in person. He says he plans to spend a week in the town of Celeban to visit the magic item market. He shows Ryoma a toy car-like object which he called a scale model of a Magimobile. Mr. Surge powers the object with magic. He also shows him gears which are imbued with a neutral magic called spin. It spins in a set direction once some magic power is put into it, and it is often used as a power source. Mr. Surge says the Magimobile is a carriage-sized vehicle that people can ride in. He tells Ryoma that there's a large race held in the capital every year. Mr. Siege shows Ryoma some items in which if he combines them, he can create a new magic item without using any magic himself, and the magic items that he can use as ingredients are also available at the magic item market. Callum is sorry to report to him that the cleaner slime ate charcoal. He explains that he placed the charcoal that Ryoma said has good effects in the laundry room, and the cleaner slime ate it, and since then, it gradually started eating less laundry grime. Callum apologizes again, since she was the one tasked with taking care of the shop. Ryoma tells him not to worry, and that cleaner slime is about to evolve. Ryoma tells him that when a slime evolves, it sometimes gains new abilities and dietary habits. He says he will take care of the particular slime for now, and Callum should let him know if he sees any other similar slimes. Callum says he will keep a record of what the slimes eat too. Elia writes to Ryoma again that she wonders what kind of abilities the new slime will get. She says once the slime evolves, he should let her know. She also says the story about the magic item market was interesting. She says she's never visited the market before, but if Ryoma does, he should write to her about it. She says she's looking forward to hearing about it. The next day, Ryoma informs Callum that he's thinking about going back to his hometown. He says he left behind some heirlooms that his grandparents left him. He says he wants to prepare for the trip and he'd like to focus more on his work as an adventurer from now on. Callum says he will take care of the shop. Then, he asks Ryoma where his hometown is, and Ryoma says it's in the Great Forest of Schluss. Callum is surprised and tells Ryoma that he's surprised that he is alive. Callus knows about the Great Forest of Schluss. He says it's a dense forest filled with countless monsters. It's one of the most dangerous places in the world, so it's a miracle that Ryoma made it out alive. Ryoma says he plans to raise his rank as an adventurer and go back the proper way, so it will be a while before he goes out there. Callum says if that's his decision, he won't stop him, but he should make sure he prepares as well as he possibly can. Ryoma thanks him and tells him that he's going to go to the guild to discuss it. Ryoma asks if it's alright to ask Callum to take care of the shop, and Callum replies, yes, he will take care of the shop. Then, he wishes Ryoma a safe trip. Ryoma visits the Adventurers Guild to do more adventurer work since his business is running smoothly now. Maylene is about to check for work Ryoma could take when they hear some guys picking on a new guild attendant. Maylene moves to the spot to handle the situation. Then, she introduces the new guild attendant to Ryoma Pena, who she started here with last week. Pena introduces herself properly, likewise, Ryoma. Maylene asks Ryoma if she could put Paena in charge of his issue. She wants her to get more experience quickly. Ryoma agrees to that. They get a space, and Paena asks Ryoma to tell them what he needs. Ryoma tells her that it's about his activities moving forward. Ryoma says he's currently at rank E, and he'd like to raise it to C. He brings out a paper to show them he's looking for jobs that involve the monsters in the paper. Paena looks and can tell what monsters they are. She lists Treant, Mad Salamander, and Caliph Monkey, and she says some of the monsters aren't suited for rank E adventurers. Ryoma says he'll take those on as he raises his rank, but he'd like to get information on them beforehand. Paena asks him how much information he needs, and Ryoma replies that he'd like to learn basic information, like their biology and their habitat, with the latest information she has. He also mentions he'd like to learn about the monsters in the area of the Great Forest of Schluss. Maylene asks if he wants to go to the forest, and he answers yes with reasons. Then, Maylene apologizes for speaking out before she learns his reasons. Maylene tells him that as long as he's willing to prepare properly, they have no right to stop him. Maylene tells Paena to prepare the contract. Maylene says she doesn't know Ryoma is from that forest. Ryoma asks if she knows the place well, and she says yes. She says that compared to other kids of Ryoma's age, Ryoma's abilities are way too high. It's natural if Ryoma is from that forest. Paena gives Maylene to take a look at what she prepared. Maylene looks and commends her. Then Paena tells Ryoma to confirm the content and sign if everything is in order. Ryoma signs and Paena hands over a guild card as proof of exchange to Ryoma. She tells him not to lose it because he'll need it coming back for the item. In their presence, Ryoma keeps the guild card in his item box. Maylene asks if Ryoma will be taking on any job today because it would help them a bit, and Ryoma replies that he doesn't mind if it's a bit tough. Then, Ryoma asks if there is something short-term that might let me raise his rank quickly. Hyena quickly brings the parcel delivery to Caliban. Ryoma asks them if the time is as soon as possible, and Hyena says yes. They send the carriage out before realizing that they forgot to load the parcel, so their desired delivery date is noon, the day after tomorrow. Hyena tells Ryoma that she noticed he was using space magic earlier, so he could make it there on time. Ryoma thanks her for her solid service. Maylene says Hyena is very good at her job, and that's why she keeps telling her to be less timid. Ryoma is so ready to go to Caliban, the town that Mr. Siege was talking about, where the magic item market is taking place. He considers this as an opportunity to check it out, and he tells both Hyena and Maylene that he will take the job. Ryoma finds his way to Caliban, and he gets a card from the guards at the entrance of the town. He notices a lot of crowds, and he asks the guards about it. One of the guards tells him that the market is starting tomorrow, and this upcoming market is for magic items. The guard tells him that there are 6 markets every year. The guard tells him that many food stalls are coming too, so Ryoma should enjoy his stay. Ryoma gets to Dainome's magic item workshop, where he wants to deliver a parcel. From his item box, he brings out the parcel to be delivered. He lets himself in and continues to say hello until a man comes out from the inner store. On seeing Ryoma, the man wonders what a kid is doing here. Ryoma says he's on a job from the Adventurers Guild to deliver a parcel, and he brings a paper for the man to sign. The man is glad as he wasn't expecting the parcel to get to him on time. Ryoma wants to take his leave, but the man tells him to hold up to offer him a cup of tea. Ryoma drinks it and says it tastes more like coffee than tea. Ryoma likes it, so he asks what the kind of tea is, and the man says it's the root of a flower named Dante, and it's supposed to be good for Ryoma's health. While the man and Ryoma exchange greetings, Mr. Sage enters. Both Mr. Sage and Ryoma are surprised to see each other at Caliban. The man asks Ryoma if he knows Mr. Sage, and he replies yes. He gets his support in many ways at Gimel. Mr. Sage says no. They're the ones getting support from Ryoma. Mr. Sage asks Ryoma what brings him to Caliban, and he replies that he is delivering a package as an adventurer. Ryoma asks Mr. Sage the same question, and Mr. Sage says that this is one of the magic item workshops that he frequents, so he's come to say hello before the market begins. Mr. Sage apologizes to Mr. Denome for not greeting him earlier. Mr. Denome and Ryoma introduce themselves to each other. Mr. Denome shows both of them the latest Magimobile. He says he's improved the engine and lightened the chassis. Ryoma says to himself, if it's about the Magimobiles, they must be discussing hobby stuff, so he should stay out of it. Ryoma points at a carriage and asks if it's a magic item too, but Mr. Denome replies no, it's just a normal carriage. He says a neighbor asked him to repair it. Mr. Siege says it's rare. Denome used to turn down all non-magic item-related jobs. Denome says he collected the job because he needed money for his grandson. Mr. Siege asks if it's a gift. He could lend his aid if he'd like. Denome says it's tuition. He wants to send his grandson to the academy. Ryoma seems to be interested in what Denome is saying. Denome says the reason is that his grandson might be a great genius. He shows them what gears his 4-year-old grandson made. Outside Denome's magic item workshop, Ryoma tells Mr. Siege that he couldn't turn the gears down, given how the conversation was going. So he asks Mr. Siege what he can do with it. Mr. Siege tells Ryoma to keep it, that he might disappoint Mr. Denome if he tries to give it back. Then, Mr. Siege asks Ryoma what he plans to do for today, and Ryoma says he'll need to find a place to stay. Ryoma says since he's here, he's thinking of staying to see the market before heading back. In that case, Mr. Siege says he could introduce Ryoma to the inn he's staying at, and he can show him around the market tomorrow. Ryoma is glad to hear that, and he quickly thanks Mr. Siege for the offer. Mr. Siege takes Ryoma to the inn where he's staying, and he tells Ryoma that he has several more places to visit, but he'll be back in the evening so that they can have dinner together. In the room, Ryoma says to himself that he has more time before Mr. Siege arrives, so he'll try making something with the gears. Not long after, Mr. Siege comes back to the room to call Ryoma to let them go and have dinner. While they wait for the dinner, Mr. Siege asks Ryoma if he is working on a magic item, and he replies, yes, with a smile on his face. Mr. Siege asks him to show him if he doesn't mind, and he brings out a music box. Ryoma says it plays music, like a toy. Mr. Siege is so attracted to the music box, as he hasn't had anything like it before. Mr. Siege says there are magic items that are musical instruments, but nothing that automatically plays music. Mr. Siege tells Ryoma that many nobles are very fond of toys like this, so if he could put some effort into its appearance, it would sell. He says it would be a waste not to bring this idea to fruition. Ryoma says he has to take on adventuring jobs, as well as take care of his shop. They couldn't continue the conversation as the waiters brought steaks with herb butter for dinner. After dinner, Mr. Siege thanks Ryoma for the interesting item, while Ryoma thanks Mr. Siege for the food. Mr. Siege then referred back to their discussion earlier and said if Ryoma is willing to sell them, he should probably commission someone. Ryoma says that is thoughtful, but who to ask? Mr. Siege says he has several ideas, but Ryoma should ask Mr. Denome, as he already likes him. Ryoma asks if it wouldn't be a burden to Mr. Denome, but Mr. Siege says Mr. Denome should be fine. He has 3 apprentices. He says to think of it, Mr. Denome is going through the issue of his grandson's tuition, so he'd appreciate any offers for a job. At the very least, Mr. Siege says he'd bring it up with Mr. Denome tomorrow if Ryoma would like him to do it. Ryoma says he could do that. Later that night, Ryoma writes to Aaliyah about his visit to Caliban Town. He says it's the town where the magic item market that he mentioned earlier is taking place, and the market begins tomorrow. He says he wonders what he'd find at the market, but he will let her know in his next letter. It's Magic Item Market Day, and different people are advertising and selling their stuff to their customers who might be interested, such as the item box bow that can take 300 arrows, and sharp objects that cut well and make work efficient. Mr. Siege takes Ryoma around the place until they finally get to Mr. Denome's place. Mr. Siege tells Mr. Denome that there's a business proposition that he'd like to discuss in depth, and he says they could have the discussion inside. As they walk inside, Denome's grandson, Fidele, grabs Ryoma's hand and asks him who he is, and Ryoma introduces himself to Fidele. Mr. Denome tells them that Fidele is the grandson he told them about. Fidele asks Ryoma if they can play, and Mr. Denome tells Ryoma to take care of Fidele in the meantime, while he talks to Mr. Sage. Fidele tells Ryoma to let them play word connection. He starts with M for the magic item. Ryoma says M for myself. Fidele says F for Fidele. Ryoma says E for egg. While Fidele thinks of what he could say for G, Ryoma says to himself that Fidele doesn't seem to be enjoying this. Even if he wants to play outside, he can't just wander off into the crowd. Maybe there aren't any toys for him to play with here. Fidele says G for glass. Ryoma says S for sand. Fidele says D for doorknob. Ryoma asks if he could borrow a trash bucket, and one of the shop workers says yes. Ryoma makes an item called Begoma. After Mr. Siege explained the music box deal to Mr. Denome said he accepted the terms for the commission as Mr. Siege suggested. Mr. Denome likes it and says he can't wait to work on it. Mr. Siege tells Ryoma that Mr. Denome accepts the music box deal, and Ryoma thanks Mr. Denome. Mr. Denome tells him not to mention since they'll all be making money, then it's a fair deal. Mr. Denome joins them in playing Begoma. Ryoma asks Mr. Donime if he has played Begoma, but he replies no. He only copies Ryoma. He tells Ryoma that he's lived as a craftsman for a very long time, and even this is easy once he's seen it in action. Fidele is happy for his grandfather. Ryoma says he will set off the Begoma for them in case Fidele wants to play with Grandpa anytime. Fidele is happier, and Mr. Denome thanks Ryoma. Ryoma writes to Aaliyah about his experience at the magic item market. He says he saw many interesting things, but the most memorable image was that of the smiles of Mr. Donime and Fidele. Ryoma leaves Caliban for Gimel. Ryoma gets to his place at Gimel late in the night, and he's about to go to sleep when he notices that the slime that ate the charcoal is starting to evolve. The slime evolved, and Ryoma did a monster appraisal. It's a deodorant slime, and the skills are to displace odor, deodorize, resist odor, absorb odor. It's similar to the cleaner slime, but more focused on odor. Then, Ryoma furthers his research on it. Ryoma shows up early in the morning at his first shop, without sleeping at all. He's come to run some experiments using the fluid produced by the deodorant slime, which should absorb odors. Ryoma packaged the cotton dipped in the odor absorption solution inside different bags. Callum asks if he wants to keep the bags in different areas of the shop, and Ryoma says the odor absorption limit differs depending on the amount of solution. Callum says he respects Ryoma's passion for research. Ryoma tells Callum that he wants to ask around if anyone can help with the experiment. Callum tells him to go home as soon as possible to get some rest, but Ryoma says he will try. At home, Ryoma is trying to make some tasty charcoal before he goes to sleep. Ryoma believes that the more the slimes eat, the faster they multiply. Then, he looks deeply and notices that the metal and iron slimes can maintain their metallic properties while changing shape. He then makes a wood sharpener from the metal slimes to sharpen woods that might help him in the great forest of Schluss. The next morning, Ryoma gets to the shop in the morning, and Callum asks if he gets to sleep at all. Ryoma says he did get a full hour's sleep. Callum tells him to take care of his health. All of a sudden, Mia calls Ryoma as she busts into the shop. She says she wants more of the smell cleaning bags right away. Ryoma thanks Mia for helping with the experiment. Mia says she put it in the trash heap the day before yesterday, and the smell was gone until this morning. Ryoma did an appraisal of the bag with Mia, and he says the thing absorbed the maximum amount of smell. and lost its effect. Ryoma tells Mia that he will get her more odor absorption solution and also a sample of a new deodorizing solution. Ryoma tells her to place both in the same place as before. Mia tells Ryoma that she wants to see this completed as soon as possible, so she will help in any way she can. She says Ryoma's new item will greatly improve the lives of Cat Beastkin, then she leaves. Ryoma says to himself that he hopes he can get this to market soon by gathering data like this. Suddenly he hears the sounds from the breakdown of a cart of some group of people, and he helps fix the cart with the help of his slimes. From what Ryoma could see in the cart, he asks them if they haul trash as a job, but the sharp-mouthed one among them says he shouldn't underestimate them. Two among them are adventurers. The two adventurers are in rank G, while 3 kids can't do any real work yet, but carrying trash to the disposal facility is worth some money. Ryoma brings out a smell cleaning bag from his item box and places it in their trash. One of them notices that the garbage smell is gone. Ryoma tells them that he needs their help with an experiment to help know how long the smell cleaning bag lasts before the effect wears off. Ryoma introduces himself and says they could contact him at his laundry service. The two adventurers among them introduce themselves as Beck and Whist. They thank Ryoma, but he tells them not to mention him. Beck tells Ryoma to come with him so that he can show him a good deal. Beck brings Ryoma to the church to do community service activities and gets snacks once every 2 months. From there, the god of magic and academics named Fernabelia summons Ryoma to his realm, but Ryoma wonders why he was being summoned when he didn't even pray. Fernabelia tells Ryoma that he'll be able to go back once the time is right, so he may relax while he's with him. Ryoma could tell that Fernabelia must have been the god Takun mentioned, the one who was hard to track down. He asks Ryoma if he's alright with him asking him questions, and Ryoma agrees. Fernabelia asks what Ryoma's original world was like, then he asks what his favorite food is, and what Ryoma's opinion is on academics, on romance. Every shelf in the Fernabelia's library begins to move. Ryoma says he hasn't even answered the first question yet. Fernabelia appreciates his cooperation and says as Ryoma surmised when he reacted to his words, his heart already had the answers. He apologizes to Ryoma for testing him and also commends him for being unique. He says not all transfers are like him. He says others misuse their power and commit crimes, but Ryoma seems to sympathize with his point. Fernabelia tells Ryoma that those who casually make absolute assurances are the least trustworthy. Time is up, and Fernabelia asks Ryoma one last question, which is Ryoma's opinion on this world. Ryoma says that from the bottom of his heart, he's glad that he came, and then he gets back to the church. Beck tells Ryoma not to slack off. He's brought him out here for a good deal. As they clean, Ryoma says to himself that if he had brought out the scavengers and cleaners, this would have been done instantly, but he will use his own hands this time. After cleaning, Beck says there's one more good thing before they get their snacks. He says after they finish cleaning, those who want it can get combat training. Whist adds that someone from the Adventurers Guild comes to teach them so that when they grow up, they can live on their own. Ryoma is surprised that the Adventurers Guild does that type of thing. Not too long, the person from the Adventurers Guild comes, and it happens to be Worgen. Beck and Whist are surprised when Worgen tells them that Ryoma is a rank E adventurer. Then, the training begins. From the way Whist fights, Ryoma says he can't score any hits, but he's strong. At the same time, he can't believe that Whist is the same age as him with his huge body. From the way Beck fights too, Ryoma says he is extremely athletic and nimble. Ryoma orders the slimes to help the 3 kids train softly. Worgen tells Ryoma that the slimes seem to make good practice partners for the kids. Ryoma and Worgen fight while Beck and Whist watch them, and they begin to wonder who Ryoma is. At the end of the training section, they thank Ryoma and hope they become an adventurer like him someday. As they leave, Whist says he will let Ryoma know about the odor absorption experiment. Worgen asks Ryoma if he'd like to become an instructor at the guild because he has what it takes, and even the slimes are great training partners. Ryoma appreciates the offer, but he says it's a bit too much for him. He says he'd need to study how to teach someone before he can start doing it. Ryoma says he's impressed to see Worgen teach those guys. Worgen tells him that it's the least he could do. He tells Ryoma that the church is run by 2 nuns, but he and many other adults in town help the people in many ways. Worgen also says Ryoma was on the helper side today, and he thanks him for his help. Ryoma is glad to hear that, and he thanks Worgen for such sweet words. Aaliyah writes to Ryoma again that she's studying how to make sweets now. She says once she goes to the academy in the royal capital and makes friends, she wants to make cakes to eat with them. She says Ryoma should also have a taste of her cake someday too. Aaliyah writes to Ryoma that she's moving to a dormitory in the capital soon, and this is quite her first time moving and living alone. She says she's a bit scared, but she always gets her emotional support from Mr. Ryoma, so she'll be fine. She says she knows there's a festival coming up in Ryoma's town soon. She says he should enjoy being alone with the people at his shop. Ryoma, who receives the letter, says it'd be nice if he could send her a gift. He remembers what Carla tells him, that a gift of clothing is possible between close people. It symbolizes the wish to make their new life go well. Ryoma doesn't know how to pick clothes, nor even know what styles are in vogue. Then, he thinks of flowers, gift cards, and gold coins. Finally, he thinks of making a handmade soap. Then he improves the foam, feel, and other effects and changes the composition. He comes up with bird-like handmade soap and the like. Then he wonders what festive Elia is talking about in her letter. When Ryoma gets to shop, he asks Callum if he knows about any festival coming up soon. Callum couldn't figure out any festival, but someone who'd lived in this town for a long time might know. Ryoma says he knew one who grew up in this town, which is Mr. Dolce. Mr. Dolce says a festival around this time is the Founding Festival, a festival celebrating the founding of this town. Ryoma asks what happens during the festival, and Mr. Dolce tells him that a band of traveling entertainers come and perform, and many stalls open up along the main street. Ryoma asks if all the shops participate, but Mr. Dolce replies no. Anyone can apply to open a stall, but it's not mandatory. Ryoma says to himself that if their employees are interested, it might be worth a try. Mr. Dolce adds that, after the festival, the residents sometimes do a town-wide cleaning activity. Ryoma says happily that his shop gets a lot of support from this town, so he'd love to help out. Mr. Dolce says that's all he knows, and Ryoma thanks him. Ryoma tells Mr. Dolce that the people at his shop are all from out of town, including himself. Callum is from Luiam Town. Mr. Fei and Miss Li Ling are from a country called Gilmar, and Miss Selma worked at a different inn in a different town. Miss Jane, Miss Fina, and Miss Maria are all from the same village. Ryoma is glad to have a local in touch with the community like Mr. Dolce. Callum calls Ryoma to tell him that Carla just sent word from Lena. Ryoma asks if something happened at the second shop, and Callum replies, yes, the cleaner slimes at the second shop suddenly start to multiply rapidly. The slimes were so many that Mr. Kalkin and the others were not able to enter into a contract with all of them. Ryoma quickly finds his way to his second shop in the town of Lenaf, and on getting there, he meets a lot of customers in the queue. Then, he enters to see a lot of cleaner slimes in the shop. His workers report that there are 75 non-contracted slimes, and Ryoma completes the taming contract of all 75. His workers already investigated why the slimes multiplied so fast. In their investigation, they found out that the cleaner slimes stocked up on a lot of nutrition, so they started making more deodorizing solutions than they could see. His workers report that they put a limit to the deodorizing solution production, but then the slimes began to multiply. Ryoma says, unless they let the slimes spend some of their energy, they'll continue to multiply. Mr. Kalkin says they will just discard the excess, then it should prevent them from multiplying. Ryoma likes the idea and tells them to proceed with the idea. Ryoma is glad to know that his workers identified the cause and came up with a good solution. Ryoma spent the whole night with his workers, discussing slimes with them. The next morning, Ryoma visits Mr. Pioro before he leaves. On getting to Mr. Pioro's place, he smells a bad smell from a corner. Mr. Pioro tells him that some of his younger staff brought in some happy fermented fish. Mr. Pioro says they say it makes great preserved food, but the smell gets everywhere. Ryoma says to himself that it's like Kusaya from back on Earth. Mr. Pioro asks Ryoma if he can do something about the smell, because it's chasing their customers away. Ryoma performs his experiment, which he calls deodorant slime to absorb the smell. Mr. Pioro asks if the deodorant slime is from a deodorizing solution that Ryoma sells, and Ryoma replies, yes, the deodorizing solution isn't good for dampening the smell over a large area, but the deodorant slime absorbs all the smell, and it's all gone. Ryoma says the effect should only last about a day or so. Ryoma gives Mr. Pioro a bag of the odor absorption solution. Mr. Pioro says he'll have to repay him somehow, and Ryoma asks if he would let him know how long the odor absorption effect lasts. It would help him a bit if he could get the experiment results. Mr. Pioro tells Ryoma to take a barrel of shapaya. He tells Ryoma that when traveling down a path with many monsters, he should just open it and he will send the monsters running. Ryoma thanks him, and he wishes Ryoma a safe trip. Ryoma says he wants to say hi to Miss Miyabi before he leaves, but Mr. Pioro tells him that Miyabi is on her way to the royal capital. Mr. Pioro says if she had left a little later, he would have had her take some shapaya too. The shapaya helped Ryoma make his trip home safely, and he kept the barrel of shapaya under a table. Ryoma tells Callum that the issues with the cleaner slimes were taken care of. Callum reports that Mr. Surge wants to schedule a meeting with Ryoma. Ryoma asks if he should go to the Morgan Trading Company, but Callum says no, he wants to visit Ryoma here. Ryoma tells Callum to tell Mr. Surge that he's available at any time. Callum reports that the village where Miss Fina and the others are from sent a gift. Callum says Miss Jane is on her break now, so she should be able to give her the details. Miss Fina apologizes to Ryoma about the heavy load from her parents. Callum says it's uncommon to see gifts like this, as Fina calls the gifts a bribe. Callum says he thinks some parents want to ensure their children are treated well. Fina says that her parents wanted to thank the manager and the co-workers, so they sent wheat and samisa. Ryoma sniffs the stuff and says it has a pleasant fragrance. It might be a good way to flavor foods. Ryoma says it's like sesame from Earth. Ryoma tells Fina to tell his parents not to send gifts like this. It won't change how she's treated. Ryoma says he's never been a parent before, so he can only imagine, but it must be because they care deeply about Fina. Ryoma says he will pay the proper price for the wheat and samisa, but Fina tries to refuse. Ryoma says they can use it to cook at their shop, so Fina shouldn't worry. Ryoma adds that if they keep sending out inventory for free, it'll only further drive down the prices. Ryoma says he wants to pay the proper price for the sake of the wheat and samisa. Fina thanks Ryoma, but he tells her not to mention it. Ryoma says to himself that he will talk to Mr. Pioro to check if the wheat and samisa are of good quality, then he can start buying from the village. Mr. Serge visits Ryoma in his shop to show him an update on the current situation. He brings a box which contains a music box. Ryoma asks if it is already complete, and Mr. Serge replies, yes, it's just a sample, but they're already lined up to start sales. Mr. Serge tells Ryoma that they're building up general inventory as they speak, and they're thinking of revealing these at the Founder Festival. Ryoma asks him if he plans to sell them at stalls, and Mr. Serge says yes. The tune to be played was provided to them by the Semrio troupe, who will be performing at the festival. Ryoma asks who the Semrio troupe is, and Mr. Serge says they are a group of traveling entertainers, led by a bard. He says leaders are young people, but recently their fame has been rapidly increasing. Ryoma says he'd like to see them, so he asks where they will be performing, and Mr. Serge says they are thinking of using the empty lot next to his establishment. Mr. Serge tells Ryoma that he'd like to borrow part of Ryoma as a green room. Ryoma says the shop might be difficult to use for that purpose, but they have extra rooms in the dormitory if that would be nice. Mr. Serge liked the support, and they all laughed. Ryoma tells Mr. Serge that he gets support all the time, so it's the least he can do to repay her. It's been a long day for Ryoma, and he still thinks of what he has to do next. Suddenly, he hears the voice of Selma, and he quickly rushes to the kitchen. It's the smell of the shapaya. Well, the employees on the floor, while they clean and mob the floor. After cleaning, they all ate samesa, and everyone expressed their own opinion. Ryoma says they first tried using the deodorizing solution from the deodorant slime to remove the smell from the smell of shapaya. It tastes as well, but the smell is still lingering. Selma says, with a bit of flavor added through herbs or something, it might be bitter. Then, they squeeze some oil out of the semis from Fina's village and tame it. Fina says the samisa aroma is working well with it. From the likes of the samisa and shapaya, Ryoma says it's great being able to enjoy food from many different areas. Callum tells Ryoma that it might be a good idea to open a stall. He says at the founding festival, they can provide dishes from different areas to people who come see the performance. Ryoma replies that their business has employees from out of town, so they might be able to make lots of different foods. Callum says people tend to spend more during festivals. Even without that, being able to communicate more with the locals would be a good thing. Ryoma says to himself that if doing a stall will make the people in town happy, it's great. He asks his employees what they think about it because it's extra work outside their usual duties, so he can't force it. Mr. Dolce volunteers to help first. He says he just joined recently, but he wants to stay. Selma says she enjoys her cooking, so she'll help too. Li Ling also says she will show off some Gimar cooking too. Fina asks if they can use the wheat from their village in the stall. Maybe it will help advertise their village. And Callum replies, yes, as long as they can keep it stored fresh until the festival. The whole discussion concludes that they'll be joining the festival as a stall, so they start preparation for the founding festival. Selma makes all the menu items that should sell well at a stall during the founding festival. Ryoma and the other employees are impressed, so they ask Selma to teach them some of the food she prepared, and she promises to reach them later. Mr. Dolce asks Ryoma if they want to sell all of the food, and Ryoma replies that he only asks Selma to make anything she could think of that might sell well. Callum says the Semroid troupe will be arriving tonight at the earliest, so she's thinking they entertain them with the food at the welcoming party tomorrow, so that they can use the Semroid troupe's reaction to narrow down their selections. Ryoma informs the other employees to let them look forward to the party tomorrow. At night, Ryoma tells Callum that he's glad everyone seems to be enjoying the whole thing. Callum says yes, but even if they do narrow down the menu, they'll still be short-staffed because there will be cooking, serving, sometimes directing traffic, and others. Callum suggests they consider hiring some temporary staff. As Ryoma thinks about it, Mr. Serge knocks on the door to tell Ryoma that he's brought him the leader of the Semroid troupe. Ryoma quickly tells them to come in right away. The Semroid troop's leader greets Ryoma with great pleasure. He calls him a sage and introduces himself as Pronounced Semroid, the leader of a troupe of traveling entertainers. Ryoma welcomes him, but tells him to call him by his name. Sage is way too much. Pronounced Semroid is impressed with Ryoma's humility. Then he talks about the music box. He says Ryoma is the inventor of the exquisite little box that plays delicate music, so no other word than sage can capture Ryoma's great wisdom. However, Pronounced Semroid says, if that is what Ryoma desires, then he shall address him as Mr. Ryoma. Ryoma thanks him, but he says he should thank Ryoma because the music box will allow him to distribute his music far and wide. Pronounced Semroid thanks Ryoma so much for providing them with a green room. He apologizes for coming alone instead of the whole Semroid troop. Well, Ryoma tells him to get enough rest because he must be tired from his trip, plus it's very late already. Pronounced says they were on the highest alert during the entire trip to Gimel. Ryoma asks if anything happened, and Pronounced replies, yes. They traveled across the southern plains, and they were told that tunnel ants were seen along the highway. Ryoma asks if the tunnel ants are dangerous monsters, but Mr. Surge replies no, but they specialize in digging the ground to build vast colonies underground. Callum adds that carriages that travel over these colonies could cause a collapse, trapping them. Pronounced says they were able to avoid the disaster though. Mr. Surge says he hopes it doesn't affect the preparation or turnout of the founding festival. Ryoma says the Adventurers Guild must be working on it, but he will head over there tomorrow, and Callum says he will handle the shop and preparations for the party. Pronounced is even more impressive now, and he says the gods must truly love Mr. Ryoma. This brings a smile to Ryoma's face. Ryoma visits the Adventurers Guild the next morning, but he meets Paina as the attendant for the day. Paina asks her what he's come for, and Ryoma says he heard tunnel ants were spotted in the southern plains. Paina checks the job file and hands it over to Ryoma. The job states hunting, colony locating, and digging up the colony. Ryoma asks which of them needs the most help, and Paina says it would be the colony locating the part. Paina says it's a time-consuming job, so it's not popular. Ryoma accepts the colony locating the part job. Ryoma heads to the southern plains with some limor birds to help him find tunnel ant colonies. Ryoma chants Share Sensation to help locate the tunnel ants colonies. Ryoma remembers Paina told him to look for ground that appears to have been dug up, and he eventually found it. Through the special bird, he also sees Beck's group, so he meets with them. They tell Ryoma that they collect herbs and stuff. The other three kids introduce themselves as Finya, Ruth, and Rumil. Beck says they all live in the slums and they grouped up. Ryoma sees the ant carcass, so he affirms that they took up the hunting part of the job. Finya says they want to collect the ants' carapaces. Ruth says they have a big bro in the slums who is apprenticing as an armorer, so if they bring him materials, he can make armor and shields and stuff for cheap. Beck says he thought this would be a good opportunity to get everyone some decent armor, but this is all they got. They couldn't find the ants at all. Ryoma asks if he should take them to the colonies. He only took on the colony location part of the job. They gladly take his help. They get to the dug-up grounds, and Ryoma tells them to stand back while he uses his metal and iron slimes to find the colonies. He turns the slimes into a sword and orders the remaining to line up and move forward slowly. Beck asks Ryoma if he'd be able to locate the colony this way, and Ryoma replies yes. Slimes are good at detecting danger. The slimes find a colony and they move forward to check. To their surprise, a huge ant shows up from the ground hole, but Ryoma defeats it in one slash. Then, more ants come out of the ground, and Ryoma tells them to try their best since they took up hunting jobs, but he will help them if they get in trouble. They're able to knock down the ants with the help of the slimes, and Ryoma finishes the ant with earth needle magic. They kill ants all day, so Beck's group gathers plenty of carapaces till almost night. Ryoma asks if they have enough carapaces, and Beck replies, yes, there's more than enough. They walk out of the place together, and they thank Ryoma for helping them when they get into trouble. Ryoma wanted to push the thanks to them, but Ruth told him that if he hadn't found the colonies in the first place, they wouldn't have been able to hunt so many. Rumin is happy that they'll get paid a lot for getting so many, so they'll have money to enjoy the Foundation Festival. Beck tells her that they won't have that much left over. They're getting 5 full sets of armor. Rumila then says that they should go hunting tomorrow again, so that they'll hunt as many as they did today. Finya says without knowing where the colonies are, they can't do anything. Rumila says Ryoma should come with them then, but Ryoma tells them that he's supposed to put up a stall for the Foundation Festival, so he won't be available to go hunting with them. Late in the night, Callum has been expecting Ryoma, and fortunately, he arrives. But with Beck's group, Callum asks who they are, and Ryoma tells her that he was hoping they could help them with the stall. As Callum looks at them, Mr. Callum comes out of a room and calls Beck. Ryoma asks Mr. Dolce if he knows them. and Mr. Dolce replies yes, he takes care of them sometimes in the slums. Then, Callum says if the manager recommends them and Mr. Dolce knows them, there's no issue. Callum introduces herself to them as the assistant manager of this shop, and the Bex group bows to greet her. Ryoma asks Callum if it would be alright to have them join the party, and Callum says yes. Bex group is shocked. Callum said yes. Callum tells them to come in completely. There's enough food for them. Ryoma informs them that this event is for everyone to get to know each other before the festival. He tells the Bex group that he will discuss their pay later, and tells Mr. Dolce to take care of them and introduce them to others. Then, Ryoma welcomes everyone and gives a short speech. He tells them to all work together to make this a great founding festival, and they all toast. Selma, Fina, and the other ladies prepare the food for everyone, and they all like it. Fernance commends Ryoma for the great party. Ryoma asks him if he likes the food, and he says it exceeded his expectations. Even his troop members are enjoying it. One of the members named Sordio joins them and introduces himself and his niece as sword dancers. Fernance adds that they're masters in the art of slicing things with their swords while dancing. He also says every festival has its fights, so he can call on them if anything happens. Ryoma thanks them and says it's reassuring to have someone like that around. Miyaya also joins them with food in her hand, and she first expresses her good opinion about the food. Sordo tells her to either introduce herself or offer a review. Not both. Fina introduces the food made of samisa to the Bex group, and they enjoy it too. Bex group thanks Ryoma, and Ryoma tells them it's not just him, he received help from the people around him. Rumili insists that Ryoma is awesome, and Finia adds that he's strong too. Whist then asks how is it that Ryoma is strong, but Ryoma asks him what brings about the question, and Whist asks Ryoma if he ever feels scared while fighting. Ryoma remembers Whist was a little bit scared when they were hunting ants. Then he tells Whist that when he's fighting, he concentrates on it, so he doesn't feel scared. Ryoma calms Whist. Then he tells him that he will learn through training and experience. He tells Whist not to rush, but to work hard, and also that he has friends around him. Bex says he can rely on them, and they are relying on him too. As Mr. Dolce takes the Bex group to the dormitory, Ryoma apologizes to Callum for bringing them so suddenly. Callum tells him not to mention that he was the one who suggested that they needed more help. Callum thanks him for taking care of that quickly. Then, Callum says that they've become quite a large group, but when he first came to the Gimel town, he didn't imagine he'd be working with so many people. Later in the night, Ryoma writes to Aaliyah to tell her about the party held today, to get everyone to know each other for the festival. He says there was a huge turnout, and it made him realize that he has so many people in his life now that he can call friends. He also says he knows she has worries about going to the academy in the capital, but he's sure she'll be able to make friends there quickly. Lastly, he wishes her good luck. Aaliyah is finally going to the academy, and her family, especially Reinhardt, tells her to send letters if anything happens, even if it could be every day if she wants. Reinbach tells Aaliyah that he's sure that being the daughter of the Duke would attract some unwanted attention, but she should be able to handle it. Sibas adds that Aaliyah's judgment of character is impeccable, so there's nothing to worry about. They all wish her a safe trip to her new life at the academy in the royal capital. She waves at them as the cart leaves their sight. In the cart, she receives Ryuma's letter, and she promises to do her best. At the academy in the royal capital, the teacher talks about the basics of magic, which he taught the students in the last class, so she expected the students to feel the magic power in them. She says those who haven't felt the magic power will be doing the same training today, while those who have already finished that part will move on to the next step, which is to control the magic power in their body, to expel it outwards. After the class, while walking along the academy walkway, Ilya says to herself that she has only spent just 1 month in the academy, but she's bored because all the lessons are the basic things she's learned before coming to the academy, and she feels like the title of Duke's daughter seems to push people away from her. Suddenly, a voice asks her if something is wrong, and she looks back and sees a guy. On seeing that it was Ilya Jamil, the guy introduces himself as Michelle, the eldest daughter of Count Wildan, and quickly apologizes to Ilya for addressing her like that in the first place. Ilya tells him that their status doesn't matter here. Ilya asks if he could address him as Miss Michelle, and he agrees. Ilya also tells him not to call her my lady, but Ilya, and then he agrees as well. Then, he asks what Ilya is doing out here all alone, and Ilya replies that the lessons here are basic things she already knew. Michelle tells her that he feels the same way, but he mostly pretends to take lessons sometimes. He also says she's trying to avoid getting involved in weird fractions. He ends up not having anyone to talk to during breaks. Ilya is surprised to hear this because he thinks Michelle is popular. Michelle says when he first arrived, several female students had the wrong idea, and he got their attention for a while, but he's not very social. Ilya asks him if that's why he's here today, but he replies that he's here to experiment. He shows Aaliyah a paper on his experiment, and Aaliyah asks him if he is an alchemist. Michelle says no, he's studying a form of magic called magic circle science. Michelle explains that it's a very minor field of study that branched off from alchemy. He says the only teacher who teaches the course quit last year, so he has no choice but to study it on his own. He says to Aaliyah that he's impressed that she knows about alchemy and magic circles. Michelle says the general public seems to have misconceptions about alchemy, but she doesn't seem to have the negative impression that others do. Michelle says he'd like to learn more about alchemy from Aaliyah, but Aaliyah tells him that she doesn't know anything about alchemy either. She has only met an alchemist before, and that's the extent of her knowledge. Well, Michelle says he will begin his experiment now, while Aaliyah watches. He explains every step he takes, but he says he doesn't know what pattern to draw to get the most efficiency, and that's why he has to keep experimenting. Aaliyah asks him why he's doing this research, and he replies that it's because it's interesting. He says if a field lacks research, then there's more to discover. From what he said, it reminds Aaliyah of Ryoma in a way. Michelle tells Aaliyah to step back because he doesn't know the kind of reaction to this experiment. He performed the magic and a lady who had been watching screams from where she was. Michelle quickly apologizes to the lady for startling her, and the lady also apologizes for interfering. Michelle recognizes her as Miyabi from the same class. Miyabi tells Aaliyah that she has a message from an acquaintance, and this makes Aaliyah curious because she wonders who could have sent a message through Miyabi. Miyabi says it's from a boy, but she doesn't want to start a weird rumor about the Duke's daughter. Aaliyah tells her to speak freely. Miyabi says the boy's name is Ryoma, who she met through her father. She says when she mentions that she will be attending the academy, he asks her to send a message to a girl named Elia. Elia asks her what Ryoma said, and she says good luck. Miyabi says Ryoma seemed to be worried about Elia. Elia thinks Ryoma must have set up an opportunity for her to meet Miyabi. She thanks Miyabi for the message, and then asks if they could make the best of the opportunity to become friends. Miyabi asks if she's sure because she's not someone special enough to be friends with the Duke's daughter. Aaliyah says status doesn't matter here perhaps. It would be sad to spend her days here at the academy without friends. Miyabi agrees to be her friend, and Michelle also joins them. Michelle asks both of them what they think about the three of them forming a team for practical training, because he wants to be in a team with people he gets along with. He says the existing teams are mostly based on status, all nobles or all commoners. Elia says the three of them should have a very fun time, and they all smile. Miyabi says teams are supposed to have 5 or 6 people, so they'll have to find 2 or 3 more people, but she wonders if they can find someone who doesn't care about status, like both Michelle and Aaliyah. Michelle says he knows one person named Ryla Clifford, the eldest daughter of Baron Clifford. Miyabi says if she remembers correctly, Ryla's family used to be a family of knights and was granted the status of Baron through their successes. Michelle says Ryla is very proud of herself and can be a bit fussy about rules, but she never looks down on others based on status and is happy to acknowledge the talents that people show. They attend Rayla's fight with a guy, and the guy surrenders after a long fight. Michelle calls Ryla to talk with her. They find a space to have a conversation about the group, and she agrees to join their team. Miyabi asks her if she's sure, because she heard she's the top of the class in swordsmanship and sought after by many teams. Ryla says she did receive a few invitations, but she doesn't want to join anyone who mistakes the honor of nobility with boastful pride. Elias says they'd like to have one more person join them. Miyabi says she knows a person, but in combat training, out of the 4 of us, only Rayla can fight at close range. Rayla says it'd be ideal to have one more close-range ally. Unfortunately, Miyabi says the girl she thought of is a scout type who's good at traps and covert actions and those types of things. She shows them the girl, quite opposite them in the fight stage space. Miyabi says her name is Kanan, a commoner. She says she's skilled with her fingers and good with crafts, and she wants to become a craftsman. Rayla says if her personality is good, then she has no issues. Kanan seems to just be rejected by a team. Miyabi meets with Kanan to ask her if she'd like to join her team, and Kanan says she'd be happy to join her team. Miyabi tells her to come and talk to the members of the team. Kanan introduces herself as Kanan Schuzer to the team members. She says she doesn't want to sound like she's boasting, but she's from the Schuzer family. She says her family is quite famous for their magic item crafts. Although she considers herself a failure where magic item crafting is concerned, she says they shouldn't expect anything from her on that front. She says she's an enchanter magician who specializes in enchanting magic. Rayla tells her to simplify it himself. Kanan says it's said that enchantment magic was developed by a person with a unique idiosyncrasy and can only be used by those who are born in that bloodline. She says the bloodline has grown and spread over the years, but on rare occasions, a person is born with the same idiosyncrasy as the progenitor. Miyabi asks Kanan if she's the one, and Kanan replies, yes, but she can't use any magic other than enchanting magic, and can't even make magic items on her own. Michelle says to make a magic item, she needs both the enchanting magic and the actual magic she wants to enchant. so she needs the help of others, but to work with others, she needs to be compatible with them. Kanan says she thought she'd meet people at the academy, so she might be able to run into someone compatible with her, but other students, especially the nobles, wouldn't even listen to her. She says she couldn't find anyone to work with her. Rayla apologizes to her for prying into Kanan's private life. Michelle thanks Kanan for telling them her secret, but Kanan says she can't escape discussing it if she's going to join a team. Rayla is the first to say she doesn't have a problem having Kanan join them, and others say the same. Kanan reminds them that she can't use any magic and is a complete novice with swords, but Michelle tells her that every person has their specialties. Rayla says she will protect her in a fight. Kanan is glad that she's accepted after telling them her secrets. It's their first practical session. The teacher announces to the students that they will now begin the 2-night outdoor camping training. In Elia's group, it's only she and Rayla that know how to set up a camp. The teacher tells them that they won't forbid them from interacting with other teams, but they should do the work for their team by themselves. The head teacher tells their teacher to watch over the students as they take on the challenge, because they are 12-year-old children who have been raised in well-to-do families and must have had servants take care of their everyday needs. Elia's group can set up the camp, and Michelle helps create fire with his magic. Some other teams fight over helping each other set up tents. Later that night, they sleep in the tent which they've created. The next morning, they hear a lady say it hurts, and they come out to ask what happened. A lady explains to them that a team's tent suddenly fell, and it hurt one of the team members, but just a scratch. The same teams that fought yesterday are about to fight again, and one of them wants to use her magic, but Miyabi gets between them to end the fight. Elia uses the healing slimes to heal the injured lady's leg, while Michelle and Rayla help them build back their tent. The team thanks Elia's group, and Michelle tells both teams to settle the fight between them. Both teams apologize to each other, and things come back to normal. Elia tells everyone that to succeed in the training exercise today and the next, they all have to work together as one, so she asks if they can all cooperate. They all agreed with what she had said. First thing, they build a toilet that contains both males and females. Elia teaches Kanan how to build a trap, but she mentions that she saw a friend build it a while ago. They pick edible plants in the forest and cook for themselves. The teachers watch them work together to make things right. The teachers could tell that the students had grown up quite a bit in such a short time. The teachers praise Elia for the good job of providing the opportunity. At night, the students set up a firewood fire and gather around it. From the team so far, the students who think they would be on their own now say they will do better in sharing their time with their friends in the academy. Elia remembers Ryoma's words for her, and she's happy to make friends with them. She writes to Ryoma that she now has people to call friends. She also says the flowers she got from her friend had berries growing alongside them. The healing and scavenger slimes seem to like it, so she asks Ryoma to feed his slimes to see if they like it too. In preparation for the Foundation Festival, Bina draws a layout of the Foundation Festival stall, and she shows the other employees a look at it. They have the slimes erased, and that needs to be corrected. One says they should decorate it too since it's a festival. Callum and Ryoma watch them as they are positive about it. Ryoma tells Callum that he thinks he can count on them. The Semroid troupe is also beginning rehearsals. Ryoma watches Sordo and Miyaya rehearse, and he wonders if they use magic to make their swords shine. Worgen meets Ryoma at that spot to thank him for taking the Tunnel Ant's job. Worgen says he thought for a while that Ryoma was planning on being a full-time merchant. He says he also heard that Ryoma was trying to raise his adventurer rank. Ryoma says yes, he's going to have to take his time with it, but he'd like to. Worgen tells Ryoma that he can't be a full-time adventurer since he's now an employer. He has work and duties, and he understands that. Worgen swifts to the main topic. He asks Ryoma if he can make himself available over the next few days, and Ryoma says yes. Worgen tells him that there's a certain job he'd like his help with. He says the specific task is gathering materials, but they need a space magic user because the amount of materials is huge. He adds that Ryoma will be able to hunt a monster he wants to take on. This makes Ryoma more interested. Worgen says the job calls for gathering Treant material. Ryoma thinks of Treant, and he thinks it will be good practice for his trip to the Great Forest of Schluss, so he gladly agrees to do it. Worgen gathers the other adventurers and Ryoma to give them the details of the job. Ryoma is happy that every member of the party that Worgen assembled is reliable. Lapin says he knows that Treant wood is needed, but 300 Treants minimum is quite a lot. Willana asks Worgen what he's going to do with all the Treants, and Worgen says it's a town renewal project. He explains that Gimel is a mining town, but if they run out of mine, they'd run out of work, and people would move out. To prevent that from happening, Worgen says they want to build a new tourist attraction. Specifically, they want to build a new town for tourists outside the South Gate and place a fighting arena at its center. Celia asks him why Treant wood and not normal wood, and Worgen says they hired a famous architect to design the arena, but the architect is a famous weirdo and wants trained wood all over the arena. Lapin says trained wood isn't bad as a building material, but it's normally used to make wands for magicians. Worgen says it's a weirdo one, but the pay is solid. Worgen tells Asagi to take the lead. He also says he brought in Ryoma as a space magic user, but he wants experience fighting Treant. Mia says everyone will more than eagerly help Ryoma in any way. Worgen tells them to get ready by tomorrow morning and head out to the location. On their way to the location, Ryoma says to himself that the last time he fought in a party was at the abandoned mines when they fought those goblins, so he feels like this is going to be exciting. Asagi tells them that they will reach the target forest by nightfall, and they will set up camp there for the night and start the hunt tomorrow morning. Lapin says he will update them on the things they should watch out for when fighting Treants. He tells them that Treants move their branches around to attack, so they should pay attention to attacks coming from above, especially. He says the Treant's weakness is the human face-like lump on the trunk. He tells them to damage the lump itself or cut off the area below the lump to finish it off. Celia asks if the face-like lump is the way to differentiate regular trees from Treants, and Willana also asks if the lump is on the other side. Lipin says Treants are monsters that possess magic power, so they should detect that to easily identify the Treant. From this, Ryoma says to himself that he has to keep his magic detection up at all times. At night, they set up a tent, and Ryoma gets a table and chairs for them from the Dimension Home. The adventurers are impressed with it, and Ryoma tells them that when he used to live alone, he wanted to make traveling as comfortable as possible. Mia hugs Ryoma so tightly for always being a genius. Ryoma says to himself that he just replicated the camping goods that he wanted back in the other world, but he's glad they like it. Asagi tells them that once they get in the forest, he will work with Mia and the others to fight the Treants. He says Lapin and Ryoma will carry the fallen treats. He also says Lapin will additionally search for and take caution against surrounding Treants, while Ryoma guards Lapin. Once the situation stabilizes, Ryoma will join them in the fight. Asagi tells Ryoma not to be so tense because he seems focused on their way here in the carriage. He tells Ryoma to relax and gain experience at his own pace. They're here for him. Mia tells Ryoma not to overthink it. She's sure that he will get good quickly. Lapin says Ryoma should be able to learn the characteristics of Treant's magic power soon. Ryoma thanks everyone for their contribution. Ryoma says to himself that it's good to have older adventurers around to teach him. He thinks it's a different kind of fun compared to working with the employees to run a good business. The next morning, they head out to the location with the slimes. On their way, Lapin tells Mia that he sees one Treant about 10 meters away. Ryoma could also feel magic power from the same tree, but virtually, it looks like any other tree. As Mia and Mizelia attack the Treant, it also tends to attack them with its branches, but Mia hits its lump, and Mizelia cuts off the Treant from below. Ryoma's slimes drop the fallen Treant in a dimension home created by Lapin. Lapin sees 3 Treants up ahead of them. Asagi says he will handle the center one, while others handle the sides. They make the attack and they fall the 3 Treants to the ground. Lapin sees another one, and he asks Ryoma if he wants to try. Ryoma says yes and handles the Treant. Mia praises Ryoma like she used to. Lapin says it's strange because Treants usually prefer dark areas deep inside the forest. He says they shouldn't be out here in such high numbers. Asagi tells everyone that they're off to a good start, so they should go back to the camp and take a lunch break. As they leave, Ryoma says the forest does feel strange like Lapin has said it. Asagi praises Ryoma for his attack against the Treant earlier, and he tells Ryoma to take on the Treant they miss from the afternoon. Asagi tells him not to push himself too hard. He also tells him that keeping Lapin and himself safe should come first. Mizelia asks Ryoma if his sword is a slime, and Ryoma replies, yes, the scabbard is a metal slime, and the blade is an iron slime, transformed. Asagi says that's how Ryoma solved the issue of the katana being hard to acquire. Lapin is impressed with the way Ryoma continues to expand the boundaries of what a slime can do. Then, they see a slime flying in the air, which Lapin calls a fluffy slime. Lapin says the fluff slime can fly. Ryoma asks Lapin if he can capture it, and Lapin uses his magic to capture it. Ryoma asks him what magic is, and he says it's a form of space magic that transports the target close to the user, and it only works on targets within visual range, and the aim is very difficult, so not many people use it, but it has the unique benefit of capturing without harm. Lipin tells Ryoma to tame since he's the specialist when it comes to slimes. Ryoma thanked him for taming the fluff slimes and did an appraisal for it. The fluff skills are flight, lightweight, and multiplication level 8. Ryoma picks it, and he can tell that the fluff slime is weightless. Lipin says its weight is close to 0. Ryoma says he will think about what he can do with the fluff slime after they finish this job. Mia says Ryoma looks like he's earnestly enjoying talking about slimes. Walana says he appears appropriately childish for his age, but only during that moment. Ryoma says to them that they should get back to hunting now. When they get to the spot they were in the morning, Lipin points to a side that contains normal trees in the morning that now contains treants. Celia asks if that happens a lot, but Lipin says this is much too fast. Lipin says according to his experience, there could be a dangerous evolved species nearby. Asagi says that they can't turn back now, but to keep their guard up and continue hunting. Walana says the individual threats aren't that big of a threat. Then, they get to work. Everyone participates in the fighting of the treants. Mazilia says they're not in danger, but this is endless. Walana gets slashed in the arm by the branch of a treant, and Celia quickly heals her. Ryoma also defends both of them from another attack from other treants. The moment they are short-staffed, Asagi tells Ryoma to stay on the front lines while Lipin provides support. After falling several treants, Lipin confirms that the area is clear of treants. Then, Lipin faces another side, which is almost all treants. Mia says they should continue hunting, but Asagi tells them not to push too hard. There is no shame in retreating. They keep falling more and more. But Ryoma says to himself that everyone will tire out at some point at this rate. Then, Ryoma stabs the ground, and Lipin asks him what he is doing. Ryoma tells him that he's stepping things up, and then he chants, unshrink, then separate. Many metal and iron slimes show up, and he picks the slimes in twos, turns them into short axes, and throws them at the treants. As he throws it, he says to himself that he thought about this method a while back. He says thrown weapons are finished when one runs out, but he will never run out of ammunition this way, and he doesn't have to run around to collect it. Asagi tells the others to let them cover Ryoma's back as he handles the front. They fall as many treants as possible until they encounter the more powerful treant, often called Elder Treant. Ryoma and Lipin could sense the huge amount of magic power in the Elder Treant. Lipin says he's seen a few of the Elder Treants before, but none that are so huge with such a massive amount of magic power. Walana says if they should leave it alone, the Elder Treant might turn the whole forest into treants. Celia says even if they can't defeat it, they need to at least get some information about it. Asagi asks both Lipin and Ryoma about their magic power reserves, and both of them reply that they're fine. Asagi says he didn't expect Ryoma to turn slimes into axes and throw them. Asagi then gives the green light to hunt the Elder Treant. Ryoma notices that the metal slimes are scared, and he quickly returns them to the dimension home. Lipin praises Ryoma's decision not to force the scared monsters to fight. Ryoma asks Lipin what the metal slimes are afraid of. As they move closer to the Elder Treant, some treants move and stay in front of the Elder Treant. Lipin tells everyone not to panic, and he adds that treants can walk, but their movement is slow. Suddenly, branches from the root come out of the ground to attack them. Asagi cuts off the branches, and more spots begin to show in the ground. Ryoma quickly creates pavement to buy some time. Asagi tells Ryoma and Lipin to stay there and provide cover for them, while Celia protects them, and the rest of them will finish off the Elder Treant. Ryoma and Lipin use wind cutter magic to cut off some of the treant's branches. Mazelia and Mia tend to attack the Elder Treant with their short axes, but the Elder Treant uses darkness magic from its mouth to corrode their axes. It attempts to grab them with its branch-like hands, but they move away from the spot. Asagi asks that if it destroys their weapons, how can they attack it? Ryoma says that's why the metal slimes were scared earlier. Ryoma chants unshrink then separate, and his sword transforms into many iron slimes. He picks one of it, turns it into an axe, and then throws it at the Elder Treant. The Elder Treant uses its darkness magic on the axe, but it does not affect the axe. The axe ultimately hits the Elder Treant. Ryoma knew the Elder Treant couldn't rust away pure iron. Ryoma tells everyone to buy him 5 seconds. He turns 2 iron slimes into axes and throws them to Mia and Walana as he runs. Asagi tells everyone to provide cover for Ryoma. Ryoma turns many iron slimes into a big heavy sharp object with a chain and hits the Elder Treant with it. Then he hits it the second time. The Elder Treant falls, and some black market dealer of magic crystals comes out of the root. Ryoma thanks everyone, for he was able to experience a rare battle, and they allowed him to deliver the final blow. Asagi says aloud is one way to put it, but to be more accurate, he trusted that Ryoma could do it, so he decided to provide cover. Ryoma is surprised to hear them say they trust him, and he is glad to hear that as well. At night, Ryoma says to himself that it feels great to be trusted by people that he trusts. He prepares them mountain vegetable tempura. They are happy to have a meal cooked by Ryoma. Walana says they took down so many treants, so their job should be complete. Lapin says who would have known that a black market dealer of magic crystals was buried under that elder treant. Mazilia says she's trying to eat, so Lapin shouldn't remind her. Lapin apologizes and says that those magic crystals were feeding excess magic energy to the elder treant. Asagi tastes miso soup and says it is undoubtedly the taste of home, with tears in his eyes. Ryoma says he was able to buy soy sauce and miso in Lenaf. Asagi thanks Ryoma for the great tip. Celia says she's never seen someone eat while crying. Asagi says he's such a lucky fellow, and everyone laughs. Ryoma then says to himself that he met Mr. Pioro and got some miso, which made Mr. Asagi so happy. He says it feels like a wonderful connection, and he hopes he can make more good connections like these at the founding festival. On their way back home, Ryoma wonders if the preparation for the foundation festival is still going okay. From Ryoma's look, Asagi could tell that he was worried about his shop. Asagi says they can take care of reporting to the guild, so he can go ahead and head home. Ryoma says no, he will go with them. Besides, his dimension home has all the treant wood. Lapin tells Ryoma that he could transfer the wood to his dimension home. Mia tells Ryoma to take Asagi and Lapin up on it. Then, Ryoma thanked both Asagi and Lapin. Asagi tells Ryoma not to mention and reminds him that he shared some miso and soy sauce with him and taught him where to buy them too. They drop Ryoma off at a place, and he thanks everyone again for the good work. Mia promises to visit Ryoma's store, and he tells her that he will be expecting her. Then, on getting there, he's surprised to see that the stall is up already. Mr. Dolce is the first to see and welcomes Ryoma. Beck comes and asks Ryoma if he's impressed, and Mr. Dolce tells Ryoma that it's not his achievement alone. Ryoma sees the big stage almost behind his stall, and he asks Mr. Dolce about it. Mr. Dolce says he is surprised too. He says the Semroid troupe has many workers skilled in that type of labor, and they built the building in just 2 days. Finia says it was like magic, and Ryoma says the traveling entertainers are awesome. Mr. Dolce tells Ryoma that it wasn't just the stage, but they helped them build their stall as well. Fernand shows up and tells Ryoma that it would be nice to enjoy his delicious cooking and watching their show. Fernand says it will undoubtedly be a wonderful experience for those who visit them, so obviously it makes sense for them to help. Fernand says only the finishing remains. They shall achieve beauty fit for the wonderful festival. Callum, who is busy inside, comes out to check what is going on, and he sees his manager, Ryoma. Ryoma tells Callum that he is so surprised that things are moving along so quickly. Callum says there's something he wants to discuss with him concerning that. Leeling and others explain that while Mr. Dolce and the others were building the stall itself, they were trying to figure out the menu, so they decided on the food pretty quickly, but they were still thinking about the drinks. Ryoma asks Callum to explain, and he says they have Guimar cuisine and unique dishes based on Dante seeds and Samisa pastries for food, but for drinks, they only have ordinary things like water and juices. Callum says Li Ling suggested that there should be something unique in the shop as well. Li Ling apologizes and says it is almost all settled, but she mixes it up unnecessarily. Callum tells her not to feel like that. Her opinion is very valuable. Selma then says they were thinking they could add the Dante tea Ryoma sometimes drinks to the menu. Ryoma tells them that the issue of Dante's tea is completely personal. Ryoma says it's hard to make enough to offer at a stall with so little time left. Selma says it's rare, so she thought it would be a good fit. Ryoma wonders how they'd get a tea that they don't see here. Ryoma then prepares barley tea from the grains from Miss Jane's hometown earlier. Fina is surprised to hear that tea can be made from grains, so she asks how, and Ryoma explains that the grains are roasted and boiled to make the tea. He says it has healthy properties similar to Dante tea, and is also great for hot summers. He tells them to give it a try. They drink it, and Li Ling says she's never had tea like this before. Fina says it's so savory, even though it's tea. Selma says it should fit the food well, served cold. Ryoma says they have the ingredients already, so it's not hard to make it. Ryoma asks them if they should add it to the menu, and everyone's response is positive. Ryoma says preparation is in its final stages. The only work remaining is polish and production, so he tells everyone to let them do their best. Ryoma joins his employees in the polishing of the stall. He is everywhere during the preparation. Pernance shows Ryoma an ice sculpture he placed on the stage. He says he has been told that Ryoma is the sculptor. Pernance asks Ryoma if he could lend his skills, and Ryoma replies, yes. Then, Mr. Surge comes to the scene to tell them that there's something he'd like the both of them to see. He shows them the music box to see at the festival, and he tells them that the delivery from Mr. Denim just arrived. Pernance is happy to see that their troupe's music is in the music box. Ryoma notices that somebody has been watching them, so he loses conversation with Pernance and Mr. Surge while he looks behind to see who's been watching them. Pernance calls back Ryoma's attention. Ryoma apologizes and asks Mr. Surge if they could take a listen. Mr. Surge plays the music box. Then, the final preparation also continues. The Semroid troops also engage themselves in lots of rehearsals. The stage is all set, and it seems to be displayed glamorously. Brennan says they must redouble their efforts. He tells his troop members that they must display the best performance of their careers. Ryoma says he's glad they worked hard on this. Mr. Surge says he can't wait to have the festival start in 2 days. Ryoma feels so tired for a moment that he yawns, but he quickly refocuses. He apologizes for losing focus for a moment. Callum tells him that it's natural. Callum says hunting treants, preparing for the festival, and Ryoma's been very busy for a while now. Then, he begs Ryoma to take the day off tomorrow and leave the rest to them. Ryoma asks why just him, and he says everyone has been busy too. Callum makes Ryoma understand that they need his help on the day of the festival, so he should rest tomorrow to recoup his energy. Ryoma agrees to take the day off tomorrow. Then, Fina calls everyone to come and have dinner. The next day at the mines, Ryoma plays around the fluff slime to see its multiplication skill. Then, a huge monster flies above him, and he wonders what creature is it. All of a sudden, he remembers that it's from the Dragoons Guild in Lenaf. When he looks closely, he sees Mr. Pioro and one other guy on the Dragoon. Then, he quickly runs after the creature, so as not to lose track of where it is headed. He finally gets to where the Dragoon and he calls me, Pioro. Mr. Pioro tells him that it's been a while. Mr. Pioro asks him what he's doing here, or is he taking a walk? Ryoma tells him that he saw a monster from the Dragoons Guild, and Mr. Pioro riding it. Mr. Pioro commends Ryoma for his good eyesight. Mr. Pioro asks about Ryoma's shop, and he says Carla told him that Ryoma is doing a stall for the Foundation Festival. Ryoma tells him that they finished setting the stall up yesterday, but he's taking the day off today. Ryoma then asks Mr. Pioro why he is here, and he replies that he got a rush order, which they wanted delivered today. Mr. Pioro says it could be something to do with the festival. Mr. Pioro says they order some pretty rare stuff, and he gets curious about what they're using it for. He says he might attend the festival, so he thought he might tag along. Asagi comes to the scene with a carriage and calls Ryoma. Mr. Pioro asks if they know each other, and Ryoma tells him that Asagi is a senior adventurer, and they just did a job together. Asagi says it's miso, soy sauce, and white rice. He says food from Dragonute Village is of good quality, so he ordered them right away. Mr. Pioro could tell that it was Ryoma who did an advertisement for him. Ryoma says he did, but he didn't expect Asagi to order so suddenly. Ryoma asks Asagi if he's used up the share he gave him already, and he replies that something happened. Asagi says he'd love to explain, but he must return quickly. Asagi packs the stuff into the carriage, and he tells them to follow him. On getting to the adventurer's apartment, Mia holds Ryoma like she used to do. Asagi tells Mia to give Ryoma a break because he's confused. Mia asks what Ryoma is doing here, and who the other gentleman is. Asagi introduces Mr. Pioro to Mia as the one who delivered the food from Lenaf. Ryoma tells Mia that he just happened to be there when Asagi received the package. Ryoma notices Mia's stall, and Asagi adds that he and Mia are going to run a stall at the Founding Festival. Mia tells Asagi to make that crunchy thing Ryoma made after they beat the trance. She explains that the one that he cries over. Asagi asks him why she chose to cook for him and not Ryoma. Mia says he went to see Ryoma, but he seemed so busy preparing for the festival, so she felt bad to bother him. Asagi prepares it, but with some fried regular vegetables because he doesn't have any mountain vegetables on hand. Asagi also prepares some white rice and miso soup. When Mia eats it, Asagi asks how it is, and Mia shouts delicious. Mia says the mountain veggies from the other day were awesome, but the regular veggies look like it too. Mia tells Asagi that the world must know about this delicious thing, so they have to sell it at the Foundation Festival. Asagi says that's how it all went. Mia says if they sell vegetable tempura, it will make everyone happy, and as members of this town, they will fire up this festival. Asagi decides to prepare the same tempura using regular vegetables for Mr. Pioro and Ryoma. Both of them like it, and they express their opinion about the good. Asagi says after decided to sell these at the festival, he practiced many times, and his craft has improved. Ryoma says this will sell, and he looks forward to their tempura stand. Asagi says they are not just selling tempura, but they plan to sell rice and miso soup as well. Mia says tempura is more delicious with rice and miso soup. Asagi says people eat while they walk, so they started this as a way to allow the people of this town to enjoy something delicious, but compromising on the taste to match other expectations does not fit his style. Ryoma prepares tenmusu, but he packages it differently so that they can eat and walk. Asagi says he didn't think of putting anything inside a rice ball other than pickled plums. Mia likes it, and Asagi thanks Ryoma, but Ryoma tells him to let them make this a great festival. Mia waves at them as they leave, and she says that she'll make sure to visit Ryoma's stall at the festival too. Mr. Pioro talks about the nice tenmusu prepared by Ryoma. He asks Ryoma if he could sell it at his store too, and Ryoma replies, yes, fried meats and fish go well in it as well. Mr. Pioro says he will give it a try once he gets back to Lenape. Mr. Pioro departs for the moment and tells Ryoma that he will stop by his place and say hi tomorrow. Ryoma tells him that they have some interesting dishes ready, so he should come by. Kofu shows Taken how well Ryoma is doing in this world, and Taken confirms it himself. Fernobalia also shows up with them to watch Ryoma. Kofu says to Fernobalia that it's a rare sight seeing him outside of his realm. Fernobalia says there might be a chance that the slime research Ryoma is doing could lead to good effects on the magical properties of this world. Fernobalia asks Kofu if his reason for being upbeat is also Ryoma, and Kofu replies yes. Seeing a person they invited to this world living so happily, of course, makes him happy. Ryoma writes to Elia that the festival is finally starting. In the morning, Ryoma walks around Gimul, and he can tell that the Foundation Festival is starting. He checks on Asagi and Mia to ask them how it is going. Mia and Asagi tell him that they are ready to offer their stuff to many people for their enjoyment. He smiles and tells them that he'll stop by next time. As Ryoma goes to walk around, he hears the tune, and he wonders where it's coming from. Everyone at the marketplace claps for Pranance, and he tells them that the tune that just heard him play is the piece the Semroid troupe will be performing on stage tonight. He says the very same tune can be played on this music box magic item, and Pranance's maids open the music box and play it. Ryoma meets Mr. Surge first, and Mr. Surge tells him the music box seems to be gaining popularity. Ryoma says he has to thank the Semroid troupe for their advertisement. Mr. Surge tells Ryoma that Dinome's workshop at Caliban is hard at work mass-producing them, but they plan to widen the sales network soon. Mr. Surge and Ryoma see a mother and a kid smiling when they hear the tune from the music box. Ryoma checks his stall, and he meets a lot of people in the queue. He is surprised, so he helps his employees in passing of ordered food. Then, he called Mr. Dolce to help manage the lines. Li Ling comes out of the order room to tell Ryoma to ask Miss Selma for more stir-fry, and they're also running out of tea. Ryoma informs Selma about the stir-fry, and Selma tells him that she thought it would run now, but she's already working on it. He also asks Fina if she could make more grain tea. Fina uses a cooking tool based on transformed slime to cut vegetables, and it quite makes work easier. Worgen comes to visit Ryoma at his shop, and he meets Beck's group. Worgen says they all seem busy, and Beck says they got hired, so they'll do their best. Ryoma says they're helping out a lot. Ryoma tells Worgen that Beck's group has been working for him since the early preparations. Ryoma remembers that Beck's group has been working tirelessly, but they never had the time to enjoy the festival. He asks Worgen if he could take Beck and the other kids out to see the festival, and Worgen agrees to help out. Beck shouts at Ryoma to stop it. They're so busy that they can't just take off and go play. Miss Carla and others in the second shop arrive at the scene and say they will take care of the work. Carla says she heard from Callum, so they're here to help. Carla tells Ryoma that the second shop in Lenape is being handled by the new hires. She says they are already well accustomed to the job, so there's nothing to worry about. Ryoma's glad that she came back, and now they can get everyone to take turns taking breaks. With everyone here, Carla tells Ryoma to rest to enjoy his first Foundation Festival. Ryoma thanks her, but there are just a few more things to take care of first, especially Pranance. Ryoma visits Pranance in the ice statue, so he asks Pranance if he is alright, because this place is very cold because of the barrier and the ice magic. Pranance tells him that the beauty of the wonderful statue makes the cold completely unnoticeable. Pranance thanks Ryoma, and he performs his very best to match the magnificence of the statue. After that, Carla tells Ryoma to take a break now, and immediately, Mr. Surge and Mr. Pioro show up to talk with Ryoma. Ryoma serves both Mr. Surge and Mr. Pioro grain tea, and they tell him that the grain tea is very popular. It's causing quite a stir. They ask Ryoma where he gets the grains from, and he replies that it's from the hometown of some of his employees who couldn't sell them and have many left over. They tell Ryoma that they'd like to turn the grains into grain tea and make it into a proper business. Ryoma informs his employees from whose town the grains were brought. Ryoma tells them that the tea is selling very well, and with Mr. Surge and Mr. Pioro's help, it should be more than adequate for a successful business. On hearing this, Fina is glad and says her people back home would love to hear that, and they all thank Ryoma. Ryoma says they will discuss this in detail later. Ryoma says to himself that once they start making profits, their village won't need to send off their young people to distant towns to find work. Carla shows up again to tell Ryoma that it's time to finally take his break. Asagi also tells Ryoma that Carla is right, he needs to enjoy his festival. Ryoma says to himself that he has to practice what he preached to Beck and the others. Mia prepares tenmusu and miso soup. Ryoma tastes it, and he likes it. Asagi says he made many more improvements after the last time Ryoma tried it. Mia says it's becoming very popular. Ryoma says it's great, and he will advertise it to his employees as well. Then, they saw a child, and Ryoma could tell that he was a lost child. They sit the boy down and ask him where his mom is, but the boy nods to say no. Ryoma asks where he lives, but he nods again. Asagi says the boy must be a visitor from another town. Ryoma suggests they take the boy to the guards because his mother might be looking for him too. The boy quickly moves closer to Ryoma and hugs him, and Ryoma tells him to let go, find his mother. On their way, Ryoma introduces himself to the boy Ryoma Takebayashi, and the boy introduces himself as Theo. Ryoma asks Theo if he should come with his mom. Ryoma asks Theo if this is his forest festival, and the boy says yes. Ryoma says it's his first time too. Ryoma explains to Theo that he was somewhere else before, somewhere very far, Earth. Ryoma explains his whole life before and after he died, till he landed in Gimul. He also talks about his business, but he says he believes he's come pretty far. Glycella meets them on the way and asks if the boy is lost, and Ryoma tells her that he is taking Theo to the guard's office. Every person who passes and sees Ryoma waves at him, and Glycella says Ryoma has established himself as a citizen of this town. Glycella then asks him about his life here compared to his life in the forest. Ryoma says to himself that he can't say which is better. Glyssa could tell on Ryoma's face that life here was better, and Ryoma agreed. Later that day, Ryoma finally gets Theo to his mother through Gimul's guards. The Foundation Festival finally begins, and Prenance opens his speech by saying the beast that tormented the people lies vanquished before him, and from today on, it will live among them and follow a new path. Then, he says they should rejoice on this day and celebrate. Then, Sordo and Miaya show up on stage to show their intellectual dancing sword skills, and the audience cheers them up. After the festival, Ryoma prepares fried noodles, and Selma seems interested in cooking like that. Ryoma explains how he goes about it, and Selma says she will try cooking it for lunch one day. Ryoma says the noodles should be enough for the after party. A few seconds later, Carla informs Ryoma that the Selmoid troupe is not there yet. Ryoma replies that maybe they're having trouble cleaning up their stage, and then he says he will go check. Ryoma finds his way to the stage to invite the Selmoid troupe for the after party, which is starting soon, but he meets them wrapping up a statue, so he asks them what it is, and Mia replies that it's a statue of Manoiloa. Ryoma remembers the name from one of the myths, gods. Ryoma says he hasn't met them yet, but it's the name of a god, right up there with Gain and the others. Fortunately, Ryoma says it's the god of wind, and Prenance says yes, a great god that watches over them through the winds that travel this world. Prenance adds that he's also a god of travel and arts. However, traveling artists often worship Manuailoa. Miaya says they're just dressing up the statue. She adds that when they experience something memorable, they buy a piece of cloth in that town. She says the cloth wrapping the statue is their expression of thanks to the god for gifting them with a great meeting. Sordo tells Ryoma that he can call it a tradition among them traveling entertainers. Well, they accepted his invitation to attend the after-party. At the after-party, Ryoma thanks everyone for their handwork at the Foundation Festival, and they all enjoy their moment. Beck meets with Ryoma to tell him that the festival was super fun. Everyone was able to buy stuff from the pay we got for working here, and that is all thanks to Ryoma. Then, he asks Ryoma if he gets to enjoy the festival. Ryoma looks at Carla, and then says, yes. After helping a lost boy find his mom, he has a look around. Ryoma faces Carla and thanks her for coming down to Gimul from Lenaf, and Carla says she also enjoyed her first Foundation Festival. It felt fresh. Carla looks at everyone and says she hasn't been gone from this town for too long yet, but she does feel somewhat nostalgic. Miaya asks Ryoma if he'd like to perform with them to wrap up the night, and everyone shouts they're looking forward to it. Carla wishes Ryoma good luck, and he says he'll enjoy this. Ryoma joins Sordo and Mia in a stage dancing performance with their sword. After a while, Ryoma brings out his violin from his dimension home, and he plays it for the audience to hear as they applaud him. Ryoma says he will never forget this day. Ryoma visits Mr. Surge the next morning, and Mr. Surge praises him for his wonderful sword dancing and music. Ryoma thanks him, but he has a request. He asks Mr. Surge to create 2 special music boxes. He sends one of the music boxes to Aaliyah with a letter. In the letter, he says he's glad that he came to Gimul. He says he was able to find a place where he can call home. He says he will continue to do his best to serve this community. After reading the letter, Aaliyah says she will do her best and improve herself until the day she sees Ryoma again. Then, Miyabi comes to call Aaliyah to let them go. The next day, everyone greets Ryoma as he heads to his shop. When he gets to his shop, he looks up and says to himself that he hopes that today turns out well. He opens the door and greets his employees good morning, and they all greet him good morning too.